Chapter 821. An immortal herb worth 10 million divine grade spirit stones might not be much in the world of immortals, but to these smugglers from the human world, it was undoubtedly an unbelievable amount of wealth. It was like a group of poor people who usually only had cornbread to eat, and they were suddenly served a table full of Manchu Han imperial feast. The immortal herb was carefully stored away. Everyone was nervous, excited, and agitated, and they began to act crazily. Relying on their numbers, they would snatch it from anyone they met. After a few rounds of work, under everyone's nervous cooperation, they suddenly realized something strange. After a few rounds of work, the fights were obviously thrilling and intense, and even scared everyone out of their wits. But the strange thing was, no one was injured. It was like seeing a ghost. Most of the 300 people were in the middle stage of the soul-forming stage, and the opponents they met were mostly in the late stage. According to the understanding of the cultivation world, a late-stage soul-forming stage should be able to defeat many middle-stage soul-forming stage cultivators. But the late-stage soul-forming stage cultivators here gave everyone a strange feeling. They looked like tigers, and their momentum and methods were scary enough, but when they really fought, they gave off the feeling of a sick cat. It was really a waste of their cultivation. Lu Yanqing was most disgusted by everyone's fighting and killing, but she also knew that she might be able to make decisions for others, but not for Yu Qianqiu. In the beginning, when people came to hand over the things they stole, she would always advise everyone stop fighting and killing. But now that everyone had tasted the sweetness and their confidence was at its peak, how could they give up so easily? But it was not good to reject her, so someone immediately brought up Yu Qianqiu, saying, "We have no choice. I don't want to fight and kill either. But we can't disobey the torture envoy. Why don't you tell the torture envoy, as long as he says something, we will stop immediately." Lu Yanqing was speechless. How could she persuade Yu Qianqiu? That guy had never taken her, the world's most beautiful woman, seriously. Everyone was a wily old fox, and when they saw that bringing up Yu Qianqiu was useful, they all followed suit, making Lu Yanqing speechless. Lu Yanqing had no choice but to pretend that she did not hear or see anything. She focused all her energy on the Jade archive and the immortal herbs that everyone had sent over. After a massacre, the surroundings were a mess. Yunantan, who was wearing a white velvet robe, glanced at the corpses on the ground gracefully and said to himself with a mocking expression, "The cultivators of the immortal realm are just so." His gaze fell on a severed hand at his feet. He opened his palm and immediately grabbed the severed hand. Chapter 830. He slowly pulled off a storage bracelet from his severed hand. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong. Then he took out a piece of white silk cloth and had their own few hot face full of. The only problem left, while watching everyone pay the commission, Du Feng smiled. He wiped the storage bracelet. Don't blame me. Mu Tianjiao had said only after one storage bracelet of the divine shiny under the curious gazes, including Mu Tianjiao. The white handkerchief total and raised his right hand and left hand side, whispered, "1/10 of the storage bracelet." Inch of his wrist, making for an equivalent contract. 2 billion. As for those who already looked at Yinqing, they naturally had each generation of the woman stronger. 100 million divine. Looks like the immortal world bracelets on his welcoming frown. It was hard to believe to the group. We agreed that we would hand over the item. At the same time, we naturally were a little apprehensive. Why are you wearing take advantage of this? 4 links chamber. He waved at Dukai said, "Brother, disapprovingly. This was not a small. Said I wasn't juniors matters. However, I just want to try them on. That's what I was thinking. You don't say. Dukai things from the immortal calculating are flashed away. She put ugly whispered back a few words. Everyone knows my bracelet. After getting his has a lot of space. He walked over. The most important thing is that it's beautiful. Whether everyone is willing, it's no different from an immortal herbs. I like. I'll go back if I can give one to each of my. If there's anything sold, you can find it at Skyward Palace's shop. The 4 links chamber Xian handed the storage couch to him with a look. If there's everyone exchanged, let's not be estranged. This is what we collect. Master nodded. Send it over. Indifferently saying, "This disciple, I'm not a disciple. Fluffy. The fact that I'm able to get so many old loves this
He
time.
chuckled.
Nongju, Shui Mingqing to the mythical
What do you
fire
mean
palace
by
a few days.
Why do you want to
Spiritual
in the future?
cultivation
I'm
set.
not
You can
your
invite
I don't
more
want the small
friends.
chick.
I can go by
for
the
myself.
items are sold.
Our
Tracy
Skyward
Payne
Palace
flashed
was
a million
across
divine
our
Shu
great
Xian's face.
face.
The four of them saluted
under
his
his
malicious
master
gaze and said,
many thanks.
Everyone's
He
heart
killed
skipped
three of
Master,
my
you looked
sworn
around
immediately.
with a smug
Someone
expression
said
meekly. Then turned
You
into a
Nancy
not
was
greedy
dying.
either.
Then he remembered that
Nongju
Mingqing
killed
was
100
cupped his
million
hands
others
towards
towards
him,
spirit stones.
He shook his head
He
slightly.
was especially
Mu
calm,
looked
meek,
collected
and
as he
looked.
looked
Let me
at
give you a
Wu
piece and
Qianqian's
smiled at that
The two of
person.
them
Bygones
quickly
exchanged
exchanged
a few words through voice
the most important
transmission
out
thing
and
before
immortal
together
herb
Mingqing
equal
not to
market
have
value.
internal
After
strife.
greeting
Handed
each
it
other,
think about how
the
many
three
parties
after
both
both
parties
parties
returned to
returned
Jade
to
Archive
shop.
That person
looking at the empty
immediately
shop,
ran away. Unfortunately, they can't get someone taking the opportunity in completing the transaction. Then the others sorted out the things they had.
He said, I want to have
internal
internal
strife.
strife.
Mu Tianjiao,
I just don't want to see him
make
again.
things
According to the
difficult.
previous
Shu
agreement,
carried the
they had to
split
split
the
the
loot
said
equally.
in the blink of an eye.
Are you going or
Tianjiao
not?
was
Group
at it.
dispersed.
Unable to
At this
time,
time,
only
you
women
should act like a woman. Silent Tao.
You look like
Zhong,
Tiger's
less
Chamber
among
of
the
Commerce.
people
No wonder
shares
Nongju
about 20
doesn't
billion
like
divine.
Mu
grades.
Tianjiao
What did you say? Looked at Tao
Shu
Zhong.
Xiang
Lord
smiled
Man
crazily.
Tianlong.
In the ruins
Tian
of
snatched
God.
the storage
They
house.
didn't expect
Had
him
stood up
four
several
linked
times
chamber
for
commerce
to join hands.
When he came to the center of the
trial
formation,
and
if not for
immediately
cultivation,
found
this scene would have been
Nongju,
scattered
divine
before you
Orient.
went.
They didn't
expect
I really have to
shoot
thank you
so
this
many
time.
treasures.
Otherwise, from the beginning
I'm
to the
afraid
end, I wouldn't have been able to
Bing was
return.
looking at his daughter
Unexpectedly,
with a
after a long time. If you have any requests,
he saw Nongju
please tell
staring
me,
at the front
as long
with
as
a
it's within my
serious
ability.
expression.
I'll do
When
my
Mon
best to
Feng
satisfy
and Hu
them.
Changsho
also noticed the abnormality. Tao
When
Zhong
Mon Feng
pondered
asked,
for a moment before
Nongju,
slowly
what's
saying,
wrong with you?
I wish
Nongju
to end
took
my
out a
life
piece of
as a
jade
loose
and
frowned
frowned
deeply.
I wonder if I
She
can
said,
join your four-linked
when
chamber
Yu
of
Qianqiao
commerce.
left,
Everyone
we
in the
each
shop was
injected a
stunned at the
strand
same
of divine sense
After Mu,
into a piece of
Tianjiao
jade
recovered from her
exchange
surprise.
information. She looked
The
at her
main
father.
reason was that he was
Mu Bing
afraid
recovered
that
and
we
nodded
couldn't
with a smile.
find him when we
If
were
you
in
don't
trouble.
mind my four-linked
But just
chamber
now I
of commerce
sense that my
being down
divine
and out,
sense have been
I
released
welcome
from
you to
Jade.
join us.
You should have crushed
Tao
the Jade.
Zhong
What does Yu
immediately
Qianqiao
smiled
want to tell us?
and cupped his hands.
Hu Changsho
Thank you for taking me in,
said,
President.
Could it be that he
From today
encountered some
onwards,
danger
I,
or found
Tao
some
Zhong,
precious treasure?
will wholeheartedly
Yu
serve the
Nantian was
four-linked
stunned
chamber
and said,
of commerce. It's okay to
when the
find a
four-linked
precious
chamber of
treasure,
commerce was
but
in
please
dire
don't let
straits.
anything
There was
happen
still
to him.
someone willing
If
to
something
join
happens
them.
to him,
Mu
no matter
Bing
how many
and the
things
other
we
two
grab,
immediately
it's
felt
useless.
their spirit.
We can't get
rise.
out and we can't go back.
Tianlong,
Are we going to be
even walked
trapped
over
in the
and
divine
patted
ruin
Tao
realm?
Zhong's shoulder?
Jinx, saying excited.
What can happen to that
well
guy
done.
with his ability?
We'll be a family
Although
from now
Nongju
on.
said so,
Watching the
she was
lively
actually
atmosphere
worried
in
and
her
shocked.
heart. She looked around,
smiled,
and said
faintly,
solemnly,
"This matter has
no
come
matter
to an
what,
end.
since
I should
he
be able to
crushed
get the
Jade,
100
it
millions
means
that he
divine
is summoning
great
us.
spirit stones
Immediately
commissioned in a
gather
few days'
everyone,
time, and
this one will
quickly
take his
follow me.
leave first."
Several people
He cupped
already
his fist
felt
at
that
them
something
and
was
strode
wrong.
out of the shop.
They did not dare
Yu
to
Qianqiao,
hesitate.
Mu
and
Tianjiao
quickly
stopped him.
gathered people.
Under the astonished
After a
gazes
while,
of the others,
more than
she
300
walked to
people
gathered
Qianqiao's side
under the
and bit her
leadership
lip.
of Nongju.
I want to take up
They
some of your
flew
time.
all the
There's
way
something I
and
want to discuss with
scrupulously.
you.
The
What is
sudden
it?
gathering
Yu
of
Qianqiao
so
stood
many
at the
people
door
across
and
the sky
asked suspiciously.
scared the small
Mu
teams
Tianjiao
of various
turned to
sects
look at her
below.
father.
Fortunately,
Then gestured outside.
these people did not
Can we
have
find a
any
quiet
intention
place to
to
talk?
attack them. What the hell
After
is
the
this girl
disciples
doing?
of various
Yu
sects watched
Qianqiao
these people
paused
go
for a
far
second,
away.
then
They all
shrugged
suspected that
nonchalantly.
something big
Do
had
as you
happened
wish.
ahead.
Or some
Mu
precious
Tianjiao
treasure had
leaped
appeared.
into the air.
Otherwise,
and Yu
it would be
Qianqiao
impossible
followed
for
closely
so many
behind her.
sects to gather
The two of them
together
quickly
and act
flew over
together.
the spacious
These
plaza
people's
filled
clothes
with
look
rows of
varied.
shops.
Why do I
and
feel that
entered
they don't
deep
look
into the
like the
boundless
disciples of the
undulating
celestial
stone
one
sex?
Mu
The crowd
Tianjiao
below
only
thought
landed
as they
on a
watched
towering
them fly
stone
away.
mountain.
The
where she
person
could
beside
no
him
longer
laughed
see the
and
prosperity
said,
behind
"There are no
her
less
and
than
the desolation in front
10,000
of her.
sects."
Yu
Chambers
Qianqiao
of commerce
paused
and
in
clans
midair,
in the celestial
then landed
world.
on the stone
Can you
hill
recognize
with a
all of
puzzled
them?
expression. The former
The petite
frowned
Mu
and said,
Tianjiao
"These
stood
people
silently
don't
with her
have a
back
uniform
facing him.
uniform. Her
Don't
indigo
tell me that
dress
they're made up of
fluttering in the
people from
wind.
hundreds of
Her
sections.
silky hair
The
fluttering
latter
in the
rubbed
wind.
his chin and
Yu
pondered.
Qianqiao's vigilant
You don't
gaze
say.
swept over the
It
Rocky
really mountains
possible.
around him.
Wondering
I know
why
why
this
this
woman
woman
have
have
interacted
interacted
with
with
such a
him
remote
once.
place.
He is a
If he
disciple
was
of the
molested,
Chaotian Palace.
no one would hear his
To him,
name
even if he screamed himself hoarse. Mythical Fire
Chi-Chi,
Palace, Spirit
Mu
Cultivation
Qianjiao,
Sect,
who had turned
and
around,
Four Links
could not
Chamber
help
Commerce
but
were
giggle
surrounded.
when she saw him
Dufone
like
looked
that.
around
Why are you so
and
cautious?
shouted in a deep voice.
With your ability,
what benefits did
are
the
you afraid
Heartless
of me?
Palace give you?
Yu Qian
You actually
Shou
helped them to
withdrew
deal
his
with
thoughts,
us.
coughed,
We are all
and
famous
said,
sects.
Miss Mu,
There's no need to be so
what
extreme,
exactly do you want
right?
to talk about?
Why
Are
do
you
you have to come
afraid
here
of
to talk?
causing a war between
I can see that you are
sects?
not someone who lacks
Guan
money.
Tianli said
Mu
indifferently.
Tianjiao stared at him
Du
and
Feng,
asked, You think
why do you want to
too
help me?
highly of yourself? Do you think that the mythical Fire Palace and the
Yu
Spirit
Qianqiao was
Cultivation
startled
Sect will
and did
start
not
a
know
war
whether to
with
laugh
the
or
various
cry?
sects for the two of you?
I don't lack money.
Hui
Are you
Yunlong
kidding me?
flew into a
I am
rage.
simply too
Guan
sure of money.
Tianli, if
Don't
not
go
for money,
overboard.
Why
Who
would
doesn't
I
know
enter
that
the
your
divine
heartless
ruin
palace's people
Mu
are
Tianjiao
plundering
smiled
and
and shook
slaughtering
her head,
disciples of
saying,
other sects in the
"Answer me
ruins of God?
first.
Could it be
Why
that
are
you
you
are
helping
allowed
me?"
to kill
Yu
others
Qianqiu was
and others are
speechless as he
not
pointed
allowed to
around
kill
and
your
said,
heartless palace's
"Miss Mu,
disciples?
don't tell me
Guan
you dragged me
Tianli snorted,
here just to ask
I didn't
this.
say that others
Don't
are
change the
not
subject.
allowed to kill
Answer me.
my heartless
Mu
palace's
Tianjiao
disciples.
press.
As long as they have
touched
the
his
ability,
forehead
they
and
can
said
come and take
weakly,
revenge
"All
on my
right.
heartless palace.
First, I did it for money.
Could it be that they
Second,
don't have the ability
although I'm
to
a
take
kind-hearted
revenge,
person,
I did not
they
deliberately
don't allow
help you.
my heartless
I just went with the
palace to
flow.
take revenge?
Mu Tianjiao
You guys
was
killed
silent.
all the
After a
disciples
long
that
time,
entered the ruins
she
of God.
stared at him with
What will they
sparkling
use
eyes
to take revenge
and
on
bit
you?
her lip.
Hui Yun
Then
Long
what do you
roared.
think of me?
Guan
Yu
Tianli shook
Qianqiu's
his head
mouth opened
slightly.
slightly. That's because
stunned
they
on
don't
spot.
have the ability.
Finally, he
Don't
realized
tell me you want to
something.
blame it on my
The
heartless
corner of his
palace.
mouth twitched.
You. And he
Hui
said with
Yunlong
a
was
bitter
so
smile,
angry that he
Miss
was
Mu,
speechless.
I
The
think
eyes
you
of
may
Yu
have
Qianqiu,
misunderstood.
who was
The reason why I
constantly
help
paying
you is
attention
not
to the rear,
because I have any
lit up.
thoughts about you.
He saw two
to be
figures
honest,
descend
I just
from the top of a
admire you
mountain
for being
not
so
far away.
strong as a woman.
Nong
So
Zhu
I help
and
you.
Hu Changshu
There is
had already
absolutely
arrived
no
first.
other intention.
Actually,
Mu
this place was
Tianjiao's
not
expression
far from where the
changed
hundreds
slightly,
of people were,
and she said with
it was only a
forced
few
smile,
dozen
so
kilometers
I was
away.
thinking too much.
With their cultivation,
it seems that my
it would not
charm
take
is
long
not
for them
enough to
to
rush
attract
over
you.
at full speed.
You can't say it like
Yu
that.
Qianqiu looked
Yu
around at
Qianqiu
the
spread
crowd
his
that had
hands
gathered to
and
watch the
frankly
show,
said,
and
"To be honest,
immediately secretly
you are
sent
very
a
charming.
sound transmission.
I am
to the
very
two of them.
willing to take you
after
to
making
bed
some
and
arrangements.
molest you."
Nong
But I
Zhu
believe
quickly
you won't
flew
be
back,
willing to abandon
leaving
you
Hu Changshu
afterwards.
to watch.
I also don't want to
Yu
do such a
Qianqiu,
thing to a
who
woman
had been
like
silent
you.
all this while
These
walked
words
out
were
from between the
indeed
two of them
frank,
and shouted
a
at
bit
Guan
too
Tianli,
frank,
causing a
Guan,
trace of
"Don't
embarrassment
bully
to
others just
flash
because you
across
have
Mu
more people.
Tianjiao's face.
I am the one who
However,
killed the people of
she
your
was
heartless
also a
palace.
decisive person.
It has nothing
She
to do
forced
with
herself
them.
to calm
If
down.
you have
and
the
said,
ability,
let's
then
get back
come
to the
me
main
alone.
topic.
Whether it's
Is there a
one-on-one
possibility
or all
that I
at
can
once,
keep you
I will
in our
accept it.
four links chamber of
Guan
commerce?
Tianli said indifferently.
Yu
I heard that your
Qianqiu was
methods are
speechless.
extraordinary.
Mu Tianjiao
I don't dare to take that
immediately
risk.
waved her hand.
It's safer to
and
bully
explained,
others with numbers.
Don't misunderstand.
As he spoke,
It's not a
he looked
matter
at the
between
two
a man
sides
and
and
a
said,
woman. I purely hope
"Everyone,
that you can join our
what are you
four
waiting
links chamber
for?
of commerce.
Let's make our move."
Yu Qianqiu
At this
looked at her
moment,
suspiciously
someone
and
shouted from
asked,
afar,
"Why do you want me
"Bully
to join
others
the
with
four
numbers?
links chamber of commerce?"
Good.
This is
Because
my
our
favorite
four
thing.
links
Let
chamber
us
of
join the
commerce
fun.
is an urgent
Everyone
need
looked
of
in the
talents
direction of the voice
to help us quickly
only to
get
see
out
a
of our
group
predicament.
of densely
I believe that
packed
you are one of the
figures
people we need
flying over from
Mu
behind the mountain.
Tianjiao
Said sincerely. Now that they were talking
Chapter
about serious
822.
matters,
Hundreds of
Yu Qianqiu
silhouettes
immediately
scattered
became
in the sky.
impolite. Surrounding
He raised
Yu
his eyebrows
Qianqiu's
and
group
said,
of more
"You
than
think
100
too
people.
highly of me.
Everything
What do
happened
you think the
so
four links
suddenly
chamber of commerce
that the
has
surroundings
that can attract
fell
me to join?"
silent in an instant.
Mu Tianjiao bit her
Everyone
lip
looked at the
and
group
said,
of people who had
"You can
appeared
state
out
the
of thin
conditions you
air
want,
and discovered
and then
that
we'll see
each
if
of
we
them
can
had an
satisfy you.
unruly
I don't need to
and
state any
unruly
conditions."
aura. Their clothes were all different, and it was
Yu
impossible to tell
Qianqiu
which
waved his
sect they were
hand
from.
and said with a
Nong
smile,
Zhu stood on a small
"Because I
hill
don't have
and
the
looked
ability
down.
you speak
She
of.
secretly
I just want to be a
transmitted her
free
voice
lose
to
cultivator.
Yu Qianqiu.
Miss Mu,
Did it feel
did you call
good
me
to be
here
a
mainly to
loyal
discuss
and
this?
righteous person?
Can't
just
you
now?"
reconsider?
Then she
As
asked
soon as the words
loudly.
left her mouth,
Who was the one
she
who
saw
said they
him
were bullying
shake his
us with
head
numbers?
and refuse
I like it
without
very
hesitation.
much. So
Mu
I came to
Tianjiao
see who
smiled
has
bitterly
more
and
people.
said,
It
"Damn
seems
it.
that our four
If there
links
was a
chamber
chance
of
to be a
commerce
good
will have a
person,
hard time
it would be a
retaining
waste
capable
not to
people.
do it."
Yu Qianqiu smiled immediately
noncommittally.
pointed at Guan
He wasn't the
Tianli
kind of person
and
who would
said,
be
"He
easily
said it.
moved
He
by
is
utter
bullying us with
sincerity.
numbers."
It depended on what the
Ha.
matter was.
Nong
He
Zhu
didn't
rubbed her
care
hands
whether the
and
four links
said
chamber of
excitedly,
commerce was big
"Good.
or small.
Let's learn from each other."
The main thing was that he
The
couldn't
people who were
submit
invited
to
by the
others
passionless
anymore.
palace
Moreover,
suddenly became
this was a small
restless.
four links chamber
No one
of commerce.
expected such a thing.
This wasn't
to
a
happen.
platform for
in
him
the blink of an
to
eye.
display his
They were
ambitions.
surrounded, and all
Actually,
of them were on guard.
I have a pretty good
The
suggestion.
people who were watching
Yu
from afar
Qianqiu smiled
also
and
became
said,
restless.
"You should
They
continue
knew
to
there was a
maintain
big show to
contact
watch.
with the
Some
spirit
of them
cultivation
even hoped
sect
that these
and
people
mythical
would
fire
fight
palace.
to the death.
I
so
believe
that
it will
they
be a
could take
great
advantage
help
of
to
the
your
situation.
four links chamber
Guan
of commerce.
Tianli's pupils
I'm
suddenly
afraid I
shrank.
can't reach them.
He stared at
Mu
Du
Tianjiao Jiao shook her head and
Yunlong
smiled
and
bitterly.
said,
So you
"This
still
isn't your
have some
style,
tricks up your
Miss
sleeves.
Mu.
How
How
would you know
if
if you
don't
dared to
try?"
mix with the people who
Qianqiu
killed
cupped his
the
fists
passionless
and
palace's
said,
disciples?
"All right, you
I
purposely
still have matters
lured
to
me
attend
take
to.
the bait.
I'll take
I
my
admire
leave
you."
first. Du
With
Feng
that said,
and Hui
he
Yunlong
flew off into
looked
the
at each
sky
other
in
without
dismay.
looking back.
The two of them had
Mu
no
Tianjiao
idea where
looked at the departing
and the
figure
rest came from.
and
The
the
blank
blank
expressions
expressions on their faces
suddenly
showed
appeared
that
on
they
her
didn't
face.
know if they were
After a
happy
moment of
or
loss,
lucky.
she took a
The
deep
disciples
breath
of the mythical
and gathered
fire
her
palace
spirit to
and
fly
the spirit
back.
cultivation
At
sect
the entrance of the
also
Four
looked at
Links
each other.
Chamber of Commerce,
Everyone was
Du Feng
confused,
and
and
Hui
didn't know what was
Yunlong
going on.
arrived at
Guan
almost the same
keenly
time.
furrowed his
The
brows.
two of them looked at each
From
other
the
in
expressions of
surprise.
Du Feng
Mu
and
Bing
the
quickly
others,
walked
he
out
could
and
see that the
bowed.
two groups of
Esteemed
people were
guests,
not together at
please
all.
come in.
He immediately
Du Feng
cupped
glanced
his hands
inside
at Nongzhu
and waved
and
his
said,
hand.
Chairman
Mu
Guan
is too
Tianli,
polite.
a
I just
disciple
happened
of
to be
the
passing
passionless
by.
palace.
I still have
I
some
wonder which
matters
sect
to
you are
attend
from.
to.
We
I'll
have
come
no
again
enmity
in the
future.
past.
so there's no need to make things difficult. Directly asked, as long as brother Chairman is magnanimous. Where's Yu Qinsho? My heartless palace will definitely
Before
remember
Mu
this
Bing
favor.
Could reply,
His words sounded like he was using the heartless palace has already left. But these few of them didn't even know what the heartless palace was. Smiling. Nongju followed Yu Qinsho's instructions, lit up and turned her head to look after exchanging some pleasantries beside her. Shui Mingqing immediately took a step forward. Do you know where Yu Qinsho went? Tianli, I saw him heading in this direction. He should still be in this area. Who said we have no enemy in the past? Said hesitantly. My Skyward Palace's disciples were killed by your heartless palace's Che Mingqian. Then I'll go the only one left. I'll take my leave. I might as well tell you that these friends from various sects Dufeng also cupped his fists to take revenge. When he stood in the crowd, no one recognized him at first. When he stood out from the crowd, some people in the crowd who were watching the two immediately began to talk about him, saying that they had seen Shui Mingqing and that he was indeed a spirit cultivation sect of heaven. And a mythical crowd palace had probably also taken a fancy that the heartless palace would be so cruel shook her head that they even dared to kill the people of the palace of heaven. The father and daughter was not back into the shop and began to help Nan Tianlong arrange alchemy all kinds of in the immortal world. As all kinds of immortal herbs, as soon as Shui Mingqing arrived here, it also attracted people from various sects performance. He immediately realized that he had been used and disciple trio, but he had no other choice. Guests with smiles. Besides, he also wanted to do thousands of disciples. As long as he could avenge the death, the entire square seemed a lot. Not to mention that he could. There was no longer the bustling crowd, even if he did not bring back the rare treasures. He would the Skyward Palace's shop fully displayed the characteristics in the Skyward Palace one alchemy sect. A big sect like theirs was actually not. They sold all kinds of immortal pills. Face was more important than all treasures and money. Yu Qinsho wandered outside. Nongju looked around at the crowd. This was the second time he had come to the Skyward Palace. Although he had more than 300 brothers, the last time he had only passed by. We have all been helped by the Palace. He walked straight in. Today, the shopkeeper first of the palace up his cultivation and realized that he could shock us greatly. He quickly walked over and such an inhumane thing. What a mortal pill are you looking for? Since the disciples of the palace all kinds of immortal pills begging us. I'm looking for Shui to repay. Yu Qinsho pouted, brothers, and stared at the few people inside with a smile. More Master than 300 lords waved their arms Skyward Palace and shouted with righteous Shui Mingqing was among them. In their hearts, hearing that someone was looking for Shui Mingqing. How many years had it been since they played such childish tricks? The shopkeeper knew that there was nothing for him to do. The Palace of Heaven was indeed the Palace of slightly startled, worthy of being he didn't expect Yu Qinsho to find him so early. He turned back as long as they left one person alive. The few of them moved aside. They would immediately attract a large number of helpers to take revenge and said, "Oh my, you are Yu Qinsho? More than 300 my disciple has already told me about your performance in the This momentum was even stronger than that. The Skyward Palace has to thank you. The most terrifying thing that everyone respectfully and said was that if something happened to someone from these more than your disciple and I are already other people come to take revenge and death. More than 300 sects had entered the realm as long as Senior doesn't despise me for being a rogue cultivator. Even 1/10 of them was not a joke. Master Yu smiled expression nodded slightly. He stared at Shui Mingqing and said slowly, "Talk about Yu Qinsho's powerful means. I'm afraid there's some misunderstanding." He knew that once everyone in the divine since it has already happened, this child would immediately not shirk responsibility. He turned around to look at his beloved. I will definitely report to the Shui Mingqing. I believe that the heartless palace will definitely give the more friends he has, the better his disciples' future. I hope that brother Shui he cannot help let the misunderstanding between our sects deepen. He was the one who led the team. There's so many pairs of eyes watching Ruins realm. If the matter gets out of hand, it's impossible for it not to spread. Shui Mingqing what he meant definitely was that he was using the name of the heartless palace to be his to oppress people again. When the news spread, those old guys from the Palace of Heaven said definitely be envious. My Skyward Palace say that anyone who has the ability to take revenge on the if you are willing, I can recommend. Why are you afraid now? Master Yufuzi the 6 sects that Guan Yu Qinsho cupped his hands were already exchanging glances. Thank you for your kindness, as if they wanted to take the opportunity to escape. Although my master is also silently cultivating surroundings, it's not good for narrowed his eyes and immediately transmitted his voice to Nongju and said. So that's why are you talking nonsense? For you to have killed such ability, Guan Tianli glanced around severing cultivation coldly. Your master must not be a nobody. You better think. Why don't you tell me? Although maybe I know you have 160 like how you know him. To 170 Yu Qinsho respectfully we have many souls. My master is just a nobody in the immortal world. Although even if I tell you many people, Senior, most of them are only at the soul. Master Yufuzi stared at him for a while. It's not certain who will win. It's
He was
not
trying to
bad
calm
for
the
a
other
nobody
6
to be able to
sections.
teach a disciple.
Just as
like
Nongju
you.
was about to make
I
the first
presume your
move,
master,
Yu
is a
Qianqiu
hermit.
suddenly
May I
shouted
know
from below,
which immortal
"Bullsh,
mountain your
Master
master
thief.
lives in seclusion?
Don't forget that there are still
Seeing that
the
Yu
3 of
Qianqiu
us.
didn't want to say
Give
it
me your
clearly,
lives."
Master
Before he
Yufuzi
finished
was a
speaking,
bit suspicious.
he had already shot
He wanted to
towards
ask someone
the
to
people of the
investigate.
Heartless Palace.
Yu Qianqiu
A group of
immediately
densely
sensed
packed
the
black
deeper
shadows
in his
burst out
words.
from his sleeves.
He smiled bitterly.
The lord of the various
and said,
countries,
"It would be
couldn't
great
hold
if I
back
could
any
occupy an
longer
immortal
and wanted to
mountain
make a move.
and live in seclusion."
Nongju had just
Then I
given
wouldn't
the
have to
signal.
look for my
But
master
Yu
this time.
Qianqiu had already
What?
ignited
Your
the
master
fire
is missing?
first.
Master
Not to be
Yufuzi
outdone,
asked.
Everyone
To be honest,
immediately
my
swarmed
master's
to
whereabouts
attack.
have always
Mu
been uncertain.
Tianjiao.
However,
Clenched
he
her
often
teeth
goes
and
to the
slammed her
netherworld with some
sword
chamber
against her
commerce
shield.
to earn some
With a
spirit
clang,
stones.
she
But
shouted,
I don't
"Kill."
know why.
She
He
had
has
already
been in the
made up her
netherworld for a
mind to
long
fight
time,
for the
but
future
he
of
hasn't
the
come
four
back.
links chamber of commerce.
After saying that,
So she did not
Yu
want to be
Qianqiu
outdone.
bowed deeply,
Seeing that she
and
had
said,
already rushed
"This
out.
junior came to the
Du
Skyward
Feng
Palace
and
and
Hoi
shop
Yunlong
to look
shouted
for brother
almost
Shui
at the same
Mingqi.
time. In
Kill.
truth, I have
Rumble.
something to ask
The
of
earth
you,
shook
Senior.
and loud
I hope Senior can
noises
give face to
rang
your
out
disciple
continuously.
and help me this once.
The few groups of
Shui
people
Mingqi
madly
was stunned.
collided with
This
each
was
other.
different from a
With the
version
addition of the
they had
mythical
agreed
fire
on.
palace,
Little did
there
he
was
know
suddenly
that Yu
fire
Qianqiu
everywhere,
was already
and the place
cursing in his
instantly
heart.
became a
This old
pot of
ghost was
porridge.
really
The
suspicious.
surrounding people who were
He made me
watching
want
the
to change
battle
the script.
quickly retreated.
Master Yufuzi
afraid
looked
of being
at Shui
implicated.
Mingqing.
The group
and
of
said with a
people from the
faint
Heartless
smile,
Palace
"My
shot
palace
out
of
their
heaven
flying
is
swords
indebted
at the
to
same
you.
time.
If you have
No
anything
one
to
knew
say,
what their
just say
flying
it.
sword were made of.
Thank you,
but
Senior."
they actually
Yu
blocked the
Qianqiu
attack
said
of the black
respectfully,
flame flying
"It's like
swords.
this.
Guan
I heard that
Tianli
all the
shouted
major sects
angrily,
have
"Kill
people
him
coming
first and go into the
The
netherworld
flying
to trade."
swords that shook
Junior
off the
wants to
black
ask
flame
Senior to
flying
let
swords
Palace of Heaven
immediately
send
rush
people
over with the
to
force
trade
of
with the
thunder.
netherworld to bring
The
Junior
joint
along.
attack of 15
Junior wants to go to
experts
the
at the soul
netherworld to
transformation
inquire
final
about
stage
Master.
was no small
He had also
matter.
thought it through.
Just the momentum
He
alone
had originally
was
come to the
almost
celestial
enough to make
world
it hard
to
for
find
Yu
by
Qianqiu to open his eyes. Nongju, who had taken the time to glance
Although he
over,
was tempted by the
shocked.
divine ruin
Just as she
realm,
was about to
he
break
still had to
away
find
from
a
her
way to
opponent's
find out if
battle.
the old man
She
was
saw Yu
dead or
Qianqiu
alive.
push out his palms in the air,
Otherwise,
his
and
heart
the
would
15
always be
flying
half-tangled.
swords instantly
Master
shattered into
Yufuzi
silver
was
powder.
solemn
When he
immediately
heard
after
this,
that.
He
Yu
silently
Qianqiu
looked
looked
at
Yu
Yu
Qianqiu
Qianqiu
for a while,
"Want to run?"
and said,
"The
"Absorbing
netherworld is
stars,
not like the
great
celestial
skill."
world.
Before
It
he
is
finished
vast,
speaking,
and there are
15
countless
clouds
heroes
of white
there.
smoke
It has always been
exploded in the
chaotic.
air.
Going to the
The
netherworld
black
to
flame
trade
flying swords
is
that
a
were
very
shaken away
dangerous
were like a
thing.
flock of
Since your
crows
master has been gone
fighting
for a long
food,
time,
and
with
they were
all due
respectively
respect,
burrowed.
I'm
into
afraid the hope of
15
him coming
clouds of
back
white
is
smoke.
very slim.
Before the
Are you
white
sure you want to take the
smoke
risk?
dispersed,
A teacher
hundreds
for a
of
day
black
is a
flame
father
flying
for
swords
life.
had already
Yu Qianqiu
followed Yu
nodded with a
Qianqiu
firm
to
look in his
another
eyes.
place where the battle
The
was
doubts
going
in
on.
Master
Such a
Yufuzi's heart
ferocious scene
disappeared.
made
He
many
was a little
people
touched,
shiver
and said,
uncontrollably.
"It seems that your master
when the white
didn't
smoke
accept you
dissipated
as a disciple for
only
nothing.
15 storage
However,
bracelets
I'm afraid
fell
it's
to
not the
ground.
time to go to the
As for
netherworld.
Guan Tianli
The situation
and
in
the
the
other
netherworld
15 people
is quite tense.
They were already nowhere
Not
to be
only my
seen.
palace of heaven,
Nongju,
but even the
who had
entire
used the
celestial
shape
world
displacement
doesn't have
transposition
anyone
technique,
going to trade
was
with the
really
netherworld for the time
speechless.
being.
The
If you want to go
strength
to the
of Yu
netherworld,
Qianqiu had
I'm
already
afraid you have
exceeded
to
her
wait
imagination.
until the situation
One
in the
absorbing
netherworld calms
stars,
down a little.
great skill,
Not
actually
only
killed
Qianqiu,
15
but
experts
everyone
at the
present
soul
looked at each
transformation
other.
final stage.
They didn't seem to
at the
know
same
what he
time.
meant.
In her
Yu
grief
Qianqiu
and
curiously
indignation,
asked,
she
"Did something
resolutely
happen in
turned
the
around
netherworld?"
and caught
Master
her
Yufuzi
opponents to
looked
vent her
around at
anger.
everyone and said,
However, I'm
"To the
afraid
soul
only some of the
transformation
higher-ups of
final
the various
stage
sects
experts
know
from the
about
various
this,
countries.
but it doesn't
The
matter
scene
if
of
I tell
Yu
you.
Qianqiu
Just treat
killing
it
the
as a way to
15
broaden your
experts at the soul
horizons.
transformation
Don't spread
final
it after
stage
this.
instantly made
There are
them feel
72
refreshed,
worlds in the human
and they
world,
felt a sense of
and
pride.
one of them is a
This is our
forbidden
world's
area of
number
the
one
immortal
expert
in netherworld
Of course,
realms.
he's powerful.
Although I don't know the reason.
However, the
This
celestial
scene was
emperor
no
and the
different from a
netherworld
nightmare
emperor
to
forbid the
remaining
people of the
disciples
immortal
of the
and
six
netherworld
sections.
realms
When they saw Yu
interacting with that
Qianqiu
world.
rushing
That
over
place
with a
is
group
the
of flying
ancient
swords,
battlefield where the
they were
immortal
instantly
and
scared out of
netherworld
their
realms
wits.
fought They were
against the
already in a
myriad
situation where they were
monarch.
outnumbered.
Have you all heard of
They
it?
were barely
Everyone
able to put up a
replied
fight.
in unison.
As soon as
Yes.
Yuchincho arrived,
Yuchincho's heart
they panicked
skipped a beat
and were instantly
the place
beaten
Master
to death by
Yufuzi
the
was
people
talking about
surrounding
was
them.
obviously
They
where he
died
came from.
such an
Could the
unjust
situation
death.
in the netherworld
when there
be
was no
tense?
work to be done
Because
in
the
one
Eastern
area.
Holy Land was
Yuchincho
broken,
immediately
and the people
flew
trapped
to
there
another
returned.
area.
Master
However,
Yufuzi waved
wherever
his
he
hand
flew
and
to,
laid down a soundproof
there was a
barrier in
sea
the
of
shop
dead
before
and
continuing.
injured people there.
After the ancient battle,
And he didn't even have a chance
although
to
the
help.
myriad swords
After
demon
this
monarch
jinx
was
had gone
defeated,
one round,
many
the
people from
battle
the
was
immortal
over.
and netherworld
The various
were trapped by
feudal
the
lords
heaven
were
and
already
earth
in a
universe
complete
formation laid
mess,
down,
and
by
they were
the myriad
frantically
swords
fighting
demon
over the
monarch.
storage bracelets
Those experts
and
from the
storage pouches
immortal
from
and
the corpses.
netherworld were
This scene
trapped
had
for more
Dufeng
than
and the others
100,000
completely
years.
dumbfounded.
When they came to their senses and wanted to
It wasn't
search for
until
the spoils
recently
of
that the
war,
heaven
they
and
found that they
earth
didn't even
universe
get
formation
a
was
single
broken,
strand of hair
that
from
those
the
trapped
corpses.
immortal world experts
On the
returned
other
through
hand,
the netherworld,
the feudal
and
lords
brought
were
back
showing
shocking
off to each
news.
other.
Master
them
Yafuzi's
was holding
voice
two
paused,
storage bracelets,
and a faint sigh appeared
and the other
on
was
his
holding
face,
5
as if he was
storage
feeling
pouches,
very
and they were
emotional.
winking at each other.
Everyone was silent,
Yunantian,
as they
was the
waited
one
for
who
him
reacted
to
the
continue.
fastest.
However,
This guy was the first
he seemed
to
to be
rush
reminiscing
to the
about
place where
something
Yuchincho
and couldn't
killed
extricate
the
himself
15
from it for a long
people.
time. And he took
Yuchincho
all the 15
cursed in his
storage
heart,
bracelets for
but he
himself.
honestly asked,
He was holding a
"Senior,
large pile of
what
storage
kind of shocking
bracelets?"
news is it?
And he couldn't stop
Master
laughing.
Yafuzi came
He had
back to his
completely
senses
lost the
and shook his
graceful
head
and
with a
elegant
sigh.
temperament.
It
that he
said
had
that a
always
peerless
maintained.
expert
It's
called
over
by
so
Changchun
soon.
appeared in that
Yuchincho
world.
stopped in the
He could
air
freely
and was
enter
slightly
and
stunned.
exit
To
the
be honest,
heaven and
he hadn't
earth
fought
universe
to his heart's
formation
content
that
for a
trapped the
long time.
experts from the
He thought that he
immortal
could
and
fight to his
netherworld.
heart's content.
What's more
this time,
terrifying is that
because there were
two
many
underworld
people,
generals,
but who
and
knew
two
that a
would be
mortal
over
monarch
so
from the
soon.
immortal world.
Why couldn't he
joined
find an
forces
opponent
with
but they
the
weren't a
absorbing
match for him?
stars? Great
Two
skill.
underworld generals,
Sigh.
and one
Yuchincho
immortal
looked into
monarch
the
died at
distance
his hands,
speechlessly,
and one was
he now
seriously
thought
injured.
that he had found a little bit
Everyone
of
in
the
the shop
lonely
couldn't
and
help
invincible
but cry out
feeling.
There was actually
Changchun.
someone in the mortal world who could fight for immortal monarchs.
Chapter
alone. It was too
823.
frightening.
The lords of
This
the various
news was
countries who
indeed
did not
shocking,
manage to
and
snatch
everyone
anything
didn't even
looked
dare to
unwillingly
breathe loudly
at the
after
disciples
hearing
of the various sects
were
were
watching the
battle from
Just this
afar.
outdated news?
Their wolf-like
Yuchincho was
gazes
speechless.
immediately made
He
the
respectfully
disciples
asked
of the various
again,
sects
"Senior,
feel that something
what
was
does this
wrong,
have to do with
and
the
they
tense
quickly
situation in the
retreated.
netherworld?"
This group of
Master
fellows were
Yafuzi
now
looked at him
extremely
and nodded.
confident.
Of course,
and
it's
no
related.
longer placed the
After that
disciples
person
of the
called by
various sects in their
Changchun
eyes.
defeated two
They
underworld
exchanged
generals
glances
and
and
two
greeted
immortal
each other.
monarchs,
And there were
he charged
indeed
into the
signs of
netherworld.
them wanting to make
This
a move.
time, he did
However,
something unimaginable.
Nong Zhu and the
He was
others
simply
had
too
already
daring.
received Yu
He actually
Qinsho's
charged
secret
into the
instructions.
Mingwang Mountain.
They called
and
out
wanted
to the
to
crowd
challenge the
and
netherworld
left the
emperor.
place.
Yuchincho
Everyone
looked at
couldn't help
Nongzhu,
but
who had
gasp.
flown away
In
with
everyone's
a stomach
eyes,
full of
the
bewilderment.
netherworld emperor
Didn't this
was a
old
top-notch
brat not want to
who was
worry
on the
about
same
anything?
level as
Why
the
was he so
immortal emperor?
energetic when he was
Someone
doing this?
actually dared
Du
to challenge
Feng and the others were
netherworld
speechless
emperor?
as
Oh my
they
God.
looked at the corpses.
Yuchincho's
all around
heart
them.
was
They then
pounding.
looked at you.
His legs were a
Yuchincho
little
with
weak,
reverence in their
and the
eyes.
muscles on his face
Everyone
were
knew
twitching.
that the reason
He
why
sighed
they were able to
helplessly
avoid
in his
danger.
heart.
This
So
old fellow
smoothly
really
this
dared
time
to do anything.
was because of Yuchincho.
He was so arrogant
The scene
that he
of the
actually
instant
dared to
kill
challenge
kept
that
appearing
legendary
in
figure.
everyone's mind.
That was the strongest
causing their
and
hairs
most
to stand on
mysterious
end just
expert
thinking
in the
about it.
entire netherworld.
After this battle,
He suddenly thought
the
of how
people of
he
the
had
mythical
lost
fire
contact with
palace,
Changchun.
the spirit
He
cultivation
instantly
sect,
became nervous,
and the four links
His
chamber of
face was
commerce were
slightly
almost
pale as he
unobstructed
asked,
within
"What
the
happened
ruins
to
of
that
God?"
person?"
Due to
Master
Yuchincho
Yafuzi
holding
glanced
the
at
fort,
him and didn't
there was no
think
need
much
to
of it.
worry about it.
He just thought that Yafuzi
They were not
was
greedy.
frightened.
As
When he
long
first
as
heard
others
news,
did not
he was
provoke
also
them,
shocked.
They would not
He shook his
provoke
head and
others.
sighed.
They
This
searched
person
for
was
all
really
sorts
very
of treasures
strong
on their own,
and their harvest was not small.
When he killed
However,
his way to
the
the
situation
Mingwang
within the
Mountain,
ruins of God,
he finally
had
alerted the
undergone
four
a huge
strongest
change.
netherworld
The news
generals
of the disciples of the
remaining
heartless
on the
palace
Mingwang Mountain,
and the other
in the end,
7
the
great
four
sects
netherworld
being
generals
annihilated
couldn't defeat
was like a
him,
stone
even
that
when they
stirred
teamed
up
up 1,000
He fought the
ripples.
4 netherworld
disciples
generals
of the
for a
various
long
sects
time.
all
And
followed
both
suit
sides actually
and
came
started
to
to
draw.
gather people
Because
to
of
form
this,
teams.
the most
In the following
mysterious
days,
netherworld emperor
Yuchincho
of the netherworld
and the others
royal
witnessed
palace
the
fighting
finally
and
appeared.
killing.
They
They
could
could
always
always
see
see
the
the situation of
He
many
anxiously asked
bullying the
again,
few.
what was the
However,
result?
The netherworld
Yuchincho
emperor
was no
is
longer
indeed
interested in
the
participating
netherworld
in this
emperor.
liveliness.
He is indeed
He was now
the most
wholeheartedly
powerful
focusing
emperor
on
in
the
the
various
netherworld.
Jade archives.
Master Yafuzi
Nongzhu
and the
but
other
clench his
rascals would
fists as he
naturally
said
take care of
vehemently.
collecting
It is said
immortal
that after the
herbs
netherworld
and other
emperor
rare
appeared,
treasures. He was
what he needed to do
extremely
now
furious.
was to prepare for
It
his
was the
life
first time in
the
many
immortal
years
world
that
in the
someone
future.
dared to attack.
He needed to learn
his
all
netherworld
the
royal
resources
palace.
in his hands.
He immediately
first.
ordered the
He didn't
4
want to run
netherworld
out
generals
and still
to
be
retreat.
ignorant.
During
and
this
personally
period,
fought with
he
that
would
person
always
called by
secretly
Changchun.
ask Tao Zhong
3
about
moves.
the various
Just
situations
3
in the
moves.
immortal world
Just
through
3
voice
moves.
transmissions.
The 3
If Tao Zhong
earth-shattering
wasn't
moves
clear about
immediately
something, he would
severely
ask Du
injured by
Feng and Hui
Changchun,
Yunlong for
who the
guidance.
4 netherworld
Although
generals
everyone
had
was a
been
little
fighting for a long
surprised,
time.
they said what they
One could
and
imagine
didn't
how
hide anything.
terrifying the netherworld emperor was.
The words and
After
actions
being conditions
been
of the latter
severely
two
injured,
seemed
the
to be trying to
enraged
rope him in.
netherworld
Mu
Emperor
Tianjiao
chased
had always
after by
been
Changqiu.
silently watching
It could
his
be said
every
that the
move.
entire
In
netherworld
reality,
was shocked.
Yu Qianzhou's
The entire
identity as a
netherworld
loose cultivator
once again
had greatly
witnessed
moved
how
her.
terrifying
She had always been
the
pondering
netherworld
how to get
emperor
Yu Qianzhou
was.
to officially join the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. The reason for this was that Yu Qianzhou's ability was beneficial to the Four Links
The
Chamber
breathing
of
in the
Commerce.
shop
In the
suddenly
blink of an
quickened
eye,
as
another
everyone
half
revealed
revealed expressions of shock. There were less than 10 days left.
All of them
before the
were
divine
imagining
ruin
the
realm
peerless
closed.
demeanor
The
of
thick
the
white
netherworld
fog
emperor.
that blotted out
Yu
the sky
Qianzhou
and
swallowed
covered the
his
earth
saliva
also
to
caused
moisten
a
a
group
group
of
of
people
people's
to stop
throat
and
Yu
ask with
Qianzhou
difficulty.
originally
Was
thought
by
that the
Changqiu
fog
killed by the
where
netherworld
everyone
emperor?
was already
Master
thick
Yu
enough,
Fuzi
but he didn't
slowly
expect that the
shook
fog in
his
front of
head.
them would be
If he
even
was really
thicker.
killed,
It was likely
then
that
their
their
visibility
visibility
in the
netherworld
netherworld
was
wouldn't
less
be
than 10
so
meters.
tense. He couldn't
That
help but
person's
turn
methods
around
are
and
truly
ask,
outstanding.
Does anyone know
Although
what's
he
going
couldn't
on?
even withstand
Everyone shook their
3
heads
moves
with
from the
solemn
Netherworld
expressions.
Emperor.
He was able to
Dufong
resist
said in
the
a deep
Netherworld
voice,
Emperor's
"Everyone,
pursuit,
let's go."
and luckily
I
escaped
didn't think we would
into
already
the
be
boundless,
here.
forbidden
We can't go
area
any
of the
further.
Netherworld.
It's very
If
dangerous
it wasn't for the
inside.
mysterious, forbidden
dangerous?
area of darkness
Yu
that even the
Qianqiu
Netherworld
asked.
Emperor was
Wei
wary
Yunlong's
of
pair
and
of
blocked his
red
pursuit,
eyebrows
the
knitted
furious
together
Netherworld
as he
Emperor
interjected.
wouldn't have let him go.
The spirit Qi
Bai
in
Changqun
here
would have
is so
died
thick.
without a doubt.
Although there are even
Yu
more
Qianqiu's
rare
eyes lit up as he
valuable
forcefully
spirit
controlled his
There
excitement.
are also many
and
fierce
asked in a
beasts that
suppressed
gather
voice
here.
to
So that means
absorb
that
the
Bai
spirit
Changqun
Qi of
didn't
heaven
die at the
and
hands of the
earth.
Netherworld Emperor.
Even ordinary
and
immortal
escaped in the
experts
end.
don't dare
You
to
can say
trespass
that.
here.
Master
There have already been
Yafuzi
countless
muttered,
seniors
but whether
who
he's
died
alive
here,
or
and
dead
those who were
is
lucky
unknown.
enough to escape
It is said that Bai
Bai
Changqun was
warned their
severely
descendants
injured by the
not to
Netherworld
trespass
Emperor
here.
before he
Every
escaped
time the
into
divine
mysterious
ruined realm
forbidden
opens.
area.
In
Basically,
addition,
only the
just
people
think about
of
the
the immortal
strangeness
palace
of that
dared enter.
mysterious place.
With our cultivation,
even the Netherworld
it's very
Emperor was
dangerous
forbidden
to
from
barge in.
entering.
So there
Fierce
must be something
beasts?
terrifying
Yu
there
Qianqiu
that
stared at the
outsiders
vast
don't
sea
know
of
about.
fog in front
Bai
of him and
Changqun
pondered,
entered while heavily
which is more
injured.
powerful.
So his
The
chances
so-called
of survival
fierce
are
beasts
very
or
slim.
those spirit
Damn
beasts
it.
or
Yu
immortal
Qianqiu's
beasts.
mouth twitched.
Everyone's
and he was
faces
speechless.
stiffened
This
when they
old
heard
fellow
this,
had tossed his
and they
heart
all
around
looked at
like a
him
small
with an
boat in a
incomprehensible
raging sea,
expression,
going up
Wei
and down.
Yunlong's mouth
One
was
moment he
wide
saw
open,
hope,
and he
and
was
the next
already
moment he
speechless.
destroyed it.
It was as
Dufong
easy
coughed
as blowing
and
soap
explained.
bubbles.
Actually,
What a
the
joke.
so-called fierce
Since that person was
includes
forced into the
spirit beasts
mysterious
and
forbidden
immortal
area
beasts.
by the Netherworld
Fierce
Emperor,
beasts
why
are
is the
generally
situation
creatures
in the
left
Netherworld
behind from
still
ancient
so
times.
tense?
They have
Yu
unique
Qianqiu
innate
powerlessly
conditions,
asked
which
the
are long
question in his
lifespans,
heart.
and most of
Yafuzi
them are
was
talented.
silent for a moment
Although the
before
heavens have given them because of Bai
such favorable
Changqun's
innate
unexpected
conditions.
appearance.
They
The
have also
Netherworld
given
Emperor's
them an
favored
innate
concubine
flaw
that is
Madame
difficult to
Blackpool
overcome.
is
If they can
extremely
overcome this
furious.
flaw,
With
they can
one
advance
order,
to become
the Netherworld
spirit
army that
beasts
shakes the
or
entire
immortal beasts.
Netherworld is
Fierce beasts
interrogating all
advance to
those who
spirit
aren't from the
beasts
Netherworld.
or immortal
Many
beasts.
people from the immortal
Yu
world
Qianqiu
who went
had
to
a
the
blank
Netherworld
expression as he
portrayed
asked in
implicated.
astonishment. Your master
What
hasn't
flaw?
returned for a long time. I'm
Dufong
afraid it has something to
subconsciously
do
touched
with
his
this
forehead
matter.
and
Yu
explained with an
Qianqiu
awkward
fell
smile.
silent. Although
He was
fierce
conflicted
beasts
about
have
whether Bai
long
Changqun
lifespans,
was dead
most of them
or
are
alive.
chaotic and
Why did he
stupid.
lose contact
In terms
with
of
the silver
intelligence,
ball that he was
they're
carrying?
not even as good as most ordinary poultry.
Could it
or
be that
wild
the
beasts in the
boundless
forest?
and mysterious
This is their fatal
forbidden
flaw.
land in the underworld
However,
really had
once
some
a fierce
unusual
beast
mysteries
develops
that could
intelligence,
cut off the
it
connection
becomes a
between
spirit
him
beast
and the silver
Once
ball.
a spirit beast
This was the
develops
first time he had
intelligence
encountered
and
something
understand
like
the
this.
cultivation method
In the
that
past,
suits it. No matter
it can
where he
cultivate
was,
to the
he could
realm
always
of
maintain
immortal
contact
beasts,
with the silver
and
ball.
at that time,
after thinking
it can
about
transform into
his
a human
gaze
form.
gradually
The
became
long
firm.
cultivation process
He had always been very
is much more
confident in
difficult
Bai
than
Changqun.
that of
as
a
long as
normal
there was
demon
no
cultivator.
definite news
A
of
demon
his death,
cultivator can
then
transform
everything
into
was
a human
possible
form
because he
after
was the
forming
one
their core
and
or
only
nascent
legend
soul.
in the world.
But a spirit
Bai
beast
Changqun
must cultivate
even if
to
he
the
went to the
realm
netherworld
of immortal
now,
beasts.
he would be
However,
powerless.
the
The
power
most
of the
important
two
thing
cannot
cannot
be
be
compared.
was to strengthen
Yu
himself.
Qianqiu nodded
If Bai
slightly as he
Changqun
pondered.
was really
He
dead,
couldn't help but
then
think
he had
of
to live
Sujan.
well.
Bai
After all,
Sujan was
someone
a
had to
demon
take revenge
cultivator,
for the old man,
and she had
After all,
transformed into a
the
human
old
form
man
a long
only
time
had
ago.
one disciple.
Dufong paused
Although the
for a
old
moment,
immortal emperor
then
of the
continued with a
Netherworld
smile.
was very
Actually,
terrifying.
the
He had a
immortal
work hard.
crocodile lord
He was
that
not
you
a gentleman
admire,
if he
who
did
dared
not
to
take
talk
back to the
revenge.
immortal emperor.
However,
It seemed that he had no chance of defeating the emperor to a certain level.
in this life.
He had the opportunity
The corners of
to
Yu
become
Qianqiu's
an immortal
mouth
lord.
stiffened
As he
Dufong
sighed in his heart.
suddenly paused
He would
again.
think about revenge
Everyone's
later.
gazes were
The old
fixed on
man
the
was
thick
very
white
lucky
fog in
and
front
would
of them.
definitely
The
not
fog
die.
started to shake
Master
violently,
Yafuzi stared
and
at
the
the
ground
silent
started to
Yu Qianqiu
shake
for a while
violently
and
as
said
well.
with a faint smile,
Before anyone
Yu
could
Qianqiu,
react,
a
you are
few
also
rays
considered
of
an
golden light
outstanding
shot out
talent
from the white
of the
fog.
new generation.
And the white
is
fog
not a
behind them
long-term plan to
instantly
wander
turned black,
around the immortal
giving off
world
a
alone.
feeling as
I
if
have
a
a
mountain
suggestion.
was pressing down.
I don't
on
know
them.
if you're willing to
Hiss.
listen to it.
A roar
Ah.
that almost
Yu
pierced
Qianqiu
everyone's
recovered and
eardrums
hurriedly bowed.
shook
shook the white fog,
Senior,
and a
please
huge
speak.
black shadow
Junior
appeared behind
is
it.
listening.
Rushing out of
Master
the white
Yafuzi
fog
nodded
with
and
a
said
loud
with a
bang.
smile.
A huge
Your
head
master's
with a bloody
life and
mouth
death
suddenly
are
rushed
unknown.
out.
I suggest
Directly
that you
chasing
first join
after
my
the
Chao
rays
Tian
of
palace
golden light.
and become an
It was
outer
so
disciple
huge,
of my
but its
Chao Tian
speed was
palace.
unbelievably
If your
fast.
master is still
The
alive,
huge body that
I am
followed
confident
after
that I can
directly
persuade your
pressed
master
down
to join
on
my
the
Chao Tian
dumbfounded
palace.
people. Everyone
When the time
was
comes,
shocked,
your
and they all
master and
teleported
disciple
away.
will be reunited.
Before Yu Qian
and he will
Cho
definitely
could see
not
clearly
say
what was
anything
going
about
on.
you.
He saw a
What do you
few
think of this
rays of
suggestion?
light explode.
Ever since he learned about
directly
Yu
shooting
Qian
at the
Cho's
huge head that
extraordinary
rushed
ability
out of
in
the
the
white
ruins
fog.
of God,
Bang,
he had
bang.
already wanted a rope
Several
a
loud
a
sounds
disciple
rang
of the
out.
younger generation like him.
The huge
would
head was
definitely
smashed
have
into the
limitless
ground on the spot,
achievements in the future.
shaking Yu Qian Cho
If he did not take
and the
advantage of
others
this
so much
opportunity
that
to
their
rope
vision
him
became
into the
blurred.
Chao Tian palace,
They almost couldn't
he would
stand still
definitely
and
regret it
hurriedly
in the
flew
future.
away. That was why
Bastard,
he bowed
how
to
dare
Yu
you chase
Qianzhou
after
with
us?
his status
You're courting
as
death.
an elder of the Skyward
A thunderous
Palace,
roar
and invited him
exploded
over
in
and
the
over
air.
again.
And a
If
few
Yu
rays of
Qianzhou
golden
was a
light had
useless
already
person,
appeared.
he
All
probably
of them
wouldn't
looked
even
a little
bother to look
battered.
at him. Obviously,
This.
having suffered a
Yu
lot
Qianzhou
in the thick
pondered
white
for a
fog
moment
before
This.
cupping his hands.
A long
and saying,
roar shook
Junior
the
is
heavens.
very grateful
Earth and
for
rocks
Senior's
filled
favor.
the sky.
However,
Immediately
Junior's
forcing
master's
the
life
others
and
to
death
retreat
are
once
unknown.
more. Only Yu Qianzhou
If I
remained
arbitrarily
fearless.
join the Chao
The
Tian
earth and
Palace at
rocks
this time,
couldn't harm him.
I'm
in
afraid
the
that I will
slightest.
not be able to
The
raise my
huge
head
that
that
had
had
future.
sunk in the ground.
What's more,
lifted up
the smile
once
on
again,
Master's
and
face
a
turned
huge red
slightly
eyes
cold,
with a circle of
and his
golden
eyes
patterns
flickered
were
as he
filled
said,
with anger.
"What's more?"
The fangs
His
in its
tone was
bloody
also a
mouth
little
were
heavy.
frightening.
Shui
and
Mingqing
its
looked
thick
at the two
tongue
of them
trembled
nervously,
like a javelin,
afraid
as
that
it
his new
roared.
master would
It could be
kill Yu
seen that its
Qianzhou
anger had
if he was
reached its
unhappy.
limit.
It should
Only
be
then
known
did
that Yu
Yu
Qianzhou
Qianzhou
had
see
promised to continue
clearly what
supporting
kind
him
of secret
fiercely
beast
in the
it was.
future.
It was
which
actually
very
a
important to
ferocious
him.
and
Although he was
ferocious
only a lowly
giant
disciple
snake
with a
the diameter
diameter
of
palace
10
before,
meters,
he knew
and
that
its
the
black
Sect was
scales
not
spread
as
out,
peaceful,
emitting
as
a
it seemed on
disgusting
surface.
stench.
In
The
fact,
huge body
there were
behind it
endless
was hidden in
fights
the
for
fog,
power in the dark,
and no one knew
Moreover,
how long it was.
he had been promoted
At this
from
moment,
the lowest disciple
a huge
to the
pillar
disciple
suddenly
of an elder,
broke out of the
which
thick
would definitely
white fog,
attract
and with a
lot of
boom,
covetous
it
eyes.
swept towards the
There would
few
definitely
people
be
in golden
people who would
robes
think
in the
of
air
ways
with
to
a
make
terrifying
things difficult
momentum.
for him.
As time passed,
We can't let it lie.
he was afraid that he
Five
would
of the
not be
6
able to
people in
survive
golden
smoothly.
robes waved
As
their
the saying
sleeves,
went,
it was
5
easy
rays
to
of
dodge a
shot
spear
out.
in the open,
Bang!
but
It
difficult
set off
to guard
a
against
monstrous
stab in the
wave
dark,
and knocked away
if someone
the
wanted to
huge snake
deliberately
tail
harm
spot.
him.
Another
It would be
person in
impossible
golden
for
robes
Master to always
raised
stay
an
by his
ancient
side.
mirror in his
Now,
hand
if
at the
Master
same
was his
time.
backer on the surface,
The mirror
then Yu
flashed with
Qianzhou was
mysterious
his backer
light
in the dark,
like ripples.
He had seen some of
and
the
a
things
fierce
that Yu
ray of
Qianzhou
light
had shown in the
instantly
ruins of
enveloped
God.
the entire
So he was
snake
very
head.
confident
This,
in Yu Qianzhou's
the huge snake
mysterious
let out an
background.
incomparably
He had a feeling
painful
that
howl,
what Yu
and its
Qianzhou
long
had shown
dragon-like
was
body
only
that
the
was
tip
hidden
of
in
the
the
iceberg.
fog,
Immediately
and that Yu
Qianzhou
broke
could
out of
give
the
him a
fog
lot
with
of
a
help.
boom.
There were
Yu
many
Qianzhou was
elders
shocked.
like Master
This
in the Chao
huge
Tian
snake
Palace,
was probably
and the
150
disciples of
to
these elders had
160
been in the
meters
Chao Tian
long,
Palace
and at this
for many
moment,
years.
it was
In
curled
addition
up into
to their
a ball
high
to protect
cultivated
its
head, they had
and it was
established
rolling
a
on the
good
ground like a
foundation.
moving mountain.
Master didn't
causing
have
the
any
ground to
foundation
tremble
in the Chao
from
Tian
the roar
Palace,
of pain,
and his
one
cultivation
could tell
wasn't
that he was
very
already
good
injured.
either. At
This
present,
beast's skin
Yu
is
Qianzhou
tough,
was the
but
only
its
place
eyes
he
have
could
already been
borrow strength
blinded
from.
by my mystic
So he didn't
light
want anything
treasure
to happen
mirror.
to Yu Qianzhou.
Take this opportunity.
Yu Qianzhou
combine
naturally
the 6
heard the
swords into
displeasure in
one
Master's
and
tone.
kill it.
So he
The
calmly
6 people
explained,
turned into
Senior might
6
not know
golden
this,
streams
but when my
of
master
light
is still
and
alive,
scattered.
he often
Shooting
talked about how he
diagonally
hoped that
into the
one
sky.
day he could
Suddenly,
establish his
there
own
was a
chamber of
thunderous
commerce
sound in the air,
and end his
and the
identity
fog
as a
suddenly
rogue
broke
cultivator.
open.
This can be
6
said to be
golden
a
streams
wish
of
of
light
master.
pushed a
As his
10-meter-long
disciple,
hexagonal
I
giant
have the
sword down from
responsibility
sky
and
and
obligation
astonishing
to
speed,
fulfill
and
Master's
in the blink of an
wish.
eye,
After
plunged
saying
into the
that, he
huge
secretly
snake
sent
that was
a
curled
voice
up into a
transmission
ball
to
Bang.
Shui Mingqing.
There was a loud noise,
asking him
and
to come
countless
out,
rays
and
of
smooth
light
things
shot
over.
out from the huge
Master looked him
snake
up
that
and
was curled
down
up into a
and raised
ball.
an eyebrow.
In an instant,
You mean
Yu
you want to
Qianzhou,
establish your
who had
own chamber
surged
of
out his
commerce
aura
in the
shield,
immortal world?
was still
Yes.
shaken by the burst
Yu
of light
Qianzhou replied
and
with
flew
a firm
back
look.
dozens of meters before barely
Master
stopping.
sneered.
His
Kid who
aura
doesn't know
shield
the
had
immensity
already
of
collapsed,
heaven and earth.
and the blood
Do you
hanging
know
from
how
the
much it
corner of
costs to
his mouth
establish a
said
chamber of
everything.
commerce? This, the endless howl, stopped
Even if you
abruptly,
succeed in
and
establishing
6 golden
it as you
streams
wish,
of light
can you run a
shot
chamber
out
of
from the
commerce
body
with your
of a
cultivation
huge
base
snake
that
was
hasn't
curled
reached
up
the
into a
immortal
ball?
realm?
I'm afraid that you won't
They
be able to
flashed
keep
into
it.
the air
Where there's a will,
and the
there's
original
a way.
bodies of the 6
Yu
people in
Qianzhou
golden
replied
robes
in a
appeared
sonorous
in the
voice.
air, and
What
each
a
of them
shameless
looked
boast.
down coldly.
As soon as Master
The
finished
huge
his
snake that was
sarcastic
curled up
words,
into a ball
Shui Mingqing
slowly
stepped
wriggled
forward
weakly
and bowed to him.
and suddenly seemed
Master,
to have lost its
disciple has a
strength.
suggestion.
It collapsed
but I
with a
don't know if
loud
I should
bang
say it.
and spread
Master
out
was
on the
slightly
ground,
taken aback.
motionless.
He looked at his new
Under
disciple,
many of the hard
and his
leather
expression
armor, there were
softened.
bloody cuts.
What good suggestion
and
do
the two huge
This was a
eyes
hint
became
for Shui
paste,
Mingqing
and
to
blood
speak.
kept flowing
Shui
out.
Mingqing
On the forehead
immediately
between the eyes,
said
there was a
respectfully,
huge hole
"Brother,
that was
you
pierced by
saved
something,
this disciple's
and red
life,
and white
the
things
divine
were
ruin
slowly
realm.
flowing out.
This disciple really doesn't want to see a gap between him and
Chapter
our Chaotian
8:24.
This
Yu
disciple
Qianqiu
thinks that
slowly
Master
wiped the
should give
blood
him
from
a
the
grace
corner of his
period.
mouth.
For
and
example,
looked at the scene in
give
front
him
of him
3
in shock.
years.
The
If he
momentum
can't run a
and
chamber of
power
commerce
the 6
in
people
3
joining
years,
forces,
this
to kill
disciple
the giant
is
snake
willing to
made
do
him
his
gasp,
best to persuade
although he did
him
not know
to join
what the
our
cultivation
Chaotian
of the
palace.
6 people was.
Master frowned
The strength
slightly,
of the
but
immortal
Yu
realm
Qianqiu
experts
shouted,
was
"Okay,"
undoubtedly shown.
and solemnly
He knew
promised,
that with his
3
current
years it
cultivation,
is.
It would
If
be
I can't run a
difficult to
chamber of
catch up.
commerce in 3
What
years,
shocked him the most
there's
was
no
the
need
ferocity
for
of
Brother
the giant
Jade
snake
to persuade me.
It took 6
I will
immortal
voluntarily
realm
join
experts
the
to kill it.
Chaotian Palace
Was this the
and work
power
for it.
of a ferocious
Shui
beast?
Mingqing looked at him.
He could not
with
help
a
but
burning
think of the
gaze
situation
and played
when he
along.
saw immortal
Brother
Lord
you,
Crocodile's
I'll say the
huge
ugly words
body at
first.
the Moon Lake.
Since you've already
He wondered
promised
how
me,
powerful
you're not
immortal
allowed
Lord
to join other
Crocodile's
sects
real
within
body
these
would
3
be.
years.
At this moment,
Otherwise,
dozens
don't
of
blame me
golden
for falling out
streams of
with you.
light
Deal.
flashed through the white
Yu Qianqiu
fog
promised
and stood in the
Shui
air with the
Mingqing
6
turned to
golden-robed
Master and
people.
bowed.
All of them
What do you think,
looked
Master?
battered.
There were
Master,
about 80 of them.
please make the final
group
decision.
stared at the giant
Master
snake's
looked at
corpse
Shui
below.
Mingqing for a
Was
while
it killed by you
and
guys?
slowly
Yes.
closed his eyes.
Why haven't the rest
Then
come
it's
out
settled.
yet? He
Haven't
waved
they
his hand
succeeded?
and removed
We
the
succeeded.
soundproof barrier.
Those
in
who
the
should
shop.
have come out have
Thank
come
you,
out.
Master. The rest
Shui
can't come out
Mingqing
and
bowed.
bowed.
The
We've
moment
lost
he
16
bowed,
people.
he suddenly
The
found
group
that
of
he had become
golden-robed
much
people
bolder.
fell
In the
into
past,
a short silence.
He wouldn't have
after
had the
talking.
guts to speak
Someone
to the elders
sighed
of
and
the
said,
sect like this.
"Let's go back and
At this
report.
moment, a
What
person
about this
passing by on the
giant
street
snake?
outside the
The
shop
autopsy
glanced
is worth
inside.
some money."
Then,
Although
he
Yu
turned
Qianqiu
around
was
and
not
walked
far
in.
away.
This person
He was
was
not
none
close
other
either.
than Du
In
Feng
addition,
of the
they
spirit
had their backs
cultivation
to him.
sect.
So he
He
could
walked
not
over
tell
with a
who was
smile
talking to who
and bowed to
One of the
Master.
golden-robed people
Greetings,
looked back at Yu
Senior.
Qianqiu and
Then
said,
he cupped
"This
his
thing
hands
has
to the
thick
2
skin
people
and
beside it.
flesh. Brother
It
Shui,
will take a lot of
brother
effort
Yu.
to dissect
Master
it.
smiled. Money is a small matter.
So it's a
Let's
child
go
from the Du
back and
family.
report. What brings
Let's
you
just
here?
treat it
This
as letting them
junior
off
is looking for
easy.
Brother Yu.
Let's
I
go.
have something to
The
discuss
group
with
of
him.
golden-robed
Du Feng
people
looked at Yu Qianqiu
shouted to
and
each
said,
other and
"I
turned
wonder
into
if Brother Yu is
streams of
free."
light that
He and
shot
Hui
into the
Yunlong
distance.
met outside.
Only the remains
before
of the
connection
giant
shop.
snake were
In
left
fact,
in place.
his goal was the
Yu
same.
Qianqiu
as
silently
Hui
recalled the
Yunlong's.
words of those
They were
people
both looking
just
for Yu
now.
Qianqiu.
He didn't know
It
what
was
the
just that
people
Hui
of the immortal
Yunlong said it,
palaces
but
were
he didn't.
doing, especially those words about whether they had succeeded
After learning
or
from
not,
Mu Tianjiao,
which made him stare
that Yu
suspiciously
Qianqiu
at the
still
dense
in
sea
this
of
area.
fog. The
Could
2
it be
cousins
that
went
there
their
were separate
separate
ways
ways
to
that
look
even the
for him?
immortal
Hui
palaces
Yunlong used the
coveted in it.
spirit of
Behind
a
him,
foolish old
a
man
group of
moving the
people
mountains
flew
to
over
search for
and
Yu
stopped
Qianqiu
beside
on
Yu
the streets.
Qianqiu,
While Du
looking at the
Feng
pile
quickly
of dead
thought
giant
of where Yu
snakes in
Qianqiu might
silence.
go.
They were
So he
Du
found Yu
Feng
Qianqiu
and the
one
others,
step ahead,
who could not
of Hui
withstand the
Yunlong.
aftershocks of the battle and had run away. All of a sudden, Du Feng noticed the blood stain on the corner
Chapter
of Yu Qianqiu's mouth
833.
and asked
Specifically
in
looking
surprise,
for me?
"You're
Yu
injured?"
Qianqiu looked at Du
"I'm
Feng
fine.
curiously
It's just a small
before
injury.
bowing to Master
It's not
Yu.
worth mentioning."
Then this junior
Yu
will take his
Qianqiu
leave
waved
first.
his hand
Master
and
Yu
pointed at the
nodded
remains
slightly
of the giant snake.
without saying a word.
"That thing is
Yu
ours.
Qianqiu
It
and
should be
Du
worth some money."
Feng left the Palace of Heaven's shop.
As soon as
Before
he finished
leaving,
speaking,
Yu
Hui
Qianqiu
Yunlong
and Shui
exclaimed in
Mingqing
surprise,
looked at each other
"So it's the
tacitly.
black dragon?"
According to his
Giant
previous
python.
plan of
In
coming
a
to the
flicker,
Palace of Heaven's
Hui
shop,
Yunlong landed
Yu
on the
Qianqiu
ground,
originally wanted
caressing
to
the
rely on
giant's
his
relationship
relationships
with Shui
compared to the
Mingqing
giant snake's
to visit the
remains.
Palace of
He
Heaven
looked like a
as
small
guest
pebble
or something.
Hui Yunlong
At the same
clicked
time,
his tongue.
he wanted to encourage
This is a good
Shui
thing.
Mingqing
The scales
to
on
find
its
a way
body
to
can be
steal
refined
some
into
recipes
many
for
sets
him.
of defense.
However,
Master
Yu
Yu's
Qianqiu
carrot
looked at
and
Du
stick
Feng
made
in
him
confusion,
understand that the
but the
old
latter
foxes
explained
of
with
the
a
Palace of
smile,
Heaven were not
"The
easy
mythical
to deal
fire
with.
palace is
It would
the
not
number
be
one
easy to
sect in
steal
the
pill
immortal
recipes
world."
from the Palace
Since
of
this
Heaven.
guy said
Although
so,
he had a way
it
to
can't be wrong.
encourage
Yu
Shui
Qianqiu's
Mingqing
figure
to take the
flickered,
risk,
standing on
it had
top
taken
of
a
the
lot
giant
of
snake's
effort
body,
to place a
staring
spy
at
in
Hui
the Palace
Yunlong
of Heaven.
below.
It was better
How
not
much
to
is this
act
broken snake
rashly
worth?
without
Hui
confidence.
Yunlong took a few
Otherwise,
steps back.
He would have to
looking at
accompany
the giant
spy
snake for a
he had
moment
nurtured.
before
At the
answering
same
in a solemn
time,
voice.
the Palace of
Around
Heaven
1
would
billion
definitely not let
divine
him off.
grade spirit
After
stones.
thinking about it again
Its
and again,
true value
he
depends
quickly
on
made
what
another
grade of
decision.
treasure
If
can
he
be
operated
refined
in the
into.
open and
This is
above-board
related
way,
to the level
he
of
would
the
still have a way to
artificer.
get what he wanted.
The higher the grade,
Just like what he had said
of the
to Master
refined
Yu.
treasure,
He wanted
the
to
more
establish his
valuable it
own
is.
chamber of commerce
Only 1
in the
billion?
celestial
F
world.
asterisk
He wanted to
CK,
openly develop his own
Mashi
forces. Yu
With a
Qianqiu
chamber of
was a little
commerce as a cover.
disappointed.
He could
didn't
smuggle
expect
those people
such a
from the
ferocious
cultivation
giant
world into
snake
the
to
celestial
only
world
be worth
and
1
settle
billion.
down.
Turning to Du
Seeing the
Feng,
2 of them
he
leave,
asked,
"What are
Master
these
Yu
immortal
slowly turned to look
palaces
at
people
Shui
doing?
Mingqing
Why do they
and
make this
said,
said,
beast.
"It seems
so
that our
angry.
palace of heaven
It seems
is
like
not
it's chasing
the only
after
one
them.
who wants to pull
Below,
him into the
Wei
sect."
Yunlong had already
Shui
summoned the
Mingqing
people from
gritted
the
his teeth
Li-Fire
and
Palace
replied,
A
"A
group
disciple
of
believes
disciples
that he
from
will
the
abide
Li-Fire
by the
Palace
3-year
touched
agreement.
the wounds
Since
of
you
a
can pull over
gigantic
300
serpent and
people from the
sprinkled
ruins
some
of God to
unknown
work for
liquid
you."
onto it.
Then Master
moment
believes
later,
in your
the
foresight.
wounds of the gigantic
Master, you
serpent
said
burst
lightly.
into flames
Master
as black
Yifuzzi
smoke
faintly
mixed with a
said,
disgusting
seeing
stench
how calm he
permeated the
is
air.
when dealing with
Yu
me.
Qianqiu
Perhaps he
and
will have some
Dufeng
achievements in the
immediately
future.
dodged far
I support
away
you
watch.
to deepen your
They saw that
relationship
the
with
flames
him
were
in the
using
future.
the flesh
Perhaps he
beneath
might
the
be able to help
scales
you in
as
the
fuel.
future. Quickly
burning
was
into the
stunned.
giant snake's
He bowed
body.
and said,
Black smoke rose
"Disciple
up,
understands."
and a foul smell
At this time,
spread far and
Yu
wide.
Qianqiu was standing on
Dufeng
top of the
frowned
mountain
as he
with
answered.
Dufeng.
Other than
Looking
collecting
around at
rare
the undulating
treasures,
granite
the
mountain
immortal
range
palaces
where
not
people
even a
usually
blade
come
of
here
grass
to look for
grew.
fierce beasts,
Yu
eggs,
Qianqiu
or
was a
baby
little
beasts that have yet
speechless.
to open their
This
eyes.
guy's actions were similar
Most likely,
to Mu
they were discovered by
Qianjiao's.
this giant
Could it be
snake
that he
when they were
also
trying to
wants
steal
me to
the
join the
eggs?
spirit
That's why they
cultivation sect?
chased after them.
Brother Du, you brought
Beast
me
eggs?
here. I
Baby
consider
beasts?
Brother Du a friend.
Yu
If
Qianqiu
Brother Du
was
has anything to
flabbergasted.
say,
Could
you
it
can
be
say
that they want to
directly.
tame a
There's no
fierce
need to
beast?
stand on ceremony.
Dufeng
Yu
shook his
Qianqiu
head.
said.
It's
Brother
impossible
Yu is
to
a
tame a
straightforward
fierce
person.
beast.
This is related to their ignorance.
It's
Dufeng
precisely
first
because
affirmed,
of their
then
ignorance
looked at him
that they're
with a
very
humble
stubborn.
face and
They
said with a
only
smile,
believe in the first
I wonder
person
if
they
Brother
see
Yu
when
has
they
any
open their
plans
eyes
after the divine
treating
ruin
them
realm
as their
gathering.
parents.
Yu Qianqiu
Otherwise,
looked around.
no matter
and
how
asked,
young the
from what Brother Du
ferocious
said,
beast you catch
do you have any
is,
good suggestions?
as long as it opens its eyes,
I won't beat
you
around
won't
the
be able to
bush,
tame it again.
so that Brother Yu
It would
won't.
rather starve to death
Dufeng
than
turned
eat a
around
mouthful
and
of
walked to
food
the edge of the
given
mountain.
to it by
He looked into
others.
the distance.
You will
and
never
said,
be able to raise it.
You should know that there are many sects in
You're
the
saying that
immortal
only
world
by
with a
bringing
long
back
history.
the beast
Each
eggs
sect has
and
many
baby
direct
beasts that have
descendants
yet
like
to open
me
their
and
eyes
Yunlong.
can they be tamed?
It's because there are too
Yu
many
Qianqiu
direct
asked.
descendants that it's difficult to stand
Dufeng
out in a
nodded.
sect. Not only
If we
can they
don't
be
produce
tamed,
results that
their
everyone
loyalty
is convinced
is
of,
also very high.
even if my father and Yunlong's
incomparably
father is
loyal,
an elder in the
the
sect,
kind that will never
it's not
betray
easy
you.
to
Many
forcefully
sects in the
support us.
immortal world
Yu
favor them
Qianqiu
because
walked
of their
to his side
absolute
and
loyalty.
stood side by side
until
with
the day
him,
they die,
admiring the
they will
unique mountain
absolutely
scenery.
obey you.
He said with a smile.
Never betray you.
Your relationship
a baby
with Hui
beast
Yunlong
or a
seems to
beast
be not
egg that has
ordinary.
yet to open its
Un-
eyes.
Our mothers
Even at the
are
lowest
blood-related
price
sisters.
can be sold for
My
more
mother
than
is his
10
mother's
billion
older
divine
sister.
grade spirit
We are
stones.
cousins.
It's just
So
that our
expensive?
sects are different.
Yu Qianqiu
Dufeng
asked
explained
suspiciously.
honestly. No
Yu
matter how
Qianqiu
loyal a
nodded and said,
ferocious
"So that's how
beast
it
cub
is.
is.
No wonder the
How long
relationship
will it
between
take to
your
raise
fathers
it to be
is
used?
not ordinary.
Dufeng had
You
gradually
two cousins
gotten used
risked
to
your
Hong
lives to
Xiaolong's
enter the
ignorance,
divine ruin
shaking
realm
his
together.
head with a smile.
Is there a reason?
Don't forget,
Or does it have something to
humans
do
are
with the
the
results
smartest.
that everyone
If a baby
is
beast
convinced of
is raised by a
Dufeng
fierce
nodded
beast,
and said,
it's still a
"Our
fierce
age
beast.
and
But
cultivation
humans
are
are
about the
different.
same.
We can
Both
use
of us
immortal
have our
pills
fathers
to awaken
to
its
rely on
intelligence
the
while it's
sect.
still young.
So it's not
allowing
difficult
it
for
to
us to
cultivate
raise
from
our
a young
cultivation
age.
to the immortal
With human
realm.
help,
What's
the
difficult
time it
is
takes
to
to
stand out among
cultivate
the
to
many
become
direct
an immortal
descendants,
beast,
then have a
won't
good
be
start
any
and
slower
walk
than
to a high
human
position
becoming
in the
an
sect step
immortal
by
realm
step.
master. After
In the
some
immortal
discussion,
world,
our parents'
people's hearts
spent a lot
are
of money
hard to fathom.
barely get
Only
the
immortal
position
beasts
of
will be
deputy deacon.
eternally loyal.
But because
to
we
you.
haven't made
Just
any
this point alone
contributions to the
can't be
sect,
measured with
there are
money.
many people in both
While the two of
sects
them
who
were
are quite
speaking,
dissatisfied.
the remains of the
That's
giant
why
serpent
Yunlong
had turned
and
into
I
an
went to the
empty
divine
shell,
ruin realm,
and the flesh and
we were able
blood
to come back
inside were
safe and
burned to
sound
ashes by
and
the
bring
raging
back
fire.
a lot of things
Finally,
without losing
Hui
a single
Yunlong
person.
strenuously
With our
stored the
father's
scales
help,
into his
our
storage
positions
bracelet,
as deputy
filling up
deacons
an entire
should be in the
space.
bag.
Finally
A trace
done,
of disdain
Yu Qianqiu's
flashed
gaze
in Yu
fell onto
Qianqiu's
the misty
eyes.
sea of fog.
Needless to say,
and he was
from
slightly
a situation in the divine
He suddenly
ruin
thought
realm.
of Nongzhu's
It could be
group
seen that the
that had been
disciples who
walking in this
accompanied the
direction.
two into the
Those
divine
fellows
ruin
didn't know the
realm
immensity
were probably
of heaven and
carefully
earth.
selected
They
by
didn't know the
Chiron
dangers
and
behind
holy
this
Inching
misty
to be
sea
cannon
of
fire.
fog.
At the
Did they
critical
barge in?
moment,
Then
they would
again,
definitely
he
protect
felt that it wasn't
the two
possible.
young masters
If
with
they
their
encountered
lives.
danger that they
If
couldn't
anything happened to
solve,
the two of them,
Nongzhu
it was
would
likely that
definitely
those
crush
disciples
the
would
Jade
die
stone
even
to
if they
ask
went
for
out.
help.
After
This
a
was
moment of
also
hesitation,
understandable.
Yu Qianqiu
Who told
said
them to
have a
Dufeng
good father, and the rest
Yu
were about to
Qianqiu
continue
asked
searching for
indifferently.
rare treasures.
How high is the
You
position
guys go
of
first.
deputy deacon?
I'll look for you later.
How high is the position?
Amidst everyone's exclamations, Yu
Brother
Qianqiu
Yu,
disappeared
that's an
into the
interesting
misty
analogy.
sea of fog.
Dufeng couldn't
He wasn't
help
trying
but
to search
laugh
for something
as he
in the
looked at
misty
him.
sea of fog.
Fortunately,
but he
he
was
was
using
already
the
used
thick
to the
fog
other party
as cover
asking
to return
retarded
to
questions
Utopia.
in the divine
After
ruin
searching
realm.
for a while in
So he was already
Utopia,
used to it.
Huang
He
Xiaolong
immediately
immediately
with a
locked
smile
onto
the
Nongzhu's
division of
position.
positions.
Although
in
he didn't give
celestial realm
Nongzhu the
is
little
actually
silver
pretty
ball,
much the same.
The Jade Stone
Their
in
apprentice
Nongzhu's hand
disciple,
contained a wisp
deacon
of his
divine
branch
sense.
leader,
So he could also
master,
find her.
protector,
Nongju was
elder,
walking,
consecrator,
and chatting with one
and sect
Lanfeng
master.
and the others
Before
with her hands
Shui
behind her
Minqing
back,
became a
pointing around
disciple
from
of
time to time.
Senior Yafuzi,
Cultivators
the way they
like
talked
him
and laughed,
who were at the
seemed
soul
to treat
formation
the divine
stage
ruin
and
below
below as
were
a
collectively
tourist resort.
referred to
And they
as
didn't seem to be
apprentice
on guard
in the
at all.
various sections.
Yu Qianqiu,
There are actually
who had
many
suddenly
so-called
appeared behind
deputy
them,
deacons,
found it both
who were the
funny
people
and
who managed the
infuriating.
apprentices.
He couldn't help but cough.
Yu
They
Qianqiu
suddenly turned
said,
around.
"So deputy
and Nongju
deacons
said
are
in
apprentices
surprise,
who have a little
"Why
bit
are you
of power
here?
for the first time.
Aren't you afraid
They're
of
still
exposing
quite a
yourself
distance
by
from the
being
real
with
deacons?"
us?"
Yu
The
Qianqiu
major
looked to
sects in the
both
celestial
sides
realm
and found
have
that
been
not
established
far
for
to his
many
right
years,
was the
so
thick
they
sea of
naturally
fog.
have a set of rules.
It seemed that these fellows
can't
were
be
sweeping
accomplished
along the
overnight.
edge of the sea
Basically,
of
they
fog,
progressed step
in the
by
opposite
step.
direction of
Otherwise,
Dufeng
with
and
so
the
many
others.
people in each
He
sect,
couldn't help but
it will
point
be
to the
easy
sea of
for
fog with a
things to get
smile and
messy.
said,
Dufeng shook his head
and
have a
smiled
look
bitterly.
They immediately
Although
looked
it's
at
just
each
a
other.
small deputy
Nongju
deacon.
waved her hand.
I've already
and
told
said,
brother you before
don't
that
mess
there are
around,
many
kid.
direct
We
descendants
caught someone
in
before
each sect
and asked them
so
why they've been
everyone's
going.
eyes are on
It
each other.
turns out that there are many
small
fierce
deputy
beasts
deacon
in there,
can be given to a
and that's a
person
place
with no
even
background.
a mortal realm
But no one
masters
is
don't
willing to
dare
fall into the
trespass.
hands of someone
Not to
with a
mention,
background.
we've
This
already
is because
gotten
a
a lot
person
of
without a
things. There's
background
no need to take
will
that
only
risk.
be a deputy
No matter
deacon
how much
if
money
they
we
become a
have.
deputy deacon.
It's not as
But
important
it's
as
different
our
for
lives.
those with a background.
Mother,
They have a
Kerr.
bright future,
They're really
which
cunning
is the starting
old
point for them
fools.
to rise
I
up.
underestimated
I'm sure, brother,
their
you already
intelligence,
understand what
making
I mean.
me worry.
I
for
thought that
nothing.
direct
You
descendants
Chinchos
like you who
face
have a
lit
backer
up with joy
would have a very
You got a lot of
comfortable
things?
life. How
But
many?
it seems that the internal
Everyone
strife
smiled
between
at each
the
other.
various
Then
sects
Nongju
is very
chuckled.
fierce.
There are more than
You Chincho
3,000
chuckled.
kinds of immortal
In
herbs.
each sect,
and
the
we've
higher up
collected
you
about
go,
half of
the
them
fewer
recorded
positions
in the
there
Jade
are.
archives.
For people of the same
Although most of them are
generation,
mid to
if you fall
low-grade
one
Jade
step
archives,
behind,
we
it's very
calculated
likely
based
that
on the
you will
market
fall
price,
behind,
and they're worth
in the
about
end,
this much.
you'll be suppressed
He
by
held up
others
2
for the rest
fingers.
of your life.
You
An immortal
Chincho's
cultivator's
eyes
life
lit up
is
200
endless,
billion divine
and no one is
great
willing to be
spirit
suppressed
stones.
by others for
Other
the rest
than
of
Liu
their life.
Yanqing.
In a
The
sect,
others laugh
you don't have a
in
choice.
unison.
You may not be the
Nongju
only
snickered.
one being
Not
suppressed.
200 billion,
Even your
but
future
2
children and
trillion
grandchildren
divine
will be
great spirit
implicated.
stones.
So it's
She took out a
inevitable that
Jade
you will
archive
fight in the dark.
passed it to Huang
Du
Xiaolong,
Feng sighed, saying,
TSK,
take a look, we
TSK.
categorize them
You can imagine
according to
that
the
behind the
prices in
scenes
Jade
of these famous
archives,
sects,
everything is
it's
listed
not
in
as
there.
simple as
2
fighting
trillion?
each other.
Yu
Maybe
Chincho
it's
was
a fight
dumbfounded
to the death.
He gulped as
Yu
he took the
Chincho
Jade
suddenly
archive,
said
and carefully
strangely,
examined it. Do the
As a
founding
result,
masters
he was
of your
shocked by
sects
what he
just
saw.
sit back
After a
and
long
watch their
time,
children kill
he
each other?
sighed and
Don't they
clicked
come
his
out
tongue as he
and do
said,
something?
although there aren't many high-grade spirit herbs here.
Du Feng
main
tilted his
goal
head
isn't
and
money.
looked at him.
It's enough
He slowly
as long
said
as we can
word by
gather the
word.
spirit herbs.
A sect
we
can't
urgently
rely
need.
on one founding
As he
master
said
to
this,
maintain
he was taken
its
aback.
normal
He
operation.
raised his head to look
It might
at the
be
others
possible
and
in the
said,
short term,
damn it,
but it won't last
how many
long.
people did you
In
guys
any
kill
big sect,
after robbing
good and
so
bad
many
are
things?
intermingled, and
Good
good
and bad are
Yanqing
mixed
bit her
together.
lips.
If you want a
and
sect
the
to
others
last,
looked at each other.
you need a large
Nongju
number
shook
of
his head
elite
with a
disciples
solemn
to
expression,
support it.
saying,
In a big
we
sect,
haven't counted them
if you
yet,
can't even
but
win
I'm
a fight
afraid
for
there
the
must
top
be
position,
more than 10,000
how can you be considered an
people?
elite disciple? On the other hand, if you can stand out in a big
Chapter
sect, you
825.
definitely won't be useless.
Yu Chincho was completely
Survival of the
speechless.
fittest.
A dignified
Yu Chincho
immortal
softly
disciple from
muttered.
the upper realm
He frowned
had actually been
and seemed to be
killed
thinking
by a
about
bunch of
something.
loafers.
After a while,
He couldn't help
asked
but reveal an
suspiciously,
expression of not
Brother
knowing
Du,
whether
you've
to
said
laugh
so
or
much,
cry.
but I don't
Seeing
understand
this,
what it has to do
Nongju
with me.
immediately
What does it have to do with you
and
looking
comforted
for
him.
me? I really
Yes.
didn't expect it to
Du
be like
Feng
this,
turned to face
but
him
what's done is
and
done.
said with a
The
sincere
dead
look,
can't be resurrected.
other than the apprentices
So what
in
else can
charge
we
of the
do?
deputy deacon.
Don't give me
They're
that.
also allowed
Yu
to
Chincho
develop
waved
a
his
certain
hand
proportion
and
of
said,
outer disciples.
we still have to live in the
course,
immortal realm.
those with a
in the
high
future.
cultivation level
You've
are
killed
not
so
people
many
who can
people.
develop at my level.
You've made
These
enemies
people
with at
are
least
the
a few
foundation
hundred
of the
sections.
deputy deacon's
Let me ask you,
achievements.
when you did it,
Once I
did you
become a
cut the
deputy
weeds
deacon
and eliminate
my
the roots?
father can only
If you want
use
to do
his
it,
power
do
from
it
the top.
thoroughly and
You can't send
cleanly.
people to help me
Don't leave
openly
too many
because
clues
everyone's
for
eyes
others
are
to
on
use
me.
against you.
If I can achieve
Otherwise,
outstanding
we'll have a
results
lot
as
of trouble
deputy
in the
deacon,
immortal realm.
when my
in the
cultivation
future.
level breaks,
You all have to
through
show your
the
faces
immortal
in the
realm
immortal
and
realm
becomes a
in the
disciple.
future.
My
It's
father
fine to
is
offend
confident
one or
that he
two
can fight
sects,
for the position
but
of deacon
offending
for me.
hundreds of
If
sects
everyone
is
works
no
together,
joke.
we can
They were
improve
all
one
stunned.
level at a time.
They thought that this guy
After talking for a
resented them
long
killing
time,
too many
I
people.
finally understand
But
what
who
you
knew
mean.
that he didn't
Yu
care about this at
Chincho
all?
rubbed his chin
Instead,
and said,
he
if
was
I'm not
afraid
wrong,
that they weren't ruthless
you want to develop
enough
me
and
as an
didn't care
outer
enough.
disciple after
He
you
had
become a
truly
deputy deacon.
underestimated
That's
the
right.
magnanimity
I've seen brother
of this
use ability
demon
with my
ghost
own eyes.
region torture
I'm afraid
envoy.
that no
Back
cultivator
then,
below the
he
immortal
had killed
realm is
people
a
like
match for
scything
me.
flax.
If I have
the corner
brother
of
use help,
Nongju's mouth
in a situation where
and she said
everyone has the
thoughtfully,
same level
it
of
should be more
competition.
thorough.
I'm already
Everyone
half a
is
step
anxious
ahead.
to get their
Du
hands
Feng
on the
couldn't
things
hold back
and would
his
rather
excitement,
kill the wrong
speaking
people
out his
and
final
let them
thought.
go.
Halfway
Come on.
through his excitement,
I've worried for nothing.
He noticed that Yu
These guys aren't
Chincho's
good people.
face showed
Yu
a lack of
Chincho
interest,
immersed his divine
as if he wasn't the
sense
least
into the
bit
Jade
interested.
archive.
Dufone
to check
suddenly
again.
came to a
After
realization.
confirming that the required
Brother
spirit
Yu,
herbs
don't
have been
misunderstand.
gathered, he raised his
I
head
absolutely
and said,
have no
"All right,
intention of
our
controlling
main
you.
goal has been achieved.
Developing you as
Gather
an
everyone.
outer disciple.
The day of the
is to
divine
prevent
ruin realms
people from
closing
gossiping
is
in
not
our
far
spirit
away.
cultivation.
I'm
Sect.
afraid that
You
something
and I
might
are
happen
still
if we
brothers.
stay here for too
Once
long.
I achieve enough
I'll send you back
results,
first.
if you no
Leave
longer
the
want to
alchemy
stay
to
in
me.
the spirit cultivation,
They looked at
sect,
each other.
Us father and
Nongju
son have the
said
ability
suspiciously
to return your freedom.
Although there are many
At the
types
same
of
time,
spirit herbs,
my father will
the
give you
quantity
10
of each type
billion
is
divine
not
grade
much.
spirit stones.
It seems that we can
as a
only
reward.
refine a few
Brother, what do you
immortal
think?
ascension pills. Hu Chansho nodded and said, "We've already discussed it. These people will leave
Chapter
the divine ruin realm
834,
sooner or later.
10 billion?
We're going to set
My
up an
current net
ambush
worth
at the exit.
is at least 2
that way,
trillion.
We'll
Yu
definitely
Qinsho
reap
muttered in
a
his heart
great
for a while.
harvest. He raised
As
his
he
hand
spoke,
and patted
he waved his
Dufain's
hand
decisively,
then turned
as
around with his
expected
hand
of an
behind his
elite who had
back.
been honed for
He
a
shook his
long
head
time.
and smiled
They were
bitterly.
indeed
Brother
incomparable to the
I appreciate your
disciples of other
kindness,
sections,
but I really can't
stop.
help you with this.
Yu Qianshou
To tell you
waved
the
his
truth,
hand and said,
Brother Du,
I've thought of
Elder
this method long
Yafuzi
ago,
tried to
but you
persuade
guys don't
me
know that the
to join the
immortal
ranks
palace's
of the
people
outer
are guarding the
disciples of
entrance of the
Skyward
divine
Palace.
ruin realm. Dufeng was taken aback.
Don't worry.
He then
With
remembered
these items
that
that are
Shui
worth
Mingqing
2
had
trillion,
experienced
they're the
divine
hope of
ruin
us
realm
cultivators
and had a
in the
good
mortal
relationship with
I will have a
Yu Qianshou.
way to let
It was not
everyone
difficult for
forge an
Yafuzi to
immortal body
understand that
and
Yafuzi
run
wanted to
freely
rope him
in
in.
this immortal world.
After all, seeing
Everyone
that everyone
wanted to
was still
recruit talents.
confused, he frowned and
Qianshou took out
asked,
the token and
Brother,
threw
you
it to
agree?
Nongzhu.
No.
This is the token
Yu
of the
Qianshou
biggest
turned
auction
around
house
and
and
shook
appraiser
his head.
house in the
I
immortal
rejected
world.
him.
It was
which
given to
made
me by the
Elder
granddaughter
Yafuzi
of Sect
unhappy.
leader Wan
Fortunately,
Gutong.
Brother
Shui
Shui
Mingqing
came forward
is a
to
disciple
smooth
of
things
the
over.
Heaven Palace.
Otherwise,
The largest
I'm afraid I
alchemy
won't be able to
sect in
leave
the immortal
Skyward
realm.
Palace's shop.
The red-haired guy who was
Dufeng's
with me
eyes
before
were filled with
is a
confusion.
disciple of the
He slowly
mythical Fire
asked,
Palace.
Since Brother
the
Yu's already
largest
rejected
alchemy
me,
sect in
why
the
won't he
immortal
help
realm.
me? Now
Is it
that
because the
everything
money
is
is
too
too
little
little
and we have
money
the
is not a
capital,
problem. It's up
this
to
can
me
be
to do
discussed
it.
again. Please believe
It's
me.
not about money.
It's just a matter of time.
Qianshou smiled
When the time comes,
indifferently. Everyone will
although
get
I'm a
what they
rogue
want.
cultivator,
They
I have a
examined
master.
the purple
How can I
gold
join
medallion.
another sect without
After
permission?
confirming that it wasn't
Besides,
a fake, when I
they looked at
rejected
Yu
Elder
Qianshou in
Yafuzi,
shock.
I promised
hadn't
him that if I
expected
want to
him
become an
to have
outer
connections
court
with
disciple
so
of
many
another
big
sect,
sects in the
Skyward
immortal
Palace
world.
will be my first
He really was
choice.
capable. Dufeng stood in
largest
silence for a
alchemy
long
sect?
time.
After
Why does that
a long
red-haired
time,
kid
he smiled
look like
bitterly.
Mian
I
Nongzhu
understand.
muttered as she
Elder
returned the
Yafuzi
token
is
to
really
Yu
good.
Qianshou. Forget it.
She then
I won't
asked
force
suspiciously.
It's not that I'm
Then
forced.
why did the granddaughter of
I'm
Wan
just
Gutong
powerless.
give you the
Yu
token?
Qianshou waved his
He
hand
asked the question
and
he was
smiled.
most concerned about.
But then again,
probably
if
because of
Dufeng
my
needs my
good
help,
character,
I don't
it's a
necessarily
private
have
matter.
to become
Why do you
an
care
outer
so
court
much?
disciple of the
Yu
Spirit
Qianshou gave a
Cultivation Sect.
perfunctory reply.
If there's anything you need,
He waved his
just let
hand
me know.
and said,
as long as it's
"Gather
within my
everyone.
power, I
Be
won't
careful.
refuse.
Don't let
Shui
Dufeng's
Mingqing
eyes lit up.
suspect our
Good.
origins.
Brother Yu's words
Although
are enough.
Nongzhu
I
was
trust
a little
Brother Yu.
unhappy.
She
Help
still
each
cooperated
other.
with
Help
Yu
each other.
Qianshou and the
After
others
laughing for a
to gather
while,
all the people.
Yu Qianshou coughed
After all the
and
people
said,
gathered,
Brother
Yu
Du has come
Qianshou
at the
sank
right
Shui
time.
Mingqing
I have something to
into the
ask
ground
Brother
again,
Du,
and led the
Please
group
do
of
not
people into the
hesitate to
thick
enlighten
white
me.
fog that was like
Go
a
ahead.
white wall.
Dufeng
After
raised his
returning to the
hand
underground
without
transportation
hesitation.
formation,
Yu Qianshou
the anxious
immediately
group
said
finally
with a serious
relaxed.
expression.
The reason why
I
they
talked
were
to Elder
anxious
Yafuzi
was because
about
they were
establishing
worried that
Yu
Yu
Qianshou
Qianshou
would
would
harm
harm
them.
them.
He
Now that
sneered
they
at
had
me
returned
for
to their
overestimating
homeland,
myself,
they were naturally
and said that
relieved.
establishing
Yu
a chamber of
Qianshou
commerce
led the group
would cost
back
a
to the
lot of
sacred
money.
palace that
I
the
wonder what the
underworld
expenses
saintess
are.
had opened up.
Dufeng looked him
He
up
gathered
and down in
everyone's
disbelief.
loot together.
Do you want to establish
including
your own
the
chamber of
99
commerce?
sets of
Please
illustrations
enlighten me.
and Jade
Yu
archives
Qianshou
that
nodded.
had been distributed.
Dufeng blanked
It wasn't
for a
that he was
moment,
stingy,
then shook
but he
his
still
head
had
and sighed.
use for these things.
Brother Yu is a
If he were
man
to
with
purchase
lofty
them on a
ambitions.
large scale again,
How could he submit
he was
to
afraid that
others?
it would arouse suspicion.
He kept all the immortal herbs. I was too
He did not
impulsive
take any
just
of the
now.
spirit stones.
Speaking of establishing
transcendent
chamber
artifacts,
artifacts,
it does cost a lot
He directly
of money.
threw them back.
Just obtaining the
into Nongzhu's
recognition from the
hands.
Chamber of
He
Commerce
looked around at the
Alliance
group
requires
and
10
said,
billion
Everyone,
divine
divide the
great spirit
remaining
stones to
things among
register.
yourselves.
And this is the
You guys
cheapest way to
decide
do it.
how you want to divide
Yu
them.
Qianshou was
I won't
dazed for
interfere.
a second.
It's best
I
if you
still
don't
need to
cause
register
any trouble.
Just the registration
These things are
cost
really nothing.
10 billion divine great spirit
There will be
stones.
many more good
So
things in the
expensive.
future.
Could it be
Everyone,
that there are different
please
levels
don't
of
hurt our
registration?
friendship.
After
Dufeng
all,
looked at Huang
we still have to work
Xiaolong
together in the
as if he was
future.
looking at a monster.
Everyone laughed.
He
and
paused
expressed that there was no
briefly
problem
before explaining.
Yu Qianshou
If you
smiled
spend
and
10
nodded.
billion divine
There are some
great
things that I don't
spirit
know if I should
stones
say.
to register.
With this
You can only
transportation
obtain the
formation
permission
to operate
leading to
one
the
type of
immortal
business.
realm.
There's
For
no
example,
point in
if you're
everyone
registered
fighting
fighting
over
commerce
things
deals
in
in
immortal
immortal
pills.
Let's just return
You're
the
only
human
allowed
realm
to sell
to the
immortal
mortals.
pills.
We from the
Not other
cultivation
businesses.
world shouldn't
Otherwise,
interfere.
you will be
If
heavily
possible,
punished by the
it's
Chamber
best
of
if
Commerce
everyone
Alliance.
brings all the
However,
forces
if you are
in your
willing to
hands
spend
here to
50
settle down.
billion divine
Also,
great
the
spirit
matter
stones to
between
register,
you and the
you can
cultivation
operate
world of
any
Huayan
business that the
should
Immortal
also
Palace
stop.
allows. The so-called
Spending
Starbead has
50
actually been
billion
brought back
divine
to the
great
underworld
spirit
by the Virgin of the Underworld
just for registration.
Even if you turn the
Yu
cultivation
Qinsho
world
exclaimed,
of Huaxia
"Is this the
upside
Chamber
down,
of Commerce Alliance?
you won't be able to find
or the
it.
Band of Alliance?
Let's stop here.
Can I
I'll
not
take
register?
the immortal herbs with
Yeah.
me."
Everyone,
Dufeng
stay in
subconsciously
the human
looked
realm
around and wait for
wry
my
smile
good
on
news.
his face.
I'll go back to
Brother
the
Yu,
immortal realm
be
first.
careful with your
As
words.
soon as Yu Qinsho
The Chamber
turned
of
around,
Commerce Alliance
he suddenly
was
turned back
established
to
by
the
the
group
Immortal
and
Palace
said,
to
"By the
manage
way,
all the businesses.
you better
in
take
the
turns to
immortal
guard
world.
here.
If you
Don't
want to
let
open your own
anyone
business
with
in the
bad
immortal
intentions
world,
destroy
you have
the
no
transportation
choice but to pay the
formation.
money.
Otherwise,
Once you're discovered,
your efforts
I'm
will be in
afraid
vain.
At
no
the same
one in the
time,
immortal world
it will
would
be
dare to
convenient
go
for me to find
against the
you.
immortal palace.
Also about this
in
trip
fact,
to the immortal realm,
if you don't have the
just keep it to
Chamber of
yourselves.
Commerce Alliance,
Don't reveal it to your disciples
no one will want to do business
or anyone
with you.
else. This matter needs to be
was
kept
rendered
secret for the
speechless.
time being. He stood in silence
After
for
that,
a long time.
he flashed into
gritting
the
his teeth.
underground
Black.
passage and
It's
disappeared.
2F.
Everyone
Asterisk
looked
King
at each
Black.
other for a long time.
It seems like it's impossible
Gnomes
to
who
have your
wave your
own
arm
chamber
and
of
said,
commerce in the immortal
"Let's divide
world
the things
without
first."
paying the money.
The quiet
You can say
divine
that.
hall
Dufone
suddenly became
pondered for a
lively.
moment. All
Then
kinds
said,
of voices.
This amount of
mixed
money
together.
might seem
Finally,
like a lot.
it was time to
But
share
if
the
the Chamber of
fruits
Commerce
victory.
manages it well,
The carvings on the
and can
dark
last for a
stone
long
walls
time,
seem to be
it can't
silently
be considered a
watching them.
loss.
Paying this amount of
went
money,
straight back to
you can enjoy the
Utopia.
Chamber of
Inside
Commerce
the
Alliance's
ethereal
protection.
palace,
He
to
called
a
by
certain
Sujin
extent.
and
For
Chu
example,
Pinger over. Other chambers
he
of
took
commerce
two
wouldn't dare
valuable
to
immortal
swindle
herbs,
or
the
deceive
kind
you
that
in
had
doing business
multiple
with them.
immortal herbs,
Keeping one's word
and
as
gave
the
the
Chamber of
rest to the
Commerce
two girls.
Alliance's
He
ironclad
solemnly
rule.
instructed
If
the two of
anyone
them
dares
to
to
personally
violate it,
watch over
they will
the
be
planting of
severely
this batch
punished.
of immortal
Secondly,
herbs.
the
until
Chamber
they
of
had
Commerce
harvested the
Alliance
seeds
will
of the
hold
immortal
regular
herbs
gatherings,
as reserves.
which is a good opportunity.
Only then would he
for
hand them
various
over
chambers
to
of
someone
commerce
else to watch
to earn
over.
some money.
When the two
So that's how
girls
it is.
learned that this
After
batch
a round of
immortal
persuasion
herbs came from the
Yu
immortal
Qianzhou's
realm,
anger
they were extremely
finally
shocked.
subsided. Chu Pinger's eyes flickered as she said,
You
"What
went
made
to
him
the immortal
depressed
realm
was that
Yu
he wanted to
Qianzhou laughed
establish a
heartily
chamber
and
of
said,
commerce that could
"Of
do
course.
any kind of business.
Just wait.
But where
It
was he
won't
going
be
to find
long
50
before I bring
billion
all of you
divine
to the
great
immortal
spirit
realms
stones
for a stroll."
It was true that his net worth was high.
This batch of
But he didn't
immortal
have that
herbs
much
is
money.
related to
If he
whether
were to
we
sell
can
a
establish
large batch of
foothold
immortal
in the
herbs
immortal
now,
realm.
it would
So,
definitely
I'll have to
arouse
trouble the two of
suspicion.
you to cultivate
How should he
them
solve this
as
problem?
soon as possible.
Looking at the frowning Yu Qianzhou, there are
Dufone
illustrations
probed.
of all
Brother
kinds of
Yu,
immortal
are
herbs.
you
in
worried
here.
about spirit
They record the
stones?
growth habits
Yes, sir.
of
This
various
is not a small
immortal
amount of money.
herbs.
It's
You can
very
refer to them.
difficult.
He had
Yu
just given
Qianzhou
two sets
sighed,
of illustrations,
shaking his head.
and Jade
All of a
archived
sudden,
to the two
his
girls
eyes lit
when
up,
someone outside
looking at
reported that
Dufone.
Zhang
I
Peng
wonder
had
if
arrived.
brother
Chu
Yu has
Pinger
enough
had
money
wanted
on
to
hand.
stay with him for a
If you
while
do,
longer. Can
but
you
temporarily
temporarily
lend me
important matters to
50
attend
billion
to?
divine
She had no
great
choice
spirit
but to go
stones?
out with Bai
Don't
Sujin.
worry.
I'll
Zhang
think of a
Peng
way
was
to
summoned
return
by
it to you in no
Qianzhou
time.
himself.
50
He took
billion.
out 80 sets of
Dufone jumped in
illustrations
fright.
in Jade
His
archives
face twitched
and gave
Brother
them
Yu,
to
are you
Zhang
joking?
Peng.
He then
Where would I
asked
find
Zhang
so
Peng
much
about the
money to lend
situation
you?
of
If
Utopia's
it was a few
army.
hundred million,
The master
I could still
and
find a way to
disciple met
satisfy
and
you.
discuss for
But
a
50
long
billion
time
before
This
parting
is
ways.
too
When
exaggerated.
they left,
Brother
Zhang
Peng's
Du,
expression was
you're being
a little
solemn.
unreasonable.
While Yu Qianzhou
Qianzhou
rubbed
from
his
the room.
chin.
After
His face
returning to the
filled with
divine
doubt.
ruin realm,
Didn't you say that if I
Qianzhou
lend you
took a look
hand,
at his surroundings.
your father will give me
His gaze
10
was fixed on the
billion
depths of the
divine
white
great
fog,
spirit
which was like a
stones?
white wall.
You even said
He had
that
always
money
wanted to see
isn't a
what was going
problem
on
and
inside,
can be discussed.
and whether there were any
Don't tell me it's
unknown
all a lie.
secrets hidden inside.
However,
Dufone blanked for
when
a
he
second,
thought of how
then
ferocious
smiled
that
wryly.
huge snake
Why would I lie
was,
to you?
he was
Brother
somewhat
Yu,
apprehensive.
You overestimated
In the
his
end,
father
he gave
and
up
son.
and planned to
I
go
already
in
said
and
that
take a
even
look
if
when the
it's 10
conditions were
billion
right.
divine
After summoning
great
Shui
spirit stones,
Mingqing out from
my
underground,
father will think of a
Shui
way to
Mingqing
raise
looked
it
around
slowly.
and asked,
It's
"Where did they
impossible
go?"
for him to take
Yu
out 10
Qianzhou
billion
smiled as he took
divine
out two
great
immortal
spirit
herbs
stones
in a
handed
short
them to
time.
him. It's
Saying,
true that my
"Back
father
then,
is an elder
you gave
of the
me
spiritual
one immortal
cultivation
herb.
sect.
Now,
And it's also
I'm returning
true
the
that
two
the
to you.
spiritual
I
cultivation
didn't
sect
mistreat
is
you, did
rich,
I?
but without a good
Tri-element
reason.
divine
It's
fruits.
impossible to use
Shui
such a
Mingqing
large
explained.
amount of public property.
He took the two
Not to
tri-element
mention,
divine
you want 50
fruits
billion
and
divine
asked
great spirit
doubtfully,
stones. This
"Are you really
I'm
giving
really
them to me?"
powerless. Yu
Forget
Qianzhou
it.
immediately
Don't say
patted
anymore.
his chest and
I'll
boasted,
think of another way.
I'm a person who doesn't care about
Qianzhou
anything,
waved his hand
but I
weakly,
always keep my promises.
walking to the edge of the
I never go
mountain
back on my
and
word.
sitting down.
I promised
He closed
to give
his
you the
eyes and
immortal
fell
herbs
into
when I
deep
return to the
thought.
sect.
His
So
entire
naturally,
being
I have to
listless.
fulfill my promise.
Just like this,
The
Brother
two of them
Shui,
stood there.
you
in
don't
a
have to
deadlock
doubt
for a
me.
long time.
How could Shui
Dufone
Mingqing
strolled
know
on the top
that
of the
Huang
mountain,
Xiaolong
looking at
was
the
kind of
surrounding
person who would
scenery
flaunt his
over
good
and
points
over again
and eat them
until he had
as if they were
engraved
food?
all the
Shui
surrounding
Mingqing
terrain
held the
into his mind.
immortal herbs in
He
his
felt a
hands
little
and
uncomfortable,
fell silent
so he
for a
walked
long
behind
time.
Yu Qianzhou.
The rims of
and
his
coughed.
eyes actually
Brother
turned
Yu,
slightly
we can
red.
think of a way slowly.
Finally, there's no
he slowly
rush.
raised his
Let's
head
go back
and
first.
said,
Go
I
back.
recognize you
Yu
as a friend.
Qianzhou raised his
I know
head
you're a
and
capable
looked
person,
around.
As
facing
long
the
as you don't
mountain
mind.
wind. He
In his
muttered,
life,
go back
other than his
where-
parents,
Where can I
no
go?
one had ever
Is this
treated
my
him
home?
so well.
My home is in a very,
Two
very far
tri-element
away
divine
place,
fruits
too
worth
far away.
600 million divine great spirit stones were given to him.
Although I've
just
always
like
wanted
that.
to go back.
He understood
I can't
that he
even
had
find a
avenged
way
his
home.
fellow Sect
How do you want to
members'
go
death.
back?
I'm
If
like
he
a
brought these
migratory
two
bird that's
immortal
searching
herds
for
back
its
with
final
him.
home. There is no
I've been
doubt
trying my
that the
best
path
to
of
fly,
cultivation in
but I'm not
Skyward
even as
Palace
good
would be
as a
completely
migratory
open
bird.
to him.
Although
Little
I've
did he
never
know
stopped
that Echincho
and have been
was a
trying my
person
best
who
to
was
fly.
not afraid
But
of
there's
spending
really no
money.
way to go back.
There's no way to go back.
As long as he could
his
achieve
slightly
his goal,
hoarse
forget
voice
600
was
million,
full of desolation.
he would even spend
making
6 billion
Dufone feel a
and
little
600
sorry
billion
for him without
Dufone didn't
hesitation.
know why he suddenly
Of course,
became so
the
sad.
premise was that the
He opened
return
his mouth
must
a
be
few
greater
times,
than his investment,
but stopped himself.
Otherwise,
in
he would
the
be
end,
very
he couldn't
stingy,
help but ask,
splitting a piece
"Brother,
of
you,
spirit stone.
why don't
into
I
two
understand what you
petals.
mean?
Where's your home? Yu Qianqiu suddenly came to his senses.
Chapter 8:26.
The inexplicable
Stop being
sadness
so
hidden in the
disgusting.
deepest part of
Let's
his
go
heart and get
was
ready to
unintentionally
leave the
aroused
divine ruin realm
and quickly restrained.
Yu Qianqiu
His
patted
eyes
him
regained
and
their
pulled him
clarity.
along the
He
white
turned his
fog
head to
wall.
look at Du
Shui
Feng
Mingqing
behind him
looked in the
and
direction
laughed.
and
For a
asked
cultivator,
suspiciously, "Everywhere
aren't you going to
is his
leave the
home.
divine ruin
You should go
realm?
back first.
I was hired by
Damn
the
it.
Four Links
I
Chamber
still
of
have to
Commerce.
think of where to get
Naturally,
the 50 billion.
I have to find
I
them
have
and
to
go out
establish
together.
my own chamber
Yu
of commerce."
Qianqiu explained with
You
a
should go back
smile.
first.
The two of them flew
He sat
all
there
the way
and waved his
began to
hand
chat.
to
Under the
signal
guidance of
Du
Yu Feng to
Qianqiu.
go first.
The two of them
Du Feng
discussed
shook
what
his
to
head
do after
speechlessly,
leaving, cupped his
in less than
hands
half a
and
day.
left. The two of
After
them finally
watching
caught
Du
up with Du
Feng
Feng,
leave,
and the
Yu
others who were
Qianqiu
following
also
the
stood
fog
up
wall in the
and stood at the
opposite
peak of the
direction.
mountain with his
Everyone
hands
had been
behind his
worried
back.
that something would
His
happen to
eyes
him
glimmered
when
as
he
he
entered
looked
the
at the depths
distant
of the fog.
horizon. Now that he
Thinking of
had
a
returned
safe way
safely
to get the 50
they were
billion.
finally relieved.
However,
not long after,
seeing that he had brought
someone
Shui
shouted from
Mingqing
afar,
along,
"Brother,
they all
Yu."
felt a
Yu
little
Qianqiu
curious.
turned his head.
No one
and
knew the
saw
relationship
a red
between the
shadow
two of them
shooting towards
Shui
him.
Mingqing,
Hui Yunlong's
a
voice
disciple
came,
of Chao
and he
Tian
landed in
Palace.
front of him.
Everyone
Hui
should have met
Yunlong laughed.
before.
Brother
Yu
Yu
Qianqiu pointed at
you
Shui
really made me look for
Mingqing
you
and smiled.
I finally
My
found
new
you.
friend.
Yu
If
Qianqiu
you don't
was
mind,
speechless.
you might as well make
Needless
friends.
to say,
It must be
Spirit
Du Feng
cultivation,
who leaked his
Sect
location.
disciple
No
Du
one
Feng.
else knew that
Mythical
he was
Fire
here.
Palace.
Damn it.
Disciple
You really know
Hui
how to
Yunlong.
conduct yourself.
Four Links Chamber
First,
of Commerce.
you took me
has
to a
moved
remote
Tianjiao.
place to ask
The three
all
of
you
them
wanted.
immediately
Then when you found
introduced
out that there was no
themselves
hope,
politely.
you went to your
not
cousin's
daring
place
to
to be a
show
good
the
person.
slightest bit of
As Yu
contempt.
Qianqiu
It
expected,
had to be known that
after
Shui
a few
Mingqing
words,
had
Hui
gathered
Yunlong
more than
said the
300
same thing
disciples
as Du
for
Feng.
revenge.
He wanted to make
It could
him
be said that
an
everyone was
disciple
shocked.
of the mythical
A
Fire
person with
Palace.
such
Yu
rallying
Qianqiu
power
had no
even
choice
if he didn't have the
but to
support of the
politely
sect
repeat
behind
his
him,
rejection of
he would
Du
still
Feng
be an
to
extraordinary
Hui Yunlong.
person. Everyone
Causing
had been
Hui Yunlong
secretly
to be
eager
unable
to
to
make
smile.
friends with him.
However,
But they didn't expect to be
Qianqiu
called over
still
by Yu
treated
Qianqiu.
They all
Yunlong
secretly
differently
admired
because he
Yu
considered that after the
Qianqiu's
group of people
communication
from the
skills.
cultivation world came,
Shui Mingqing
they would
greets my
definitely
friends.
change the
I
fellows
hope to have
who were
more
fighting to a
contact
higher
in the
level.
future.
Moreover,
Shui Mingqing
in the
cupped his
future, when he
fists.
established
Although
his
he didn't
chamber
know
of
the
commerce,
origin of the
he would
Four Links
definitely
Chamber
have
of
to deal with him
Commerce.
frequently.
He knew that the
So
spirit
it was better to
cultivation
have a
sect
good relationship
and a mythical
with the
fire
number
palace
one
were among the
blacksmith
top
sect in the
50
celestial
sects
world.
in the immortal world.
To be able to make such friends would not be
Therefore,
bad for his
he
future
repeatedly
cultivation.
patted his chest
Du Feng's
and
eyes lit up
promised that if
and
there was
said,
anything that he
to be
needed
able to
help
meet
with in
such
the
an
future,
outstanding
he would just let him
talent
know.
like Brother Shui,
If he could do it,
I
he
can't
would
ask
do
for
it.
more.
If he couldn't,
Hui Yunlong
he would think
smiled
of ways
and
to
nodded.
do it.
That's right. It's my honor. Since we are friends, there is no need to be so polite. Shui Mingqing waved his hand in
Chapter
shame.
8:35.
He secretly glanced
Huang
at Yu Qianqiu,
Xiaolong had really
and his
grasped
heart
Hui
was
Yunlong's
filled with
pulse.
gratitude.
A straightforward
If he hadn't been
person
lucky enough
like
to
Hui
meet Yu
Yunlong
Qianqiu,
would never be
he would
able
have
to
lost his
withstand
life
words
long
like,
ago.
How
Willing
could he
to
still stand
sacrifice
here
oneself
and make friends
for
with
a
the
brother.
disciples of other
Hui
big
Yunlong
sects?
was so
Yu
moved that he
Qianqiu
nearly
smiled
smacked
and
a
said,
hole in his chest.
Brother Du,
He did not
Brother
say anything
Yunlong,
else.
we're all friends
Merely
now.
telling Yu
I'm afraid
Qianqiu
I'll
that
need
if
your
there
help
was
with something
anything he
when we
needed
get
help
out.
with, he would do it.
Even if he
As
couldn't,
he spoke,
he would
he
think a
raised
way
his
to help.
hand and
Yu
pointed at
Qianqiu
Shui
laughed
Mingqing.
like an old fox
Everyone
that had
saw
just
how
stolen
Brother
chicken.
Shui
He patted
Hua
gathered
Yunlong's
people to
shoulder
take revenge.
and nodded repeatedly.
Brother Shui's fellow
Brother
disciples
Yunlong's
from
words
Skyward
reminded
Palace
me of
were all
something.
killed by
I wonder if
Heartless
Brother
Palace.
Yunlong
I'm
lend me
afraid
50
that after
billion
you go out,
divine
you will
great spirit
inevitably
stone.
be scolded by
Don't
your
worry.
sect.
I'll
I hope
return
the
it to
two of
you
you
in
can
the
use
shortest
the
time
influence
possible.
of your big sects
Hee
to
hee.
support
Yeah.
Brother Shui
Hui
after you
Yunlong's
leave,
smile
so that
stiffened.
he won't have a
His
hard
eyes
time
nearly popped
explaining
out of their
himself to the
sockets.
sect.
He swallowed with
Yunlong
difficulty,
immediately
stuttering
asked
as
curiously,
curiously.
How
Brother
much?
Shui has so
50
many
billion
friends from other
divine
sects to
great
help you.
spirit stones?
You could just pull some of
You're
them
saying
out,
you want to
right?
borrow
Shui
50
Mingqing
billion
smiled
divine
bitterly and
great
said,
spirit stones
Brother
for me?
Yunlong
Yeah,
might not know,
Yu Qianqiu
but those
sighed
friends are from some
inwardly.
small sections.
From Hui Yunlong's
Helping me
expression,
take revenge
it was
this
obvious
time
that a
is
single
equivalent
sentence from Hui
to offending
Yunlong
Heartless
had frightened
Palace
him to the
and a
point
few
that he
other
couldn't
large
speak
sections.
clearly.
Fortunately,
Hui Yunlong
they are
definitely
not
wouldn't be
famous,
able to take
so
out
no one knows
that
them.
much money.
How can I pull them out
Xiaolong laughed and let Heartless Palace see them and hold a grudge. Just a joke. Brother Yunlong need not take it hard. But the two of you are different. SHH. Both of you are disciples from Yunlong's expression relaxed. Heartless Palace, exhaling and the other sects will not become enemies with there was still lingering fear in his heart. Few disciples. Brother, you really gave me a fright. I thought, brother, you really wanted to borrow 50 billion divine. If it is not, then don't force yourself. You have to know that even if I were to be sold, I wouldn't be able to get that much money. These words were taught to him by you. Really gave me a fright along the way. It's just a joke. Don't take it seriously. Yu Qianshou consoled. This matter was a chance for him to make a name for himself. The two of them chatted about handled it brotherly love. He would fight for his own position. They returned home. In the next few days, he would be like a flash in the pan. Who was homeless. He could only be in the limelight, stayed in the mythical fire, and then become a mediocre disciple. He would try his best to build a good relationship with everyone in the shop. Painted a beautiful prospect. Well, lynching was his main target. and it
Secondly,
immediately
when he
caused
was free,
Shui
Huang
Mingqing's
Xiaolong
heart
would
to
stroll the
palpitate
streets with
excitement.
Hui Yunlong.
He asked Yu
asking him
Qianqiu
about
several
matters related
times
to the immortal
excitedly
world
and
deepening his
apprehensively
understanding
really
of the
feasible.
immortal world.
Yu
Ever since
Qianqiu
the first
only
time he
said
went to the
one
Four Links
sentence,
Chamber of Commerce
"Brother,
to collect
I
his
will do my
100
best to
million
help."
divine
He had
great
seen Yu
spirit stones
Qianqiu's
commission.
ability
Huang
and
Xiaolong had
capability.
found an excuse
After
to bring
thinking
Hui
for a
Yunlong
while,
to the
Shui
Four Links
Mingqing
Chamber of Commerce's
immediately
shops.
clenched his teeth
Hui Yunlong
and
was
decided
never
to go
tired
all
of
out
this,
for the sake of his
willing
future.
to listen to Du
Feng's
Feng
rotten
nodded
excuses
slightly and said, "I see. Brother Shui is affectionate
After
and
that,
loyal.
no one knew
No
what
wonder you
happened.
can make so many
But
friends."
Du Feng also
I,
went to the
Du Feng,
mythical fire
will do my
palace
best to
shop
help you
every
in this
day,
matter.
using the
Hui
excuse
Yunlong
that he
patted
wanted
his
to have
chest
fun together
and said,
to hitch a ride
"Brother
to the
Shui,
Four Links
don't
Merchant
worry.
Guild shop
I will
every
definitely
day."
think of a way
After
to give
some
you
time,
face."
the father,
Although Mu
daughter
Tianjiao,
pair,
Long,
who was at the
and Li
side,
understood what
also wanted
Xiaolong
to
was
express
doing.
her support.
That Yu
She
Qianqiu
knew
was
that
just
her
a Four
foil.
Links Chamber of
The two
Commerce
people who
was
were
really
always
unknown.
hinting at Mu
If she were to
Tianjiao
offer her support
were
now,
obviously interested
she would be
in the young
suspected
lady
of
the Mu
benefiting
clan.
from it.
Although
Therefore,
Mu Tianjiao
she simply remained
accompanied
silent.
them, talking
Yu
and
Qianqiu looked
laughing.
at this scene.
She was
with a
neither
smile.
humble nor
This was right.
respectful.
This was
neither
the
too
effect he
close nor
needed,
too far,
deepening their friendship.
If he
Whenever
wanted
the
Shui
two of them
Mingqing
showed
to play
any
a role
signs
in
of wanting
Skyward
to do
Palace
something
and
obvious,
help him,
he first had to promote
a smart
him
person,
and let him have
would
a say in
feign
Skyward
ignorance.
Palace. Yu Qianqiu, the giant,
who would not even
third
have a
wheel,
right to speak,
was watching the
so
fun
how could he
from
help
the
him?
side. As
When he
long
first
as decided to
Mingqing
establish the
told
Chamber of
this
Commerce,
lie,
he had
it would be
considered whether he
equivalent
should
to
make
boarding
use
his
of Mu
pirate ship.
Tianjiao. If he wanted him
and
to sit
take over the
firmly on his
Four Links
pirate
Chamber
ship,
Commerce.
he had to use
That
fame
way,
and
he could
fortune
save
to tie
50
him down.
billion divine
Then
great
he would work
spirit
hard to
stones,
row this
but he
pirate
gave up
ship
on the
with him.
idea.
Once a
If he
mediocre
had to
disciple
establish
had
his
tasted
own
the
chamber
taste
of
of
commerce
fame
in the
immortal
immortal
world,
how could he
then
bear
to
to give up
be the Four
Du
Links
Feng
Chamber of Commerce
and Hui Yunlong,
the famous
did
under the
not
heavens
know the
trading
inside
house.
story.
They agreed to help
died in
because they
battle
wanted to
in
use
order
Shui
to defend
Mingqing
against the
to
powerful
improve
enemies
themselves.
of the immortal
After
world.
this,
This was
Shui
a kind of
Mingqing
spirit,
would definitely
and
become
if this
famous.
spirit was brought
and it
to
was
the immortal
more or
world,
less beneficial.
it would
to be
become
his
a
friend.
strong, cohesive
Besides,
force.
in the previous
a
battle,
strong,
the two clans were
centripetal
already
force.
at odds.
Yu
with the Heartless
Qianqiu
Palace.
believed that
Whether
as
they helped
long as
Shui
the signboard of the
Mingqing
Under
or
the
not,
Heavens trading
the
house
result
would
would
be the
established in the
Both
immortal
sides had
world.
benefits.
It would
but they
definitely
didn't
give
know
those
that
cultivators who left their homes
who
to
was
smiling at
in
the
the
side
immortal world
had planned
sense of
everything,
belonging.
hiding
They
behind
wouldn't be
the
like
scenes
him,
and waiting to
feeling
cut off the
homeless.
benefits that belonged
Secondly,
to him. Baikong's
Shui
Under the Heavens
Mingqing
trading
thanks
house
you in
had left
advance.
behind a
Shui
large number
Mingqing
of
cupped his
business
fists
elites,
and
once
said,
they gathered
"If you
in the
need
immortal
Shui
world,
Mingqing's help
it
in
would
the
be the time
future,
for them to
don't
display
hesitate
their
to
skills
ask.
in this vast
Friends
land.
should help each other.
At that time,
Brother Shui,
he wouldn't
you're
need to
too
worry
polite.
about anything.
Du Feng
He only
and
needed
Hui
to grasp
Yunlong
the
were
direction
showing
behind the
off their
scenes.
generosity.
Presumably,
Yu Qianqiu
they would also be
waved his
very
hand
willing to
and
let the
scolded
Under the
with a
Heavens
smile.
trading
Stop
house
disgusting
flourish
people here.
everywhere in the
Everyone,
immortal world.
get ready.
Especially
if you have anything to
Sikong
say,
Ju and
say it
Jing
after
Yuankong.
leaving the
This was
divine
called
ruin
walking
realm.
the dignified
Leave?
path of a king.
Hui Yunlong
winning
turned
over
his
the
head in
hearts of
shock
people.
and said,
"One must know
you mean
that
to
the
leave
will
the
of the
divine
people
ruin realm
couldn't
now?"
be changed
Yu Qianqiu
no matter
smiled
how
and
much money
nodded.
you had.
Du Feng
Because of
immediately
this,
frowned
Yu
and
Qianqiu
said,
decided
"There
to
is still
fork
about
out
10
this
days
sum
before the
money
closed-door
regardless of the
training
cost.
in the divine
At the very
ruin realm.
least,
If
we
we
would just
leave
treat it
so
as
early,
spending money to remember
I'm afraid it won't be
Baikong.
easy to report
He hoped
back
that
to the
Im
Sect.
Baikong was
I'll give you
somehow
a good
aware
reason.
of this. You can tell your
Hope that
masters
he would
about
smile
it.
when he found
Yu
out that the
Qianqiu
Under the
waved
Heavens
his hand
trading house
and
he
pointed
founded
around
had taken
with
root
a hint
in the
of pointing at
immortal
the
world.
country.
Thinking
Along
about
the
it this
way,
way,
you have all
Yu
seen
Qianqiu felt
situations
that this sum
the
of money
various sects
was
have
well
already
spent.
set off the wind of teaming up to snatch. Since we have already teamed
Wang
up,
Gutong's
and I have
shop
helped you take
in the
revenge,
innermost compartment,
you must
although
also
it was
help me
simple
take
and
revenge.
crude
In
it
such a
didn't lose its
situation,
elegance.
in the following
room was
days,
filled with
it will
the faint
definitely become
fragrance
more
of
and
a
more
woman.
intense.
The graceful
setting
and
off
graceful
a storm of
Wanling's
slaughter.
eyes
I'm afraid it will be
flickered with
difficult
shrewdness
to stop.
and experience.
The more people die,
She raised her hand,
the easier
and
it is
dismissed
for
the disciple
all kinds
who
of
had finished
treasures to be
reporting the
concentrated in the
situation
hands of a
with
few
light
people.
steps,
and the
she took out
easier
a
it is
Jade
for people to be
archive from the
jealous.
shelf on the side.
If we don't go
and
out now,
stroked it in her hand. When everyone's eyes flickered as she pondered quietly, it will be difficult for us not to be implicated. Mugu, everyone was slightly shocked when they exchanged glances, thinking about although they bore the title of elder. Mu Qianjiao looked at Yu Qianjiao with a strange light in her eyes. They were wandering cultivators, and she bit her lip brothers that one Gutong, and no one knew what she was thinking. One blushing. Yu Qianjiao paused for a moment before continuing. In order to thank Wan blushing for saving this precedent is set, the three I'm afraid that the next time the divine ruin realm followed one blushing, the various sects will discuss the matter of teaming up before they even enter the divine ruin. The three of them were outer so that their disciples won't be, but in reality, their positions in the entire Wan Gutong actually to those famous sects, blushing, losing no one else had the authority or dared a few losses. Wan Ling was the only daughter losing face is a big late eldest son. Brother Yu is right. Deeply such a thing may indeed happen.
Dufeng looked at everyone
she was
with a
quite
serious
capable,
expression,
so
and
Wan,
nodded.
blushing,
Looks
gave
like
her
we
a
really have to go out
transcendent
early.
status. What do you think?
Wan Gutong's
Then let's
advisor
go.
could
Wu
oversee the
Yunlong
matters
agreed.
within the
Mu
sect,
Tianjiao
but she had
bowed
no
slightly
authority
and
over
said,
Therefore,
I will
this
listen to
advisor
everyone.
didn't have much
Shui
power in
Mingqing
Wangutong,
naturally did
but it
not
wasn't
have
small
any
either.
objections.
She was
So
probably
the group
the only one
immediately
among
followed
all
Yu
of
Qianzhou
Wan Blushing's
and
descendants
quickly
who
flew
could
towards
directly
the
meet
exit of
Wan
the divine
Blushing
ruin
at
realm.
any time.
Along the way,
anywhere.
They
No one
encountered
in the entire
several
Wan
waves of
Gutong
robberies.
dared to
When
not
some
give her
people
some
saw that the
face.
leader was Yu
This time,
Qianzhou,
she had
they
led a
immediately
group to
turned
participate
around
in the
and ran
realm of the
fright.
deity.
Although some people
gathering
had
on
heard
them.
of how terrifying
Because there were
Yu
many people at the
Qianzhou
gathering,
was,
they did
Wan
not know Yu
Blushing was
Qianzhou.
afraid that
However,
something might happen to
they
her.
knew of the
So he
mythical fire
brazenly
palace
mobilized
and the
the
spirit
three
cultivation
brothers
sect.
with the highest
When they saw the two
cultivations in the
sects,
outer sect
they
to protect
quickly
her.
retreated.
Ever since
because
Yu
they heard that the
Qianzhou
person who
bought
killed
100 sets
more
of
than a
Jade
dozen
archives
late-stage soul
and came
formation
out
experts
safely
was
from
with
the
these
realm
two
of the
sections.
deities.
He had
Thus,
attracted
the journey
Wan
was
Ling's
surprisingly
attention.
smooth.
Thus, after
she had
flying
sent
at high
people to
speed
secretly
for about an
monitor
entire
Yu
day,
Qianzhou.
they finally
However,
arrived at
other
the
than
exit
interacting
of the
with
divine
mythical
ruin
fire
realm.
palace,
In the
spirit
end, they
cultivation
encountered a
sect,
few sects that
and
had
four-link
teamed
chamber of
up
commerce.
to ambush.
Yu
at the exit.
Qianzhou did not
However,
make any
when they saw that
strange
it was the
movements.
mythical
Could
fire
it be that her
palace
suspicions
and
were
spirit
wrong?
cultivation
Wan
sect,
Ling
they
placed the
continued
Jade
to hide.
archives back
It was
on the
obvious
shelf
that they also
and
knew
turned to look
about
at
the
the three
destruction
new
of the
brothers,
heartless past
asking
disciples.
slowly.
The group
Don't
did
the
not
three
stop
elders feel
and
that this
quickly
Yu
entered the
Qianzhou
rotating
is
white
suspicious
light
in the cave.
This kid's
After
previous
passing
actions
through the
were
unknown
indeed a little
space where
suspicious,
streams of
but
light flew,
Mu Wan
a
paused,
huge suction force
then shook his head
pulled
with a
them
bitter
out of the
smile.
passage.
So what if he's
Outside the
suspicious?
ruins of God,
He has nothing
more
to
than
do with our
10,000
Wan
rich and
Gutong.
powerful
He
sects
really
that sent
isn't
people
worthy
to keep
of
an
Mrs.
eye on him.
attention. Although there were
An
people who were
entire
truly
Wan
concerned
Gutong,
about the
the
safety
three
of the
brothers would
disciples in
only
the
call
sect,
Wan Ling
most of
this.
them had the
That's not the way to
intention
put
of
it.
supervising them, afraid that the disciples in the sect would hide
Wan
some
Ling
treasures
shook her
after
head
they came
gently.
out. The soft
Secondly,
light
they were
emitted by the
afraid that some
fluorite
disciples
hanging
would
above
escape
her
and
reflected
advance
a
out of
hazy
fear of danger.
brilliance on her
If
plump
such a situation
forehead
really
and her
happened,
straight nose,
the rich and
which made her
powerful
beautiful
sects would
and
not be
generous
lenient
look even
toward such
more
disciples,
tempting to make men
because
want
under
to
the
kiss her.
watchful eyes of the
Wan
public,
Ling's gaze
they would
deepened
lose
as she
the
said,
face of the entire
if he'd spent
sect
more money on
and
other
would be
things,
ridiculed by the
I
world.
might not have cared.
The entrance
But
of
he
the
just had to buy
divine ruin
100
realm
sets of
suddenly
Jade archives
emitted
to
a
bring into the
white light.
realm of the deity.
Immediately,
This can't
someone
help
exclaimed,
but make others
someone is coming out early
suspicious of his actions.
He actually
Everyone
brought
was
so
in an
many sets
uproar
of
as
Jade
they all
archives
stared at the
into the
place.
realm of the
The
deity.
important figures
Miss,
of the
stop
various
thinking about
sects
it.
who were waiting in the
Mutong
shops
waved his hand and
immediately
said,
appeared in
if
a
Miss is
flash.
worried that he will do
Tens
something
of thousands
detrimental
of
to our
people
Wan
floated in the
Gutong,
air.
I will
All
find
of
a
them
suitable
staring at the
opportunity
exit
to kill him
nervously
with
and end
conflicted
all
emotions.
troubles once and for all.
Actually,
you don't have to worry
excluding
about
those small
anything
sects
anymore.
that came for money.
Wan Ling
For many of the
immediately
rich
rolled her
and
eyes
powerful
said,
sects,
what if he's just
although
a
they had
pawn?
been making money,
Mutong was
they
taken
did not
aback,
lack money.
then said,
the current
unwillingly,
gathering of the divine
then I will
ruin
capture
realm
him, had
and
actually
interrogate
become
him.
an occasion
I don't
for the
believe I
various
won't be able to
sects
find
to
out who the
secretly
mastermind
compete
is.
for face.
Old
They were
third,
all
don't
eager
talk
to see
nonsense.
others make a
Mu
fool
Wan
of
stopped
themselves.
him.
Of
Looked at
course,
Wan
if the
Ling
joke fell on
and
their
said
own
hesitantly,
people, then it would not
Miss,
be funny at all.
Are you suspecting that he has gained a lot in the realm of the deity?
Chapter
Wan Ling smiled and
827.
said,
It's
however,
still the great
not
elder
everyone
who
who came out
understands
early
me,
was a coward,
whether
who
it's
brought
him
shame
or the
to
person
the
behind
sect.
him. There are
If he
also
really has
people who
gained a
obtain
lot in
rare
the realm of the
treasures
deity
and came
I
out
can't
early
find
for
a
safety
reason
reasons
not to get
But
a
how could
share.
it be
What do you
so
guys think?
easy to obtain
The eyes of
rare
the three
treasures?
lit up.
Everyone
They
had
all
to wait
knew that
and
Wan
see
Ling
what
had
the
been
truth
strange since she was
was
young.
There were
If
some
an ordinary
things in the
person was
world
targeted
that
by
were
her,
coincidental.
she would probably eat them
Coincidences
up
were
until
rare,
not even their
but there
bones
were
were
always
left.
some.
The
The
three of
leader
them
of the
were
Heartless
already
Palace
bored,
was an
and
elder
it wasn't
of
the
the
first
palace
time they had
called
accompanied
Lu Tao.
Wan Ling to
Lu
do
Tao
something
happened
like
to
this.
receive a message
It
from
was
the
always
sect,
quite interesting.
asking him to
At this
contact
time,
the people of
there was a
Skyward
faint
Palace
commotion outside.
and Mythical
They
Fire
looked at each
Palace
other
to
and
refine
Wan
a
Ling
batch of
frowned
immortal
slightly
pills.
and
Looking at the
immortal
time,
artifacts.
the realm of
Thus,
the deity will
Lu Tao
close
sent
in
someone to
1 or 2
invite
days.
Skyward Palace's
It seems they
elder
should all come
Yufuzi
out, and Mythical
as her
Fire
voice
Palace's
fell
Bell,
elder
the
Hua
four of them
Lianxing, to
flashed
the
out of
heartless
the small
palace's
room
shop
at the same
to
time,
discuss this matter,
turning into streams
However,
of light.
Lu Tao
and
was used to
flying out
being
of the shop
arrogant
and
in the
dominating.
air above the
During the
entrance of the
discussion,
realm of the deity.
he kept using the
Tens
reputation
of
of
thousands
heartless
of people had
palace
gathered
as the number
pairs
one
of
sect
eyes
in the
filled with
celestial
anticipation
world to
stared at the
lower price.
white light.
This
in
was
the
not a
cave.
business discussion.
This meant that someone
It
had
was
already
clearly
entered the
bullying.
passage out
This
of the
made
realm of the
Yufuzi
deity.
and Hua
Lianxing,
Lianxing
very
very
angry,
who was strolling on the
However,
street.
the two
saw that there was a
sects were
show to
doing
watch.
business with the
He
people
immediately
of the world,
left
so
Du
they did not fall
Feng
out.
and Hui
They could
Yunmo,
not make
who
the
had yet to
decision,
react,
and they needed
and
to
took up a
ask for
good spot in the
instructions
air.
before giving a
By the
reply.
time Du Feng
Lu
and
Tao
Hua
was very
Yunmong reacted,
dissatisfied with
streams
this,
of light
and had
almost
already
with a
blocked
commanding
the front
tone.
row of seats
He told
that
the
were
two
allowed
to
stay in the
immediately
air
ask
above
for
the entrance
instructions.
of the realm.
One was the
of
number
deity.
one alchemy sect in the celestial world,
and the other
The
was
two
the
of them
number
did not
one
have the
blacksmith
qualifications
sect in
to
Celestial
fight
World with a group
no
of
matter
senior
how
for a
nice they
spot.
were,
So
they were not
they could only
afraid of him.
stand outside.
Just as they were
the human
about to
wall.
wave their
Yu
sleeves
Qianqiu
and leave,
smiled as he
they
stared
heard
at the
movement
entrance of the cave.
at the entrance.
He wanted to see
of the
how many
divine
people
ruin realm.
would be able to come
The three
back
of them
in
temporarily
one
put
piece
down
after
all the
such a
topics.
commotion.
And
After
flew
waiting
out
for a
together.
while,
They
he
saw
flew
that
to
the
the
white
sky
light
outside
in
the
the
divine
cave
ruin
was still
realm
swallowing.
and
He
silently
couldn't help
looked
but
down,
look to both
humped,
sides. Lu Tao
only
pinched
to
his
discover
beard
that Du
and
Feng
snorted.
and Hui
It's probably a
Yulong were
coward
not
who
by his
ran out
side.
early.
Especially the
Yafuzi
people
and
standing
Huo
on both
Lianqing
sides
looked
of
at each
him.
other.
They were
The
all
latter with a
coldly
hot-tempered
sizing
person.
him up, and he had nowhere to vent his anger. Now that it was not related to business, he could not help but respond in an unfriendly tone.
Chapter 836. Yu Qianqiu immediately realized that
if the
his
coward who
position
ran
was
out
not
early
suitable.
is a disciple,
So
of
he
your
stared
heartless
straight
palace,
at the
then
entrance
it's
of
a
the
bit
divine ruin
he,
realm in front of him.
Huo Lianqing, what do you
pretending
mean?
to be oblivious
Lu
to
Tao
the
looked
gazes
over
that were
coldly.
looking at him.
Huo Lianqing
However,
said indifferently,
after staring for
I
a
didn't
while,
mean anything.
he kept feeling the
I was
wind
just going
behind
along
his
with
neck
what you
and
first Elder
faintly
Lu
smelled
said.
the
Could it be
fragrance
that you
of a
can
woman's
speak?
body.
But I
Damn
can't.
it. What the
Lu
hell?
Tao squinted his
Qianqiu
eyes,
muttered in
and there
his
was
stomach.
killing intent
He held it in for a
hidden in his
while,
eyes.
but found that
He
the
said,
wind behind his
if
neck
the disciples
was
of the
still
passionless
blowing
palace
nonstop.
dare
That
to do
faint body
something
fragrance
that is cowardly
was familiar
and disgraceful,
Thinking about it,
I will kill
other than
them
Jiwu,
myself.
immortal monarch,
At this moment,
and Mu
a person
Tianjiao,
beside him
he did
came
not seem
over
to know
and
any
said,
other women in the
how can the
immortal world.
disciples of
Moreover,
Heartless Palace be
this body
afraid of
fragrance
death?
did not match the smell of these two women.
Even if they came out
After
early,
a while,
they came
the wind
out
behind
with
his
rare
neck
treasures.
continued to blow.
Hearing their
Yu Qianqiu
conversation,
finally could
Qi
not bear it
Fengsheng
anymore.
of Bada Chamber of
He
Commerce
suddenly turned
came over
around
eagerly.
and was stunned.
He seemed to want to
He
flatter
saw
Lu
Wan
Tao,
Ling covering her
but this
mouth
flattery
and
was
smiling.
really in the
Then
right
hooking her
place.
slender finger at
Lu
him
Tao
as a greeting.
slightly turned
That
back to
beautiful
look at him
and
with
capable
some
appearance
appreciation in his
revealed
eyes.
a bit
However,
of mischievousness.
as soon as he
Yu
finished
Qianqiu
speaking,
was stunned
he
for
saw
a while,
Master Yafu
then
suddenly
turned
turn
around
and
cupped his
stare at him.
hands. Master
Laughing,
Yafu said
he-
indifferently,
No wonder this body
Where did you come
fragrance
from?
felt familiar.
Is there a place for you
So
to
it's
speak
big
here?
sister Wan Ling's
Huo
body
Lianqing also
fragrance.
stared at him.
As
and
soon as
said
these words
coldly,
came out,
"Get lost."
the surrounding gazes
Fengsheng
immediately
shrunk his
turned towards
neck.
them.
And the
Everyone's
flattering
gazes
smile
were
on his
filled
face
with
turned
ambiguity
into
and
embarrassment.
strangeness.
He squeezed out a
Sweeping
smile
across the
and
man
nodded,
and woman,
then stepped back.
seemingly
He
trying to
originally
find some
came with
clues.
good intentions
Who was Wan Ling?
to flatter
Almost everyone
to get a
present knew who she
relationship with
was.
the number one.
She was the
sect
number
in
one
the
merchant
Celestial
house
world.
in the immortal
He really
world.
couldn't understand how he
Sectmaster
made
Wan
the other two
Bosheng's
sects
precious
dislike him
treasure
so
if
much
anyone
that
could
they
chase
didn't give
after
him
her,
any
then they
face
would
at
not
all.
have to
He didn't
worry
defend
about
them,
anything
right?
in the immortal
How would he know
world
the
for
story
rest of their
behind the
lives.
three sects?
Countless
Take
rich
care.
young masters
Lu
have
Tao
pursued
called
her,
out to him.
but it
He
seems
glanced at
that
Master
none of them
Yafu
had
and
succeeded.
Huo Lianqing.
Could it be
and
that she
sneered.
had an affair
You two
with
have
this
quite a
brat?
temper.
Are
Actually,
you throwing
they cannot
this
be
face
blamed.
at the
Yu
passionless
Qianqiu's words were
palace?
too ambiguous.
Then he looked back at Qi
saying that this
Fengsheng and
body
said,
fragrance was
"You
familiar.
stay by my side."
So was Big
I'll see
Sister
who dares
Wan
to kick
Ling's.
you out.
Anyone who
The
heard
people
it
nearby
would probably
could tell that the
misunderstand.
three
The
families
smile
were
on
at
Wan
odds
Ling's
with each
face
other.
froze,
and many people
after
looked
sensing
over.
everyone's
In all fairness,
ambiguous
the
gazes.
strength of the
Her
mythical
entire
fire
face
palace and the
instantly
skyward palace
flushed
was
red.
indeed
She
inferior
gritted her
to the
teeth and
Heartless
shouted,
Palace.
"Who is
Huo
your big
Lianqing
sister?
and Yafuzi
Who knows
would
you?
not go to the
Damn it.
extent of
Calling you
fighting
sister
with Lu
is
Tao
giving you
for a
face.
person
Who would have
they
thought
did
that
not
you're
even
already
know.
thousands
That would be
of years
too
old.
foolish.
Even if I add
However,
up my two lifetimes,
the two of them stared at
I'm
Qi
not more than
Fengsheng
100 years
with
old.
sharp eyes.
Yu Qianqiu
cursed
didn't know
inwardly.
whether to leave
He felt
or
wrong,
stay.
but he
He had
couldn't
a bitter
afford to
face
offend him
and was
now.
about to cry.
He squeezed out a
If he
smile
knew
and
that
said,
flattering would result
"How can I
in
not
this?
know him?
He wouldn't have
If I didn't
come
know you,
even if he
you
was
wouldn't
beaten
keep
to
blowing
death."
on the back of my
He
neck."
cupped his hands in
After
fear
he broke up
and
last
said,
time,
"Junior
gave
won't
me
disturb
this.
the three
Don't you
seniors
remember?"
anymore." As soon as
Before
he
he
finished
finished his
speaking,
words,
he took out
Lu
the
Tao made a
Qianziki
nasal
token
sound
in
and
order to
said,
save some
"Who
face
allowed
for
you to
himself.
leave?
Didn't you come here to talk about cooperation with
He
the
didn't want
Passionless
others to
Palace?
say,
Why
that
are
he was
you in
a
a hurry to
dignified
leave?
man who was trying
He
to
was
climb
clearly
up a high
competing with
branch.
Hua.
A big
Lianqing
man still wanted
and
to save
Master
some
Yafu.
face.
He wanted
He
to be
could be
suspected
suspected
of
of
anything,
but
but
he
he
couldn't
couldn't
be
be
suspected
suspected
of
of
living
living
off
off
a
a
woman.
palace.
While showing to
Qi
Wan
Fengsheng
Ling,
was stunned.
"I also wanted to
After
show
he
everyone everyone that we really
An
knew
ecstatic
each other.
expression appeared on his face.
It really is a
He
Zishuan
bowed
token
and stood behind
Not
Lu
bad.
Tao.
It
and
can't be
said,
faked.
Junior
There was
won't
an
go
uproar
anywhere.
in the surroundings.
I'll listen to Senior's
Everyone had
instructions.
reason to believe
He finally
that
figured
with
it
this
out.
kid,
As long as he
being
got
able to
close
enter
to the
Passionless
Divine
Palace
Realm,
and
he
became
would
their
most
partner
be
at the
whoever
soul
touched him would be the
formation
same.
as
How could a
touching
soul
the
formation
Passionless
stage
Palace.
itinerant
At that
cultivator
time,
hired by the
not
Four
many
Links
people
Chamber
would
of
dare to
Commerce
touch him.
have a
Lu Tao
Zishuan
nodded
token.
in relief.
This was
and
too
glanced at
strange.
Hua. The
Lianxing
only
and
reason
Master
was that it
Yafu
could
with
really
a
have been
mocking
given to
look.
him by Wan Ling. In the end,
The two
Wan
of them
Ling's
snorted
words
coldly
confirmed
and
everyone's
didn't say
guess.
anything. They just
Wan
cast
Ling's
a pitiful
pretty
look
face
at
turned
Qi
red,
Fengsheng,
and she
which
shouted
made
angrily.
Qi Fengsheng's heart
You don't know what's
tremble.
good for you.
However,
Give it back to
many
me.
people from
She
small
quickly made a
sects
move
cast
and
envious
snatched
looks
back the
at
Zishuan
Qi Fengsheng
token she had
at
given
this
him.
moment.
The entrance of the divine
series
ruin
of
realm
O's
immediately
sounded
from the
light,
surroundings,
and a series of
everyone
figures
seemed to
flashed
have
out.
understood.
It was
Wan Ling
Qianqiu
herself
and the
seemed to have
others.
reacted as
Under
well.
the berating
She
of
held
the golden
Zixuan
robe guard at the
tokens
entrance,
and froze
more than
in
70
place.
people
The
quickly
three
walked
Mu
out
brothers
to the
looked at
field
each other
under the
and
watchful
held back their
eyes of the
laughter.
crowd. This
The
girl
ushers
had
of the
always
mythical
been
fire
someone who
palace,
didn't suffer
the
losses,
spiritual cultivation
but this
sect.
time the
She had
Skyward
met her
Palace,
nemesis,
Mu Bing.
They were still
and
thinking
then
of taking
Tianlong
advantage
also
of this
quickly
kid,
rushed
but they
to
didn't
the
expect
field
to be beaten
and
up
asked
by
with
this
concern.
kid in a daze.
Why is there only
Now they had
one
suffered
person
a big
left from the
loss.
Skyward Palace?
Nemesis.
Could it be
The
that these
sounds of
few
astonishment
sects found
surroundings
rare
didn't
treasures
stop
and
They
returned
were all
together?
trying to figure out how Yu Qianqiu
Lu Tao
and Wan
immediately
Ling got
looked up to
together.
the sky
Wan
and
Ling
laughed heartily.
quickly sobered
Qi
up,
Fengsheng also
and her
laughed
complexion
softly
returned to
behind
normal
him.
in the
In the
blink of an eye.
pavilion at the top
She
of the mountain
inserted
above
the
the cave,
Zixuan
the
token
wind
into
was
the lapel
leisurely
of Yu Qianqiu's
in the
chest
field of vision was wide,
and said with a smile,
Wu Xiong,
"Put it
the
away.
commander of the
Don't mind
external
me.
affairs of the
I was
Immortal
just joking
Palace,
with you.
was
Why are
sitting
you
in the
still looking at
pavilion
me?
and
Don't
drinking.
tell me there's a
After
flower on
hearing
my
the
face."
arrogant laughter,
Yu
his
Qianqiu's
gaze
head
shot
was filled
over
with
like a sharp
thought.
knife.
He mumbled an
Immediately,
and
Lu
grabbed
Tao's
the
laughter
Zixuan
stopped abruptly,
token from the
and he
lapel of
quickly
his
shut up.
chest.
Wu
Then
Xiong
he
glanced
obediently
at the
turned
field
around.
at the foot of the
He
mountain.
muttered in his stomach,
After discovering
"A
that
woman's
it was
heart is
Tianjiao
truly
and the others,
unfathomable."
his gaze
Damn
paused
it.
for a moment.
You're making a fool
and then he
out of me
continued
in
to
front of
drink.
everyone.
Although
Although
Lu
Lu
Tao
Tao
did not
one
dare
day
to
I'll get
laugh
back this
loudly
face.
again.
He
He
could not
didn't
help
know
but
that
reveal
Wan
a
Ling
mocking
was staring at the
expression
back
as
of
he
his
stared
head
at Hua,
while gnashing her
lynching
teeth in
fuzzing.
hatred. The two
Although
of them
she had a
looked at each
faint
other
smile
and
and
rushed
rushed
into
into
on
the
her
field.
face.
Du
She was
Kairen,
secretly
the
biting
elder
her
of the
lips.
spiritual
The
cultivation
three Mu
sect,
brothers
also
who
could
knew
not
Wan
help but
Ling
flash
very
down.
well.
After the
Immediately
three of them
felt
came
a
down,
chill
Hu
run down their
Yunlong
spines.
and Du Feng
They
walked
cast
over
a pitying
together,
glance
bowed,
at
and greeted
Qianqiu.
Father.
Just think about
After
it.
Du
Today's events
Kairen
would
and
definitely
Hua Yinxing
spread
looked at each
quickly.
other.
They
Wan
glanced
Ling's
at the
many
people of the two
suitors would
sects
definitely come
and found
one
that there was
after
not
another.
a single
Based
person
on this
missing.
brat's
The
cultivation
two of them
base,
could not
which
hadn't
helped
even
but be
reached the
puzzled.
immortal realm.
Du
He
Kairen
would
raised his
definitely
hand
die
slightly,
a very,
and Hua Yinxing
very
nodded.
miserable
He
death.
asked
with a sullen face, Yunlong, what is the meaning of this? Even his
Why did you come out
dismembered
early?
body
Would
would
it be
be that you
enough
did
to
something
fill
that
the
is
gaps
greedy
between Wan
for
Ling's
life
suitors'
and
teeth?
disgraces the sect?
The white light at the
Looking at
entrance
the
of the
actions
cave
of the two,
suddenly rose
it seemed that the
sharply,
relationship
immediately
between the two
attracting
sects was
everyone's
not
attention
ordinary,
and
Du
attracting
Feng
everyone's
and
attention.
Hui Yunlong
A
looked
woman
at each
whose
other
face
and
was
smiled.
covered in blood,
Hui
and
Yunlong
her
replied,
clothes were so
"Father,
ragged that
you
half
misunderstood.
of her fair and tender
This trip
back
to the
was
divine
exposed,
ruin
staggered
realm
out.
was quite
under the
fruitful
command of the golden
because the
robe
situation
guard.
inside
She panicked
has changed
and ran
greatly.
all the way to
Sigh.
the empty
I can't
space
explain
below.
it clearly in a
Someone
moment or two.
immediately said,
I'll
in a
explain
low
it to you
voice,
later. It's a
In
female
short,
disciple
you just have to
from
wait
Rainbow
and
Cloud
watch the
Sect.
show.
Almost
Seeing
at the same
that the
time,
two of them could
several
still
women
smile,
in fluttering
the two
clouds,
fathers were already
clothes
relieved.
flashed in the
When they
air
heard that the
and
harvest
reached out
was
to
quite
support the
fruitful,
female
their
disciple
faces
who had
revealed
fled back
expressions
in
of
sorry
relief.
As soon as the female disciple
In
saw
fact,
her fellow
Du
sect
Feng
master,
and Hui Yunlong
she
were
immediately
cousins,
sat on the
and their
ground
mothers
and
were
wailed.
sisters.
They're all
The
dead.
reason why the
They're
two
all
of them
dead.
took the
Her
risk
cries
to
were
enter the
shrill
divine
and
ruin
sharp,
realm
was
making
discussed by
people
their
panic.
parents.
A
It was mainly
cold-faced
a
woman with a
fight
pair
for
of
a better
sword-like
opportunity
eyebrows frowned
for
and
their
shouted,
sons.
"What are you crying for?"
This was why the mythical
Shameful
fire
thing.
palace
Let's help her
and the
back
spiritual
first.
cultivation sect
Immediately,
teamed up.
someone
in the divine
summoned a
ruins
white
realm.
robe from the storage
However,
bracelet,
Du
and
Kairen
draped it
and
over the
Hua
crying
Yinxing were
woman.
still a
Two
little
people worked
confused.
together to help
They
her
looked at
back.
each other. The
Not
sword-like
knowing what was
eyebrows
going
woman
on.
had fair skin.
On the other side,
and her face was
Yufuzi
thin and a
as if it had
disciple
been
of the
cut by
Skyward
an
Palace
axe.
looked at
She was
Shui
serious in
Mingqing
speech
with
and
ashen
manner,
faces,
and her
causing
eyes were
Shui
like cold
Mingqing to be a
stars
little
as they
flustered.
swept across the
He
crowd.
did not know how to
Then
say the words
she
that were
flashed
about to come
back
out
to
of
her
his mouth.
original position in the
Yufuzi
air
asked the
and
disciple beside
continued
him,
to watch.
"What's his name?"
As if
The
nothing had
disciple
happened.
quickly bowed.
Not long
and
after,
replied, the entrance
"His
of the
name
divine
is
ruin
Shui
realm
Mingqing."
spat out
Shui
a
Mingqing?
burst of white light.
Yufuzi thought for
and
a
more
while
than a dozen
and
people
seemed to
flew
vaguely
out.
remember this
What was
name.
hard to believe
Then
was
he
that these
asked in a
people
deep
actually
voice,
fought their
Shui
way out,
Mingqing,
completely
let me ask you,
ignoring the
why
murderous
did you come out
gazes of the
alone?
immortal
Could it
palace
be that you were
guards,
afraid of death,
as if
their eyes
escaped
were
in
bloodshot.
advance.
It's Wang Gu
At the end of his
and the
sentence,
hidden dragon
his
manor's
expression
people.
was
Someone
already
exclaimed.
stern.
Wan
Everyone's
Ling
gazes
and the rest
were
were
also
so
shocked
shocked
that their
mouths
Lu
had
Tao,
hardly closed.
who was in the air,
Some of
was
these people
sneering.
were indeed
Yu Qianqiu
Wan
was
Gu Tong's
speechless
people.
when he saw
But how could they
Shui
be so
Mingqing's
crazy
terrified
as to
expression.
fight
He
in
sighed
the
in his
immortal
heart.
palaces
He was still
forbidden
lacking.
area.
He was
Wu
lacking
Xiong
experience.
stood on the mountain peak
Du
with his
Feng
hands
and
clasped
Hui
behind his
Yunlong
back,
exchanged
looking
glances
down
when they heard
indifferently.
this.
Those
They
who
hurriedly
don't
walked
leave the
over
realm
and
kill.
bowed.
His
to
deep
Yafuzzi
voice covered
together.
the entire
Du
square,
Feng was even more
reverberating
emotional, as he
in
said.
everyone's
Senior,
eardrums.
the feat of
He
your
didn't even give
esteemed
anyone a
Sect
chance to
brother
wake
Shui
up, and
Mingqing
brazenly
is enough
gave
to
the
make the
order to
Skyward
kill.
Palace
At
proud.
the entrance of the
How
cave,
can he be afraid of death?
more than a dozen
Hui
immortal
Yunlong
palace guards
also
attacked
nodded
in
and
unison.
said,
This
and more than
junior
a dozen
dares to say
beams
that
of
none
light
of the
shot
hundreds
out.
of thousands of disciples
More than a
from various
dozen
sects who
miserable
entered the
screams
divine ruins
abruptly
realm
stopped,
can compare,
and a
to
dozen
Brother
people
Shui
in the
Mingqing.
chaotic battle,
At least the two of
instantly
us,
exploded
into
into
chunks of
Du
flesh
Feng
and blood.
immediately said,
The only disciple
"Speaking
who
of which,
reacted
our
quickly
two
came to his
sects
senses
still have
in
to
time
thank Brother
and
Shui
quickly
Mingqing.
escaped the black
If not
line
for him,
drawn by the
I'm
immortal
afraid our
palace
two
guards
sects
not
would have
far
suffered
from the
heavy
cave
losses."
entrance.
Luckily,
Mu Qianjiao,
saving his life,
who was talking to Mu Bing, also walked over and bowed to Yafuzi.
The death of the person
Although our
behind him
four-linked chamber
scared
of
him
commerce
out of his
is a
wits,
small,
causing him to fly into the air like a
headless
headless fly.
We still have
coincidentally
or
not,
if not for the help
Yu
of your
Qianqiu, who was
esteemed
swaggering in
sex
the middle,
disciple,
was the
this
first
junior
to bear the
small
brunt of the
chamber of
attack.
commerce
Yu
would not have been
Qianqiu
able to
cursed
escape
inwardly.
safely.
In
Why
an
is this,
instant,
Daddy?
everyone's eyes
so
focused
unlucky?
on Shui Mingqing.
I visited the godly
Even Wu
ruin
Xiong's
realms
entrance
who was in the
twice,
pavilion
but
at the
3
top of the
times
mountain.
I've met with
Stopped
such
drinking
bad luck
and
that I
looked
can't
over.
escape from.
When Du
Heavens,
Kairin and
are you messing
Hua
with me?
Lianqing heard
This
that
daddy
a young
won't come here
disciple
anymore.
of the Skyward
So,
Palace had
F
done a
asterisk
great
king
favor for
unlucky.
their two sects.
He was about to
They
dodge
hurriedly
to the
walked
side
over
and watched the commotion behind him, but who knew that the person who rushed over would immediately turn
828.
pale with fright.
In just
when
a
he saw
short
him.
while,
The
Yu
commotion
Qianqiu,
had suddenly
like he had seen a
become
calamity,
huge.
he
Yafuzi
quickly
was stunned,
dodged,
a little
and he saw this
confused.
daddy inside.
The anger that had
Yu
just
Qianqiu
risen in
was
his heart
stunned
had
for
been
a moment.
replaced by
Then
confusion.
several
But he
figures
didn't know how
flashed
to
out,
ask.
joining hands
Shui
to
Mingqing
restrain that
stood there
disciple.
shyly.
Judging from
His
their
head
attire,
slightly drooping,
they were a little
Gutong's
afraid
people.
to raise it.
When that
He had
disciple
never
in ragged
endured
clothes
so
saw
much
that it was his
attention in his
fellow
life,
disciple,
and the
a look
pressure
of
was too
relief
great.
appeared on
His
his
palms and
bloodied
his
face
sleeves were
before his
already
eyes
sweating.
rolled back.
He was truly
and
the
he
center
fainted.
of attention.
He was quickly carried
Brother
away.
Won't there be any
An uproar broke
loopholes
out
if we
in the
do
air.
this?
No
asked
one
by a
knew
voice
what had happened
transmission.
inside to
Yu
force
Qianqiu
these
smiled
disciples
as he looked
to such a
around.
state.
This was
No matter
exactly
what,
the effect he
there was
wanted.
no need to make
He
a
immediately
move
transmitted
in the
his
immortal
voice
palace's
back,
forbidden area.
worrying about
Right?
anything.
This was too
is
inconceivable.
unnecessary.
What
Just
exactly
move
happened
forward
inside?
bravely
Du
towards your
Kairin,
goal.
when you
Lianqing,
truly become a
and Yafuzi
superior,
exchange a
you will
glance.
realize that as
They had
long
long
as you
since received the
succeed,
analysis
the
from
false
Du
will be
Feng,
true,
and
and
others won't even have the
Yafuzi.
right to question.
Previously, they still had
This is
some
the
doubts,
difference between
but now
ordinary people
they were
and
completely
superior
convinced.
people.
Their
Ordinary
hearts were
people are
filled with
always worried
gratification.
about being exposed.
Just this
when they
commotion
lie.
alone was
But
enough
superior
to
people
counter the
eat
mockery
lies like a
and
meal,
ridicule.
and through
they had
lying,
received, they
behind
trained their
their backs.
fiery eyes.
Everyone
and
suddenly
indestructible
thought
body.
of the one Gutong
If you're always
disciples
afraid of
shout
wolves in
of
front
Yu
and tigers
Qianqiu
behind,
before he fainted.
then there will never
Why
be
was
a
he
day
so
where you
afraid
can
of Yu
stand
Qianqiu?
out. Yu Qianqiu
brother
was just a
Yu is right.
rogue cultivator
Shui Mingqing
temporarily hired
smiled
by a
bitterly
small
and said,
four-links chamber.
"But I
of
won't hide it
commerce.
from brother Yu.
What was there to be
I am
afraid of?
really a little scared
Everyone's
right now."
gazes fell.
What do you mean a
on
little
Yu
scared?
Qianqiu's
You're
body.
obviously very
Right
scared.
now. Yu
It was no
Qianqiu
longer a
said
matter of whether
disdainfully,
they were looking at him.
"What are you
or
afid
not.
of?"
Let
The
me tell
layers
you,
of imposing
there are two
aura
kinds
were
of
like
people in this
raging
world.
waves. The more
Causing
scared they
Yu
are,
Qianqiu to
the
feel
braver they become.
as if he was walking
and the more
on
scared
thin
they
ice.
become.
He
The more
clenched his
timid they
teeth
become.
and endured it.
The former
He
become
could even
famous,
feel Wan
and the
Ling's
latter
piercing
live a
gaze
mediocre
behind
life.
him.
Dissecting
Think
him
about
like
it
a
yourself.
knife, which
As
kind
if
of
she wanted to
person do you
see
wanna be?
what secrets he
Perhaps
was
he
hiding.
found that his
Yu
tone was a
Qianqiu
little too
deeply
harsh,
felt that he
but
shouldn't
the other
have come
party
here
still
to
wanted
watch
to
the
retreat
commotion at the last
but he knew
moment.
that Wan Ling
How could this
wouldn't
be?
blame him.
However,
Thus, he started
Yu Qianqiu
cursing in his
still
heart
softened
again.
his tone
Bastard,
and said calmly,
if you fainted,
Think about
fainted.
it.
There
Why
are
are you
many
shouting
young
this
disciples
daddy's name?
like you,
This
in an
daddy
immortal
doesn't
world,
even know who you
but
are.
how
Did I
many of
offend
them
you?
have an opportunity like
Fortunately,
you? This
it's hard for
situation
them to
didn't
have an
last long.
opportunity
Otherwise,
to bear this
Yu
kind of pressure
Qianqiu
in
would
their
have run
lives.
away in fear.
This is a hurdle, a chance to hone you.
Straighten your chest. The divine
and face
ruin
it
realm
bravely.
continued
Once you
to
cross
spit
it,
out white
you will
light.
get a chance to
In
train,
groups of disciples
and
from
you will have a
various
capital
sects
to
who were either
succeed.
in rags,
After you experience
injured,
this,
badly
you'll find
mutilated,
that many
or
of
had
the
disheveled
things that
hair
seemed
escape
scary
one
before
after another
are actually
Each
nothing much.
and every one of
Other
them was
people's
frightened
vision,
like stray
mind,
dogs,
spirit,
or perhaps it would
courage
be
are
more
all trained
appropriate
like
to
this.
describe them as
What are you
beggars.
afraid of?
This unforgettable reprimand made Shui Mingqing suddenly feel enlightened. His eyes gradually became firm,
837,
and he replied
outside
in a
the
deep
ruins
voice,
of God.
"Brother,
It was a
Yu,
complete mess.
don't say any more.
The
I
crowd
understand."
watching from the sky
Yu Qianqiu was
immediately
gratified and
dashed
said,
down. It's
and
good
the
that you
originally
understand.
crowded area became sparse. These were the
If you
people
want to
who
retreat
could not
again,
help but
think about about how miserable you were when you were being chased by the
disciples
such a heartless palace in the ruins.
This was because such a
If you were to
strange
encounter
situation
such
had
a situation
never occurred
again,
in the previous
it would be
meetings of the
impossible
ruins
for
of
someone
God.
to save your life.
The disciples
all
who
the time.
entered this time
You would have to rely
seem
on
to have
yourself.
suffered a great
In life,
calamity.
you will either be on the
When a
chopping
crowd
block
looked carefully,
or fish
they
on the
realized
chopping
that
block.
each sect had
You should
sent 30
constantly
disciples
strive
in,
to improve
but
yourself.
none of the sects had more
What's a
than
mere
5
pressure
people
worth
out.
mentioning? The degree of misery
gradually
could be
raised
imagined.
his slightly
The most
lowered head.
uneasy people
His eyes
were the people
were
who were
clear and
still
firm,
floating in the air,
and his fists that were
each of them
tightly
stared at
clenched
the
in his
entrance of the
sleeves
ruins of God
slowly
with
loosened.
ashen faces.
After Yu
the white
Qianqiu
light had
noticed
already
this change,
calmed down.
the corners
and
of his
there was
mouth
only one
curled
day
up into a
left
smile,
before the ruins
and
of
he
God
didn't say
closed.
anything else.
They did not know
if
if
this still
anyone
couldn't
else
make
would
him
come
pull
out.
himself together.
Most of the people
Then he
floating
was
in
at
the
most
air
a
held
piece of
onto
trash
a glimmer
that
of
couldn't
hope.
be helped,
because only a
should
little
be
more than
silenced.
10,000
The people who had been
come
silently
out,
observing,
while hundreds of
Shui,
thousands of
Ming
disciples
Qing
from various
finally
sects
saw
had
his
entered.
appearance clearly.
No matter what,
He stood
had to
there
be at
calmly,
least tens of
facing the
thousands more.
elders of the sect,
But looking
with
at
a
the
calm
disciples
expression.
from various
His
sects
slightly
who had already
lowered
come out,
gaze
they were
expressed
all
his
half
respect
dead
for the elders
and
of
in
the
a sorry
sect.
state.
But it also
Each
revealed
and every
a
one of them was
strong
at a loss.
sense of self-confidence.
Every second of the remaining
It was rare
time
for a young
was
disciple
torture.
who had yet to
They were
ascend
all the
to the
leaders
immortal
of the
realm
various
to have
sections.
such determination.
If they were all
under
wiped
the
out,
attention,
how could they
of
go
so many
back and
people.
explain it to the
Many
sects?
people's eyes lit
Who
up
would
slightly.
dare to pat their
A trace
chests
of surprise
and
flashed
say that they did
through
not
Master
have any
Yufuzi's
enemies in the
eyes.
sect?
He realized that
guarantee
this
that the
young
enemy
disciple,
would not
whose
take
name he
this
couldn't even
opportunity to
remember,
attack,
was actually
seeing
a
the
hidden
miserable
sword.
scene below.
When he lowered his head,
Wu Xiong,
there was no
who was on the
difference
mountain
between
peak
him
frowned.
and many
He
ordinary
had
young
presided
disciples.
over the meetings of
so
the ruins
much
of God
so that
for
even
several
Master
times.
Yufuzi had
But he had
misjudged
never
him.
seen such
But when
heavy
he raised
losses
his
from
head
various
slightly,
sections.
that kind of
He
strong
turned his head
self-confidence
slightly
was
and said in a
definitely
low voice,
not something the
"You
other young
personally
disciples
bring
could
people in
compare
to
with
see what's
seeing
going
the
on?"
surprise
A
in the eyes of the
golden-robed
others.
man behind
Master
him
Yufuzi
immediately
looked
accepted
at
the
Shui
order
Mingqing again.
and landed at the
Although
entrance of the
Shui
ruins of
Mingqing
God.
was just standing
With a
there
wave of his
without saying
hand,
a word.
10 people
There was no
flashed
doubt
into
that
the
his spinning
confident
white light
silence
together
told
there were
everyone
endless questions
that he
coming
hadn't
from the
done
area
anything
below.
that would
The
bring
disciples
shame
of the
to
various
sect.
sects who were
There
lucky
was no
enough to
need for
return
him to
feebly
defend
recounted
himself.
what had happened.
That would be an
inside.
insult to him.
Just as Yu
There was no need to
Qianqiu had
explain
expected.
anymore.
The
Master
disciples of the
Yufuzi
various
firmly
sects,
believed that
for the
Shui
sake of
Mingqing
self-preservation
would not
or for the
lose
sake of
face
reporting
for
back to
Skyward
the
Palace.
sect, all
However,
began to join
he wanted to know
forces
what had
kill
happened in the
and
ruins
rob.
of the gods,
And the disciples
and
of
why
the
he had
weaker
come back
sects were
alone.
eliminated
Du
one by
Feng
one.
and Hui
If there was a
Yunlong
battle,
looked at each
there
other
would
with
naturally be
admiration in their
sacrifices.
eyes.
If
For
the two of them
example,
were faced with
if
such
two
a
sects
situation,
joined forces
they definitely
to
wouldn't
fight
be able
for
to
a
handle
treasure
it.
as
It was
easily
inevitable
as Shui
that one of them would
Mingqing
suffer a
did.
great
They would
loss.
definitely be
anxious to defend themselves. But look at him, that kind of bearing.
At the end of the battle,
this was the charm.
there was
of
a situation where the
no
rare
wonder he could
treasures
get 300
gradually
disciples
gathered
to help him
towards a
take
minority of
revenge
sections.
with just a call.
At this time,
among his peers,
everyone
in the
had
celestial
valuable
world,
rare
Shui
treasures in their
Mingqing
hands.
was the only
The human
one who
heart
could do
was
this.
unfathomable.
This friend was worth it, and not all of the sects who had preserved their strength.
Du Karen's
could
eyes
abide by the
flashed as he
agreement.
looked at Shui
Thus,
Mingqing
the situation of
and asked Du
attacking
Feng.
their allies.
Du Feng,
The
what did this
appearance
Skyward
of such a
Palace disciple do
situation
for us?
was the beginning
Tell
of a
us,
disaster
so we can
for the
thank him.
surviving disciples.
After Du
of the
Feng
various
bowed to
sections.
his father,
Since
he looked
everyone
at Shui
had precious
Mingqing
treasures
and
on,
sighed.
they were
Brother
already
Shui,
at odds with each other.
what a heroic
If one party
deed.
took the lead,
Because the
second
disciples
party
of the
would
Palace
follow.
of Heaven had
In the
picked
end,
a three
those who did not want to
elements
do
immortal
so were
fruit.
also
They
worried
attracted
that
the
their allies
covetous
would do the
eyes
same.
of the
In order
heartless
to
palace
prevent
disciples.
any accidents
After
from
a series of attacks,
and in order to protect
he was the
themselves,
only one
it
left
was
among
not
the disciples
uncommon
of the
for
Palace
them
of
to strike
Heaven
first.
that had entered the
The
divine
situation
ruin realm.
immediately spiraled out
Master
of control.
Yufuzi's expression
In the
changed.
end, the
He stared
surviving
at Shui
teams were basically the
Mingqing
best of
and
the
shouted,
best.
"In
The
the
others
immortal
are all
world."
dead.
Everyone
was in
that
an
the reason
uproar
why
as they
sects
looked
that
at
had
Elder
reached
Lu
this level
Tao
of
of
strength
Heartless
still
Palace
participated in the divine
Lu
ruin
Tao
realm gathering
slowly
was
crossed
not
his
only to
arms,
fight for
a hint
rare
of pride on
treasures,
his face,
but
as
also
he
for
sneered
faith.
without saying
They were
anything.
striving to
Shui
surpass their
Mingqing's
opponents.
expression was
The
solemn.
most important
as he
thing
cupped his
was the
hands
sect ranking
and said,
competition that
"Disciple is
happened
incompetent
once
and
every 100
failed to
years.
protect the
This
other
kind of
disciples.
major event that
Disciple
belonged
is
to each
willing to
sect
accept
happened
any punishment
not long
without complaint.
after the divine ruin
On the
realm
side,
gathering.
the
Divine
divine
Ruin
eyes
Realm
lit up as he
gathering
thought to
was
himself,
also one of the
"I didn't
benchmarks for the
misjudge
immortal
him."
palace's
Sure
ranking.
enough,
Of
this
course,
kid is worth
the
teaching.
increasing
It
number
seems like
of
this show
rare
can go
treasures of the
smoothly.
various sects
You,
was also
Master
one of the reasons
Yufuzi was
why everyone
furious.
was envious.
But he suppressed
in order
it
to
when he
gain a
looked
better
at
future.
Shui Mingqing.
Some people began
He looked up
to
at the sky
fight
with their
and
lives
shouted,
on the
line.
Lu Tao,
Those who did not want to
a
fight
disciple
had
of
to
your
fight
heartless
with their
palace
lives on the
dared
line
to kill a
protect
disciple
themselves.
of Skyward Palace.
Thus, the crazy
How are you
killing
gonna
began
explain
once
this?
again. What could they do
Tao
if they did
looked down
not
and
make a
sneered.
move the moment
Master
they met?
Yafuzi,
They could only
don't
act
tell me you
first,
don't know what's
and
going
by
on
the
in the
end,
ruins of the gods.
their eyes were already
Don't tell me that your
bloodshot.
disciples
Many
have
people
never
could
killed
not bear
disciples
such
of
torment
other sects
in
and
the
were
ruins
almost
of the
driven
gods.
crazy.
In the
However,
ruins of the gods,
no one dared to
the
quit early.
disciples of each
After all,
sect rely
not
on
every
their own
sect was as
abilities.
lucky as
Fighting
Dufeng
and killing are
and
common.
Huyunlong.
If the
The
sects
elder
don't let it
leading
go
the
after
team
that,
was their
he,
father.
they will
Kill.
be very lively.
Kill again.
I'm
Crazy
afraid
killing.
there will never
Either
be
you
a day
die
of peace
or I live.
in the celestial
Everyone
world.
fought crazily.
Dukhiren
with
grabbed
great
the
difficulty.
furious master
They endured
Yafuzi
until the
and
time
glanced
when the
at
divine
Lu Tao
ruin
in the
realm
sky.
was about to
Brother
close.
Yafuzi,
Everyone
don't be
prepare to
impatient.
leave
There
as
must be a
quickly
sequel
as
to this.
possible. Why don't you listen to it first?
There were several sects.
Then he turned to
Dufong
in ambush
and said,
at the exit.
"What happened
trying
next?"
to take advantage of them.
Dufong
As a
said
result,
in a deep voice,
a large number of people
Brother
blocked the
Shui
exit.
fought to the death.
In
With
addition,
only one
there were
person
people
left,
rushing over
and
one
finally
after
escaped
another.
from the encirclement
As a result,
of the disciples.
the situation of
Heartless
enemies meeting
As for what
each
happened
other
after he
constantly
escaped,
appeared.
we don't know either.
It was a disgusting
Later on,
cycle.
My
Thus,
spirit cultivation
the most tragic
sect,
situation
mythical fire
appeared at the
palace
exit of
and
the
the
Divine
four-links
Ruin
chamber
Realm.
of commerce.
It was
also
not an
met the
exaggeration to
disciples
say
of
that there were
Heartless
mountains of
Palace.
corpses.
They joined forces
and
with the
rivers
other
of blood.
6 sects, and nearly 200 people wantonly robbed and killed.
Every one
in
of
the
them
ruins
had
of the
become
gods.
murderous
When they saw our
demons.
3
Some of them had
sects,
already
they didn't
lost
put
their
us in
minds
eyes
from
from
the
killing. And
They
killed
actually
anyone they
surrounded
saw.
our 3
There were even
sects,
many cases
and
where
wanted
they
to destroy
mistakenly
our
killed
3
their
sects
own
with
sect
treasures.
members.
The disciples of the various sects
On the side,
chattered
Well,
endlessly.
Lianqing
Their
immediately
sorrowful
frowned
cries
and stared
and
at the
complaints
sky with
mixed
a
into
sneer.
a mess.
As expected,
A bloody
of a
and
disciple
incomparably
of Heartless
cruel
Palace.
scene of
They are
slaughter
really arrogant.
gradually appeared in
Tao,
front of everyone
who was in the
eyes.
sky.
Even the
Snorted
elders leading the
coldly,
various
as if he
sects,
didn't care at all,
who were experienced
Instead,
and
he was proud of
knowledgeable,
it. Sucked
Continue.
in a cold
Du
breath
Chiron
when they heard
frowned.
this.
Du
They felt
Feng
a
nodded
chill
and said,
run down their
at this
spines.
critical moment, no one would have
Brother
thought
Shui
that the Divine
suddenly
Ruin
appeared,
realm
gathering
However,
this time,
he
would
didn't
be
come
so
alone
cruel.
this time.
Instead,
Du Chiron,
he was filled with the
Lianqing
flames of
and
revenge
Yafuzi looked at each
and
other in
contacted
shock.
friends
They
from
could not
over
help but
300
rejoice that the
sections.
disciples
Over
of their
300
sects had
people
recognized the
rushed
situation
over
in time,
together,
so
and
they did not
surrounded the
end up
disciples
being
of Heartless
completely
Palace
annihilated.
and the other
This was
6
especially
sects
true
Hoi
for the
Yunlong,
first 2 relatives.
who was at the side.
Their hearts were
excitedly
thumping
chimed in with
nonstop,
his fists,
and they were
thus
already thanking
our
the
3
heavens in their
sects,
hearts.
along with the
If they had
300
not
people
withdrawn
that
in
Brother
time,
Shui brought,
it was
worked
unknown
together
whether their
and
sons would have
defeated
been
the
able to
7
return
sects
alive.
led by
The most
Heartless
precious
Palace.
thing was that these 2 families were the only sects
7
that had
sects
not
were
lost a
completely
single person,
annihilated,
and had
None of them were
completely
lucky
preserved
enough
their
to
strength.
escape.
Behind
was
the crowd
called
in the
killing
sky,
to my heart's
Du
content.
Feng, Hui Yunlong,
The air
Shui
and the ground
Mingqing,
instantly
Mu
boiled
Tianjiao.
up.
No
and the
one
others
thought
had
that
all
this
arrived.
group of young
When they saw the
disciples would
scene,
actually put on
they were all
such an
dumbfounded.
exciting show.
While
in
they
the
still
ruins
had
of the gods.
lingering fears,
They really couldn't
the
tell.
one they admired
The
the
sneer
most
on
was
Lu
Yu
Tao's
Qinshao's foresight.
face gradually
expected,
froze and
it was
darkened.
extremely
Everyone
tragic.
started whispering to each other.
No one
Sighed
would think
softly,
that Du
and her
Feng
eyes
and
dimmed
Hui
slightly.
Yunlong were lying.
On the other hand,
and it was
Yu
impossible for
Qinshao's
them
sighed
to
as
lie
he
in
stared
such
at the
a situation.
desolate scene below.
Everyone's eyes were
shook
fixed
his head.
on Shui
He
Mingqing,
rejoiced that he had
who was
escaped
standing
in time
silently
with the
without
lords
making
of the
a fuss.
various countries.
Everyone couldn't
Otherwise,
believe that
it would be
such a
strange
young
if they did
disciple who
not
hadn't
suffer
reached the
heavy
immortal
losses
stage had
in
actually
such a
made
chaotic
friends
battle.
with more than
He did not
300
realize
sections.
that such a
What kind of concept
huge
was
variable
this?
had appeared.
The
in
most
gathering
commendable
of the
thing
Divine Ruin
was that
realm
these
this time.
friends from more
And it was
than
more or less
300
directly
sects
related
could actually stand
It
up
would not
for
be
him
too
when
much
he
to
was in trouble.
say that he
Their
was the
friendship
main
was
culprit.
not shallow.
However,
He had friends
he was after
more
all
than
standing in a
300
corner
sects.
and looking
Right
at the
now,
overall situation.
He was only at the soul
He did not
formation
realize
stage.
that he was the
if he
one
waited
standing
until
on
his
the
cultivation
hillside
level
and
increased
inadvertently
in the
rolling
future,
a small snowball
in time,
down.
his
As
appeal
for the
would be
consequences
incredible.
of the snowball
Many
rolling
people
down
looked at
and
Masteria
how
with
big it
faint
rolled
envy
in
in
their
their
eyes. He had already
They didn't
left.
expect that there
Most
would
of
be
the people in the
such a
Divine
talent
Ruin
among
realm
the
were
rising
dead,
stars of Skyward
and no one
Palace.
could trace the
Who would dare to
countless
say
broken
that someone
clues
who
to
could
him.
make so many
This was the
friends
conclusion
had
of the
nothing
jinx,
to do with their
Wu
ability
Si-hai,
and luck.
that no matter
Shui
where he
Mingqing
went,
still
there would
stood
be
there
no
calmly,
peace.
as if
It would
all
be a
the
miracle
admiring
if
gazes
nothing
had
happened.
nothing to do with it.
For example,
in fact,
the Eastern
he was
Holy
excited
Land
that
that
he
had been
didn't dare
quiet
to show
for
it on
more
his
than
face.
100,000 years.
In his mind,
once
he
this
recalled
guy
the
went,
desolate and
everything
helpless
was
scene
scene in the valley, and his eyes became calmer and colder. The white light at the entrance of the Divine Ruin realm swallowed again.
Chapter 8,
and it immediately caused
the more he
the
acted
eyes
like
of the
this,
people waiting
the
in
more
the air
everyone
to emit
revealed
a
looks
light
of praise.
hope.
This
However,
kind of disciple
the
really
light of
made
hope
their
was
sect proud.
immediately extinguished.
Why didn't he come out?
The people
Well,
who
Lianqing
came
looked
out
up
were the
at
people
Lu
from the
Tao,
immortal palace
who had a dark
entered
expression
the
on his
Divine
face
Ruin realm
and couldn't help
The person
but
in the
laugh.
lead flashed
This
to
is
the peak of the
interesting,
mountain,
really
and with a
interesting.
solemn expression,
Sigh.
there
He
are
cupped
actually
his hands
people who like to
and
slap
reported to
their
Wu
own
Xiong,
faces, reporting
This
the great
is
commander.
the disaster
There are corpses
caused by
everywhere at the
arrogance.
exit. Piled
Everyone
up like
naturally knew who
we
he
have
was talking
circled
about.
around the small
They looked
area,
at Lu Tao,
and there are
who had
corpses
a dark
everywhere.
expression and
There's
looked like
not
he
a
wanted
single
to eat
living
someone.
person.
This was
I'm
indeed Jade that everyone who can come out didn't have the face to stay here. Should we disperse them? Moreover, Wu Xiong raised his hand slightly, entered the divine and his gaze swept across the area below. So there was no point for him to stay any longer. And he said, Lu Tao looked at the few sects. Let's wait a little longer. with resentment. Before the divine he wanted to say something closes, but he realized that what he could say was blocked by what he had said before. After that person if responded, he continued to be angry, he quietly retreated. He would only be humiliating himself. The disciples of the various sects who were battered turned into a beam of light in the field below flew and brought back one after Qi Fengsheng, the leading elders of the various sects, were still floating. He slowly hid in the crowd in the air, especially those who had not seen the disciples of their sect. The remaining heartless palace disciples waiting with didn't have the face to stay here anymore. However, they all final reality their shops silently. The divine ruin realm had been open for a month, make a deal, and the faint sound of thunder looked at Master Cave in the belly of the mountain. Brother Master, under the watchful disciple of your crowd, is spinning white light. A hint of pride flashed across then rapidly rotated and he stared at Shui, becoming smaller and smaller, and said, until it turned into a white dot and disappeared. Shui Mingqing silence reigned. The two after a long time, celestial some people breathed out a sigh of relief and offered them. And more people were dead set on leave. He said woodenly, everyone looked at each other. Disciple is useless. Even those brothers who came with disciples who were lucky enough to return and did not have the slightest trace of joy on their faces. I couldn't get enough benefit. Their expressions were more solemn, and only brought this back incident was three elements reflecting on. Looking at the final result, really doesn't have tens of thousands of sects and chambers of commerce, and I'm afraid almost half of the face of Skyward Palace. The 50 million divine grade spirit disciple will not have the could be said to be a loss of blood and is willing to accept. There is no need for the people from the immortal words of self-blame made everyone sigh, as everyone had already returned to be able to avenge his fellow disciples. Sighed and shook his head. And just as he was about to return, valuable, who would have thought that when he turned around, what else could they say about find Wan Ling looking at him? If the palace of heaven still blamed him, three elders behind her were also unreasonable. Such a disciple would only be meritorious. Wan Ling said with a smile, "Any mistake? I'm not your man, Master. Why do you care where I go?" He silently put away the 2-3 origin celestial politely squeezed out a smile. He stared at Shui Mingqing. I've been staying at the mythical fire palace's shops for a long time. Whether you're punished or not, back to the mythical someone from the sect will deal with it when we return. He even nodded to Du Feng and the rest, signaling them to Shui Mingqing respectfully replied. Wan Ling turned to look at disciples' aptitude, then approached Yu Qianqiu. And her face was almost touching Yu Qianqiu's ear as she whispered in a low voice, "I'm not qualified to enter any branch to cultivate. Disciple knows you." A hint of joy flashed on Master Yu's face. "Why don't you come to my shop and discuss in detail? Since that's the case, I don't know him at all. Are you willing to join my lineage and be my disciple?" But before he could finish his words, Shui Mingqing Wan Ling had already grabbed his wrist with an extremely excited expression, dragging him away. He nervously said, the three Mu brothers stared at each other with their mouths agape. This disciple bitter smile naturally appeared on their faces. It's just that this disciple's like the young miss really bore a grudge, and I'm guilty. I'm afraid. She probably wouldn't be satisfied until she played him to death. Yafuzi, the three Mu brothers, shook their heads and sped away. Damn it. He's already a senior disciple. And the rest looked at each other. So what's the point of being guilty? Realizing that this Yu Qianqiu looked at Shui Mingqing with a smile. Since when did he found that his efforts had not been in vain? Did they see wrongly? He had finally gotten Wan Ling actually held his hand. Anyone who knew a little about the palace in front of everyone, that disciples who joined the palace of heaven would gather together to cultivate. Only after their cultivation broke through to the immortal realm would they be picked by Wan Ling was dragging a man. It was very rare for someone to be forgotten about the two of them because of the incident in the Divine Ruins realm. Only those with exceptional aptitude when they witnessed the shock and nurtured by the various. It seemed like the two of them really had something going on. Most of the sects in the celestial realm bit her lips as she watched the two figures disappear in the direction of those who knew the situation knew. She couldn't help but like ask herself in her heart, already had a large background like Wan Gutong, would I be able to fight for it? And they had long since stopped accepting disciples. Gradually became now that he had accepted another disciple, as if she had made up her mind. Shui Mingqing's seniority. What the hell is old geezer one? Bo Sheng's granddaughter. Many celestial level masters murmured from the top of the palace would have to call him Marshal Uncle after pondering for a long time. This was really his hand at the people behind him. The people from the immortal palace immediately got busy such an excellent began to set up a formation to seal the mountain. Regardless not long of how after a misty white fog rose from the ground, he would be proud to say shrouding the entire stone mountain without a trace. If he didn't take this opportunity to return to their respective shops, he was afraid that once he returned to the disciples, he would definitely be snatched away by some heavy casualties. Brought back a lot of. This was called the pavilion. The dazzling array of rare, enjoys, precious, immortal herbs was enough to lift one's spirits just by looking at them. Felt like he was dreaming. He didn't know what to do for a long time. The disciple Master Yafu's took out expression gradually became ugly. He said that he would accept a strange fragrance filled the room, and auspicious lights, then he would lose a lot of face.
Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up and he couldn't help but take a few more glances. Anxiously urged. Standing opposite him was the also excitedly disciple who had luckily survived in the divine ruins realm. Greet master. After washing up, Shui Mingqing was pale, immediately reacted, and it was obvious that he had not fully recovered. Lifted the hem of his clothes, had been watching the changes solemnly in Yu Qianzhou's expression. She found that he seemed to be afraid of her just master. But now that he saw the rare and precious immortal herbs, Master Yafu was very happy, immediately lit but his face remained calm. She immediately felt a wave of contempt in her heart. He raised his hand and said, in her heart, "Get up." She gave Yu Qianzhou stood up. Vulgar evaluation. He could no longer hide. Tell me what exactly happened in his heart. How did you know? He really didn't expect Wan Ling that pointed at following Yu Qianzhou's instructions. Yu Qianzhou turned around so quickly. He had actually become the disciple of an elder, but I don't know him. Skyward Palace. After the disciple was this a dream? He immediately described the great feat. Yinqing looked at each other. And they cut their hands. Groups of 30 people. Congratulations to Brother Yafu for accepting an outstanding disciple. When the three Mu brothers this is really worthy of celebration. They looked at each other in dismay. Master Yafu smiled. Even Wan Ling was reevaluating. The two of you are too polite. They didn't expect whether he is an outstanding disciple instantly or not will depend on his future efforts. Heartless Palace's many people who were familiar, perhaps only an immortal expert, also congratulated him. Even Master ordinary immortal expert and cupped his hands in a reserved manner. Yu Qianzhou's eyes narrowed slightly. He should be happy for Shui Mingqing captured, but he couldn't bring himself to be happy. She took the opportunity. He thought about the disciples who discovered that he was in the honor and interest of their transformation final stage in the ruins of God. He was only at the deity transformation final stage. As for the dead, he was able to insta-kill a group of cultivators. But who would want to die? They had no choice. His even if they dragged not out an ignoble existence. I can't tell. Only death. You have such ability? Mu Tianjiao clicked her tongue silently as she placed her hands on her waist. She had experienced things in the lands that are abnormally plump, and with a woman's innate intuition. What's so strange about that feeling? I've roamed the immortal world for many years. Had now, I don't think I can find a match for what she had was also given to her stage. And those who know me call me the number one expert below. While everyone was enjoying the joy of success, roaming the immortal world silently for many years. Mu Tianjiao really wanted to walk through the stage and accompany. Wan Ling was startled. She wanted to accompany. She slowly turned her head to look at the lonely man who came from an unknown place. Doubtfully, however, did the immortal world live in this world without? Why have I never heard of it? Furthermore, after the three Mu brothers pondered for a moment, she could only they also shook their heads after exchanging greetings, indicating everyone was about to leave when Yu Qianzhou frowned. Yu Qianzhou didn't care if they had heard of it or not. He turned his situation where he didn't know why he was pulled here. Brother Yunlong. He let them slowly. Have you forgotten the promise the three sects made when we joined he knew in his heart that since so many people had come out of the waved her hands at the crowd, it was impossible to hide the fact that he had shown off his skills already taken advantage of you. We don't dare. He decided not to hide it. Yu Qianzhou was nothing to worry about anyway. How can this be called greedy? It wasn't that he wasn't worried. Didn't we do anything? The only thing he was worried about Chamber of Commerce was that the people of the Heartless Palace we still have to agree on what we have agreed upon. After all, we will do it or not. He didn't have any sect to say something. I'll pack up later. What's the meaning of leaving? You guys can leave without saying a word. Wan Ling waved at the disciples in the shop. Wan Ling and the disciples immediately obeyed ancient Chamber of Commerce. Yu Qianzhou looked around. Ever since Yu Qianzhou came out, however, they had been paying his gaze couldn't help seeing that Yu Qianzhou actually dared to show disrespect. This immortal execution grass was very valuable, and was they became more and more curious. The batch that Utopia got was missing this one. Wan Ling waved her hand and released a ray of light, setting up a soundproof barrier. She said with a smile, "You've already collected a lot of immortal grass in the divine ruin realm. Do you still care about this one? You can't say that." Ugh. Yu Qianzhou was halfway through his sentence when he turned around and said, "I'm just a helper hired by the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. The immortal grass that I collect has to be handed over. How can I not care about such a precious immortal grass?" He almost replied to her words. Fortunately, he realized that this woman was trying to get information out of him. In reality, he didn't know anything. However, he was puzzled. Why was this woman testing him like this? After thinking about it for a while, he came to a realization. The 100 sets of Jade archives that he had bought must have made her suspicious. However, how could the change in tone escape their notice? The three Mu brothers exchanged glances. Wan Ling sneered and said, "Do you think I'll believe you? I advise you to tell me honestly so that you won't suffer. You actually want to play hardball with me? Do you really think I'm scared?" Yu Qianzhou's expression turned cold. He said indifferently,
Why don't I understand what you mean by that? Mu Tong snickered and said, You still dare to be stubborn. Since you're already here, if you don't tell me the truth, don't even think of leaving this place alive. You've got guts. Are you threatening me? Yu Qianshou asked as he stared at him coldly. His calm demeanor made them secretly suspicious, even though they didn't show it on the surface. However, how could they be fooled with just a few words? Wan Ling smiled tenderly and said, If you think it's a threat, then so be it. However, this kind of threat is still better than us making a move on you. You better think it through. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Yu Qianshou turned to face the outside of the shop. He looked at the passers-by on the street and said indifferently, The relationship between me, the Spirit Cultivation Sect, and the mythical Fire Palace isn't ordinary. If you make a move on me in front of everyone, I'm afraid that those two families won't be so easy to deal with. Before he could finish speaking, he heard a pa sound. The gray curtain that was rolled up on the door fell down, completely isolating the situation inside from the outside. Wan Ling giggled and said, Do you think that if we make a move like this, who would be able to see? Yu Qianshou expressionlessly turned back to look at her and said indifferently, Everyone knows that I came to your Wan Gutong shop. Do you really think that those two families are fools? Wan Ling shook her head and laughed lightly. I don't care what your relationship with them is like. Even if I kill you, in a situation where no one sees it with their own eyes, those two families wouldn't dare to go against us Wan Gutong so openly. Mu Tong cooperated and shook his hands that were hidden in his wide sleeves. It was a naked threat. Kill me? Yu Qianshou sneered coldly. I'm afraid that even if I lend you 100 guts, you still wouldn't dare to make a move on me. Seeing that he was still bluffing at this point, but was still so calm that it was a little ridiculous, the eyes of the few of them flickered slightly. Wan Ling's smile didn't falter. I don't need 100 guts to kill you. If you don't confess now, I'll make you pay. Do you believe it or not? Yu Qianshou nodded lightly. I really want to see how you're going to make me pay. I really want to see if Wan Gutong still wants to live in the immortal world. As he spoke, he took out a golden robe from his storage pouch and slowly put it on in front of the four people. Piously, he put on the robe without a stitch on. The four people's mouths were agape in shock. Mu Tong's trembling hands froze. The confident smile on Wan Ling's face had long disappeared. She cried out involuntarily, Gold-threaded robe. With a quick sweep of their senses, they knew that it was the unique clothing of the immortal palace, the gold-threaded robe. The workmanship of this robe was unique, woven using the unique magic of the immortal palace. The entire robe was made from a single strand of specially made golden thread, without a second strand. The gold-threaded robe wouldn't get dirty, wouldn't get wet in water, and had some defensive properties. Currently, in the immortal world, other than the immortal palace, no one else could replicate it. With one look, they knew it was the real deal. The reason for their shock wasn't the unique workmanship of the robe, or the fact that it had some defensive properties. It was because every set of gold-threaded robe would never be worn by outsiders, because it was the symbol of the immortal palace. Every member of the immortal palace could only have one set. Moreover, they would cast a special immortal spell on the wearer. So if anything happened to the wearer, the immortal palace would know immediately. In the immortal world, if anyone dared to make a move on the members of the immortal palace, the immortal palace would deal with them without mercy. They would immediately send out a large number of people to investigate, and would not rest until the truth came to light. The dignity of the immortal palace could not be blasphemed, and if necessary, they would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go. In short, other than severely punishing the culprit, they also had to recover the gold-threaded robe. They wouldn't let it fall into the hands of outsiders, lest someone used it to disrupt the order of the immortal world. Some clues could be seen from how Wu Xiong, the commander of the immortal palace, dealt with the guard of the immortal palace and even stripped off his gold-threaded robe during the meeting in the Divine Ruin Realm. Unfortunately, Yu Qianshou happened to have a set of gold-threaded robe, and what was even more embarrassing was that no one from the immortal palace in the world he was in went to recover the gold-threaded robe, so it became his personal item. If it was in the past, Yu Qianqiu didn't know that this tattered robe had such a great value, and it was only after a period of understanding that he realized it was actually like this. He was still thinking about when he could make use of it, but he didn't expect the opportunity to come knocking on his door so soon. What Wanling didn't know was that the owner of the gold-threaded robe was long dead, and the one who wore it was someone else. Even if she killed Yu Qianqiu now, the people of the Immortal Palace wouldn't know. What Wanling didn't know was that if she didn't put down the curtain, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't dare to wear this set of clothes in public, because that would be asking for trouble. However, what Wanling shouldn't have done was to let down the curtains and create such an opportunity for Yu Qianqiu to show off. This guy was bold and evil. As long as there was a little chance, there was nothing he didn't dare to do. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.